A grand estate stands silent.
The squirrel holds its acorn.
Duchess Ella presents a squirrel in a cage to the black-haired boy Tezen, who finds the gift adorable.
Tezen peers into the cage, realizing the true nature of the small creature before him.
Duchess Ella confirms that the creature is a divine beast she retrieved from the temple. Tezen is amazed by the expensive gift, while Ella expresses her maternal pride and the squirrel remains silent.
The squirrel stares ahead skeptical. Tezen celebrates the best gift ever from his mother, Ella, the parent of a minor villain.
A grand birthday present appears. Shock strikes like sudden liking.
The squirrel laments its absurd reincarnation into such a strange and unexpected role. Fearful of a grim future, the squirrel panics at the thought of ending up in a prison cell. The Highland family crest represents a renowned lineage led by the generation's most powerful magicians.
Overwhelming magic causes immense suffering, making a divine beast the only being capable of calming such rampant energy. Duchess Ella rises, prepared to use the creature to bolster her family's reputation. Ella aims to prove that Tezen's magic is so vast it necessitates a divine beast's presence.
The squirrel remains unimpressed, noting that the boy's magic is actually quite weak.
Tezen is told to take the squirrel to his room, unaware a seal of ownership prevents any escape.
Ella encourages the squirrel to move as it scurries across a hand.
The squirrel decides to play along for now as Ella notes its apparent intelligence. Tezen ponders the creature while Ella asks if he finds something wrong with it. Tezen finds the creature's intelligence unsettling, prompting the squirrel to take offense at being called creepy.
Ella reminds her son that this is no ordinary animal but a rare divine beast.
Tezen continues to observe the squirrel while a vision of a girl flickers in the background.
Tezen worries that if the beast transforms into a human, it might lose its ability to understand him. A mischievous glint appears in Tezen's eyes as he considers the prospect of humanization.
Tezen delights at the idea of having another slave to command, horrifying the small creature.
The squirrel is outraged by Tezen's immediate leap to slavery and his ignorance of its magical limits. Tezen demands the squirrel recognize his status while the creature frustratedly wishes its short arms could reach him.
The prospect of seeing Tezen every day begins to drive the squirrel toward madness.
A glimpse through the window. High in the western tower, the family's most powerful magician and true villain remains hidden.
The squirrel realizes that the person in the tower might be the key to achieving human form.
A servant informs Ella that someone has arrived from the mysterious tower.
Ella inquires if anything has happened as the butler enters the room.
The squirrel listens as the butler reports that the young master in the tower has collapsed again.
Ella reacts with indifference to the news while the squirrel senses a significant opportunity.
Coldly, Ella asks if the boy has finally died, shocking the eavesdropping squirrel.
The butler clarifies the boy is only unconscious and Tezen dismisses the squirrel with tired arms.
The squirrel confirms its understanding and hops away as Tezen acknowledges the situation.
Ella prepares to depart while the squirrel watches her, reflecting on her cold nature.
The squirrel concludes that Ella is truly heartless for showing no concern for her adopted son.
Worry sets in as the squirrel considers that the hidden boy's condition may be dire.
A box holds various nuts.
Tezen calls for his new servant while the squirrel wishes the boy in the tower had a meal.
Tezen demands a performance, but the squirrel is fed up with being called a slave.
The squirrel ignores the request, leading Tezen to assume it doesn't understand everything he says. Tezen contemplates training the beast, sending a wave of terror through the squirrel.
The squirrel dreads the inevitable torment it will face based on Tezen's poor treatment of others.
Tezen continues to pester the squirrel, who decides the best course of action is to avoid him entirely. Tezen looks at the squirrel with visible boredom and assumes that it is just a simple animal that only cares about eating and sleeping. Curled up and ignoring the boy, the squirrel dismissively thinks that it was actually once a human.
Under the cover of night while Tezen sleeps, the squirrel packs a small bag and successfully navigates out of the room to begin its mission.
Scaling the stone exterior of the estate, the squirrel wonders if being a small creature is actually a stroke of luck for this task.
Reaching its destination, the squirrel stops on a stone ledge and confirms it has found the correct location.
Through the glass of a tower window, the squirrel observes a black-haired boy kneeling on a bed in clear physical distress. The boy in the tower clutches his chest in agony, unaware that he is being watched as a subtle noise draws his attention. Startled from his pain, the boy looks up with wide, vibrant blue eyes. A sudden, sharp thud sounds as the squirrel makes its presence known on the windowsill. From inside the dimly lit room, the boy peers toward the window with confusion. Approaching the glass, the boy wonders aloud why a squirrel would be appearing at his high tower window. A rhythmic thump-thump sounds as the boy watches the small creature through the pane, feeling a sense of bewilderment.
Noticing the squirrel's persistent movements, the boy asks if the creature wants him to open the window.
Telling the creature to wait a moment, the boy reaches for the latch as the squirrel shivers in the cold night air. The boy quickly reaches out and grabs the small creature, causing the squirrel to panic at the sudden contact.
Pulled inside with a quick motion, the squirrel is left wide-eyed and stunned by the boy's speed. Terrified by the proximity, the squirrel realizes it is far from being able to use magic or transform into a human form to defend itself. Holding the squirrel firmly, the boy leans over the ledge and looks down into the dark estate. The boy looks at the squirrel with deep concern and asks if the small animal is all right after being caught so suddenly.
Lying in the boy's hand, the squirrel feels a wave of relief at still being alive despite the intense encounter. As it rests in the boy's palm, the squirrel detects a strange rippling sensation and wonders if it is feeling Johan's magic.
The boy asks if the creature has any injuries, while the squirrel realizes it can feel a massive power from just a brief touch.
Looking up at the boy, the squirrel feels sympathy for the immense pain he must endure from such wild, uncontrollable magic.
The squirrel regains its footing on the boy's hand as the atmosphere between them begins to shift. A gentle, mystical glow begins to emanate from where the squirrel and the boy are touching. Watching the light with shock, the boy realizes that his turbulent magic is reacting to the creature's presence. A swirling aura of blue energy fills the room as the boy's rampant magic begins to stabilize. As the light fades and the pain recedes, the boy looks down at the squirrel with a newfound sense of clarity.
Studying the creature closely, the boy identifies it as a divine beast, and the squirrel confirms his guess with a quick nod.
The boy notes that the mark on the creature means it belongs to Tezin and asks why it traveled all the way to his tower.
Realizing the absurdity of expecting an answer, the boy becomes embarrassed and remembers that the creature cannot speak.
The squirrel watches the boy and thinks that despite his future as a villain, he currently seems clueless and even a bit cute.
Narration explains that Johann Harald is destined to be the novel's greatest villain, a path forged by the tragic death of his mother. After the Duke remarried Ella and brought Tezin into the family, he was sent to war, leaving his biological son vulnerable. Young Johann was left isolated and without affection during the most formative years of his childhood.
At age 10, Johann's magic awakened in a violent surge that caused him constant, unbearable agony.
Duchess Ella, determined to make her own son the heir, viewed Johann's condition as a convenient excuse to cast him aside.
She lied about Johann being ill and had him confined to the lonely tower to keep him out of the public eye. After years of isolation and pain, Johann was eventually used in Ella's schemes and sent to fight on the front lines of the war.
The story foretells that 5 years later, Johann will return as a triumphant war hero, having ended the long conflict.
This return marks the beginning of a great tragedy for the family and the empire.
Johann is promised the hand of the empire's most beautiful noblewoman, Lady Marielle, whom the squirrel recognizes as the story's heroine.
Though Johann falls deeply in love with Marielle, her heart belongs to the crown prince, sparking a jealousy that turns him into a monster.
Driven by unrequited love, Johann eventually becomes a villain who will stop at nothing to tear the lovers apart. Back in the present, the squirrel shivers at the thought of the kind boy before it becoming such a terrifying figure. The boy hesitates and speaks softly, still struggling to process the reality of a divine beast visiting him.
When the squirrel allows it, the boy is overjoyed and thanks the creature, making it contrast him with the much meaner Tezin.
The boy gently strokes the squirrel's head, sharing a moment of rare, peaceful connection.
As the moon shines over the tower, the boy confesses that he has been lonely for a long time and appreciates that someone stayed with him.
Johann lies on his bed, reflecting on how much he was hurting and feeling lonely just a short while ago. Staring into the distance, Johann contemplates if it would have been better if he were never born or simply ordinary. Looking at the small squirrel on the ledge, Johann offers a small smile and notes that everything changed when it showed up. As he reaches out, Johann explains that for the first time he feels neither pain nor loneliness thanks to the creature's presence.
Johann smiles warmly and expresses his deep gratitude to the small animal.
A sudden, sharp exclamation sounds as the squirrel reacts with shock to the boy's unexpected kindness.
Watching Johann's joyful expression, the squirrel finds its protective instincts stirred by his vulnerable face.
The squirrel reflects on its selfish plan to merely absorb magic and transform into a human as quickly as possible.
Looking hopeful, Johann hesitantly asks the squirrel if it would be able to visit him again the following night. He mentions that he doesn't even need the creature to calm his magic, as just its presence or a small gesture would be enough. The squirrel is moved to tears and nods its head vigorously, silently promising to return every single day.
Johann is delighted by the enthusiastic response, while the squirrel considers how much has changed in such a short amount of time.
Looking at the boy, the squirrel reflects on the profound gentleness and compassion it can sense from him. A vision of a falling figure appears as the squirrel wonders if Johann became heartless only because of his prolonged suffering.
The squirrel ponders whether the presence of even one person showing him love and care might have altered his dark path. It questions if there could be a different future for him, one where he is not destined to become a villain. Resolving to help, the squirrel thinks that it will do its absolute best for him for as long as it remains in this form.
The squirrel holds up a large, shiny acorn as a gift for the lonely boy.
Noticing the gesture, Johann asks if the nut is meant for him while the squirrel gives a firm nod of confirmation.
The squirrel scurries forward and presents the acorn to Johann. Bringing the creature and the nut close to his face, Johann thanks the squirrel and promises to cherish the special gift. Standing by the open window, Johann tells the squirrel he will leave it open starting tomorrow night to welcome its return.
Johann offers a gentle look and encourages the creature to visit whenever it wants.
As it prepares to leave, the squirrel thinks affectionately about what an adorable thing the boy is and bids him goodnight.
The squirrel departs into the night while Johann watches for a moment before pensively tapping his fingers on the windowsill.
Alone in the dark room, Johann reflects on the intense physical agony he was enduring just a short time ago.
Looking at the spot where the creature was, Johann wonders if he has just experienced the legendary calming power of a divine beast. Resting his chin on his hand, Johann realizes the beast belongs to Tezin and decides that he will take it for himself. Morning light illuminates the grand and sprawling estate grounds. Narration explains that divine beasts are often referred to with human-related titles because of their potential to take on human forms.
Tezin reads aloud about animal gender terminology while the squirrel sleeps soundly on a plush red cushion.
Focused on his book, Tezin notes that a divine beast's gender can be identified by the specific shape of its tail.
Tezin suddenly reaches out and grabs the squirrel by its tail, announcing his intent to check its gender. Startled from its sleep by the rough contact, the squirrel panics and wonders why this is happening so abruptly. Tezin determines the creature is female while the squirrel screams in pain and demands to be released immediately.
Tezin asks about the squirrel's age and eventual human appearance, which the creature responds to with indignant frustration.
Letting go, Tezin remarks that having the beast in human form will make it much easier to force it to do his bidding.
Tezin finds the creature's lack of understanding frustrating, while the squirrel vows to end their connection once it transforms. The squirrel plans to ask Johann to remove the ownership mark so it can leave the estate immediately.
Remembering Johann's kind nature, the squirrel believes the boy will be much more reasonable than the cruel Tezin.
The squirrel concludes that since it is helping Johann, the boy will surely grant its request to be free.
Confidently eating its acorn, the squirrel believes everything will fall into place once it finally becomes human.
A moment of sudden realization hits as the squirrel realizes it has no idea how to actually achieve a human transformation. Tears stream down its face as the squirrel laments its monotonous diet of nuts and wonders how much longer it can survive.
The squirrel considers that continuing to absorb Johann's magic might eventually provide a clue on how to transform.
Curled up and looking somber, the squirrel remains silent as it processes its difficult situation.
The squirrel's desire to become human intensifies as it expresses a desperate need to get away from the mean Tezin.
A hand holds the gifted acorn up against the starry night sky. Johann leans against the window frame, staring quietly at the small nut he received from his visitor.
Looking at the acorn, Johann reflects on the mysterious squirrel that visited him.
Staring out with expectant eyes, Johann wonders if his small visitor will return today.
A quick tapping sound draws Johann's attention as he reflects on his past behavior. Turning toward the window, the boy hears a soft landing on the ledge.
The orange squirrel pops up over the edge with an energetic burst.
Landing with a soft cue, the creature settles onto the window frame before the boy.
A bright, warm smile spreads across Johann's face.
Johann offers a gentle greeting to the divine beast.
Complimenting the creature's appearance, the boy welcomes it back for another visit.
The squirrel watches with wide eyes as Johann reaches out his hand.
Johann lifts the creature into his palm. Looking down fondly, Johann acknowledges how difficult the climb must have been.
The boy encourages the creature to relax and find comfort in his realm.
Johann offers his own bed as a resting place, leaving the creature deeply moved by his kindness.
Jumping onto the pillow, the squirrel enthusiastically promises to provide excellent service in return.
The squirrel insists that Johann lie down first, asserting that the patient's well-being is the top priority. Overwhelmed by the creature's sweetness, the boy agrees to rest.
As they lie together on the bed, a soft humming of magic begins to fill the air.
Looking at his small companion, Johann asks if it would like to hear something.
The squirrel is struck by the sudden realization that it doesn't possess a name. Contrasting the boy's kindness with previous mistreatment, the creature grants Johann permission to speak.
Johann prepares to offer a suggestion.
The squirrel is absolutely horrified when the boy suggests the name Paul. Johann is visibly distressed by the creature's clear rejection of his choice. Looking dejected, the boy admits that he has exhausted all of his name ideas. The creature reacts with stunned disbelief at the boy's terrible naming sense.
Deciding to be patient because of his cuteness, the squirrel demands better options next time as Johann promises to try.
The squirrel notes that despite the stabilization, the boy's magic continues to flow without end. Resting beside the sleeping boy, the creature realizes it is absorbing much more power than before.
Concerned about overdoing it, the squirrel decides to stop the absorption process for the night.
Johann sleeps soundly and peacefully with the small creature tucked against him.
Patting its head, the squirrel celebrates a successful night of managing the boy's magic. A sudden, strange sensation causes the squirrel to pause in confusion.
As a bright light surges, the creature panics over the unexpected reaction.
Long brown hair and a human hand appear as a transformation begins.
The scene is overwhelmed by a shocking realization.
Johann stares with heavy, half-closed eyes.
Startled awake, the boy sits up with an expression of pure shock. A young girl with long brown hair and pink eyes stares back with wide, surprised eyes.
Clutching a white sheet to her chest, the girl reveals a rose-shaped mark on her shoulder.
Looking at the unexpected visitor, Johann asks for her identity. The girl remains speechless and flustered by the sudden change.
Touching her own face, the girl is stunned to realize that she can finally speak.
A sharp gasp escapes as she hears the sound of her own voice. The girl expresses amazement at her youthful voice and her small, delicate hands.
She pulls the covers closer, realizing the awkwardness of the situation.
Turning bright red, Johan urgently tells her to cover herself properly.
The girl shyly offers her thanks to the blushing boy.
Still hiding his face, Johan asks for an explanation regarding the strange turn of events.
The girl explains that divine beasts possess the ability to take on human forms.
With a soft cue, the girl shifts back into her small squirrel form amidst a swirl of magic.
The squirrel tilts its head in confusion.
Narration explains that divine beasts can transform into humans temporarily after absorbing significant mana.
A text explains that a permanent transformation requires 50 days of steady mana absorption.
Tezen warns that transforming into a human prematurely carries specific consequences.
Tezen reads that any accumulated mana is lost if a premature transformation occurs.
The squirrel screams at Tezen for failing to provide this critical information earlier.
Frustrated, Tezen complains about the long duration required for a complete transformation.
Tezen orders the creature to track the dates carefully for the next 50 days.
Tezen advises the squirrel to keep absorbing mana even when feeling full to preserve it.
The squirrel realizes it should have continued absorbing Johan's power the previous night.
The squirrel feels confident about the process while Tezen remarks on how lucky it is.
Boasting, Tezen claims the creature is fortunate to have a master capable of such magic. Gazing at its snacks, the squirrel resolves to absorb Johan's mana daily to become human.
The squirrel decides to share this information with Johan to ensure his cooperation. Johan stares in silent surprise as the squirrel approaches him with a message.
Holding the squirrel, Johan asks about the object it is carrying. Johan realizes the small creature has brought him a letter. Opening the folded paper, Johan recognizes it as a page torn from a book.
Johan questions why the creature is giving him a page about divine beasts.
The squirrel prepares to use body language to communicate its important message. Johan remains confused and asks if the creature is trying to tell him something. Johan asks for confirmation about its identity as a divine beast while it taps the desk.
Johan is amazed to discover that the squirrel is capable of reading.
The squirrel points toward a specific reference regarding the Hillard family.
The squirrel strikes a fierce pose to emphasize its point. Johan understands he must study divine beasts using the stolen pages from Tezen's books.
Johan praises the squirrel's intelligence as it happily leaps onto his shoulder.
The squirrel pats the boy's cheek to show its approval and praise.
Johan laughs, admitting that the creature's affectionate gestures are quite ticklish.
Johan focuses on the text to learn more about divine beast transformations.
Johan confirms that 50 days of mana absorption will grant the creature a human form.
Johan wonders what will happen once the 50 days have passed. A vision of a young girl with long brown hair appears in Johan's mind. Lost in thought, Johan reflects on how cute the creature's human form was.
The squirrel chirps in confusion while Johan flusteredly denies having any strange thoughts.
A gentle blush colors Johan's face as he looks away from his companion.
The boy sits at his desk while the squirrel rests quietly on his shoulder.
Tezen screams in rage upon discovering that his precious books are being sabotaged.
Looking at the mangled pages, Tezen demands to know what happened to his research. Tezen questions the sleeping squirrel about the missing pages while the creature ignores him.
Johan wakes up exhausted, lamenting how his volatile magic prevents him from getting a peaceful night's rest. Tezen searches for the lost book page while the squirrel watches him with amusement.
Curled up comfortably, the squirrel treats Tezen's constant complaining like relaxing background noise.
Soft raindrops begin to tap rhythmically against the window pane.
Johan notices the rain and wakes the sleeping squirrel to show it something.
Johan promises to show the creature something fun while it questions his excitement.
The squirrel assumes Johan's idea of fun won't be pleasant, but is soon surprised.
Johan directs the squirrel's attention toward the estate garden during the downpour.
A lone figure walks through the rain-soaked gardens as Johan explains the sight.
Johan watches the rainy scene below while holding his small companion close.
Rain lashes down on Johan as his forced treatment begins.
Tezen laughs mockingly as a loud whoosh fills the air, asking the squirrel if the scene is entertaining. Smiling broadly, Tezen notes that the head doctor specifically recommended letting the sickly boy get soaked. In a mocking tone, Tezen claims the freezing rain is the perfect treatment for someone suffering from a fever.
The squirrel is outraged, viewing the forced walk as an insane treatment for a child already in pain.
Johan looks utterly miserable and pale as the heavy downpour drenching his clothes.
Worried that Johan's condition will only worsen, the creature watches as Tezen gleefully offers to help.
The squirrel realizes Tezen has no intention of helping and only wants to torment his brother.
Fearful of the growing danger, the creature notes that Tezen's presence will only make the situation worse.
With a sudden swift flick, the squirrel decides it must act immediately to intervene.
The small creature frantically stuffs its mouth with seeds and nuts to prepare for its plan. Determined to succeed, the squirrel urges Johan to wait just a moment longer. Leaping through the air, the creature vowing to save its friend from the cruel treatment.
A woman in a dark green dress walks past grand windows as the rain continues.
Johan's mother observes his slight recovery and questions the doctor if the current methods are actually working.
The doctor apologizes while explaining that hypothermia serves as a unique remedy specifically intended for young wizards.
He assures her that extending the treatment in the rain will eventually force Johan back into a weakened state.
Satisfied with the cruelty, the madam praises the doctor's excellence before dismissing him from the room.
Alone, the woman reflects on how much she views Johan as a constant annoyance in her life.
She recalls the cold dread she felt upon learning of his magic and her initial desire to eliminate him. Her hands tighten on the ledge as she laments how a specific oath prevents her from finishing him off.
A historical scroll details the war oath, an imperial decree designed to limit the power of the nobility.
The decree mandates that the primary heir of every noble house must personally serve on the front lines. Unwilling to risk her favored son Tezin, she keeps Johan alive only to serve as a sacrificial substitute.
Looking out at the gardens, she mockingly thanks Johan for clinging to his insignificant life for her sake.
The maids continue to guide the shivering Johan through the rain-soaked paths of the estate.
One of the maids points toward a nearby area as they continue to fall.
Coldly, the maid tells the boy to slow down, warning that any delay will be seen as troublesome.
She demands that the young master show more cooperation with the doctor's harsh prescriptions.
From high above in the trees, the squirrel watches the group with a keen and worried gaze. Seeing Johan's suffering up close, the squirrel is heartbroken by the total lack of sympathy from the staff.
A cluster of nuts falls through the air with a sudden clattering sound.
The squirrel drops an acorn and tells Johan that everything will be all right. With a swift, sharp motion, the creature hurls the snacks directly at the unsuspecting maids.
The squirrel dives downward, fully committed to its distracting and defensive maneuvers.
The maids scream in shock and pain as the hard nuts strike them with precision. Both women clutch their faces in agony, blinded by the unexpected barrage while Johan watches in surprise.
A single acorn rolls slowly across the wet stone tiles toward the stunned boy.
Johan stares down at the small nut, his eyes wide as he realizes what has happened.
Looking up at the trees, the boy wonders if his mysterious visitor is responsible for the rescue.
The squirrel urges him to stop staring and flee while the two maids are still distracted.
Johan realizes that the chaos has provided him with the perfect opportunity to escape his tormentors.
He sprints away into the rain as the maids panic and beg for him to return.
A loud, resonant boom echoes through the garden as Johan slams into the safety of the tower doors. The squirrel celebrates its perfect hit, wondering if it has a hidden talent for combat. Watching Johan enter the building, the squirrel breathes a sigh of relief before wondering where Tezin went. Tezin returns with a heavy bucket of water, furious at the maids for losing track of the boy. The trembling maids explain that Johan fled back to the tower during a moment of confusion.
Enraged, Tezin splashes the maids with a loud splash as he screams at them for their failure.
Tezin's face twists in rage as an authoritative voice commands him to stop his outburst immediately. In the pouring rain, Tezin shouts for his mother as she holds a dark umbrella.
Tezin complains about a ruined opportunity while the Duchess places a hand on his shoulder.
The Duchess gently reminds the boy of his original desire to help his brother's treatment.
After the boy agrees, the Duchess promises to summon Johan when their guest arrives tomorrow.
The Duchess suggests a joint welcome, leaving the black-haired boy feeling excited about the meeting. Listening from the trees, the squirrel is stunned to hear that the heroine is visiting. The small creature panics upon realizing that the young lady mentioned is the story's main heroine. It fears the timeline has shifted because Johan is meeting the heroine much earlier than expected. The squirrel realizes the family intends to publicly humiliate Johan by comparing him to his brother. When the Duchess tells Tezin to bring his beast tomorrow, the squirrel reacts with absolute horror. Panic sets in as the squirrel realizes it is being forced into the upcoming confrontation. The Grand Tower stands tall against the night. Inside his room, a weary Johan leans against the window frame, breathing with visible difficulty.
He blames the rain for his poor health and hopes the squirrel will return to comfort him.
Holding a small acorn, Johan reflects on his initial plans to manipulate the divine creature's power.
He envisions using the beast's magical stabilization to eventually seize control of the entire dukedom.
In a flashback, he recalls feeling relieved that the squirrel needed his magic to become human.
He remembers standing in the rain, convincing himself their relationship was purely one of mutual exploitation.
A close-up reveals his wide purple eyes reflecting the cold rain of his past memories.
His focus shifts as a small tap sounds against the wood, signaling a welcome visitor. Johan watches with a soft smile as the orange squirrel hops onto the windowsill to join him. He expresses his sincere gratitude to the small creature for its help during the earlier events. While Johan notes he stayed drier thanks to the beast, he is interrupted by a heavy cough. Despite his obvious illness, he offers a gentle smile and reassures the worried squirrel he is fine. The orange squirrel nuzzles affectionately against his cheek, offering him much-needed comfort and warmth. The two share a quiet moment of companionship as the scene focuses on their growing bond. The creature's small paws rest on the back. As Johan sleeps, the squirrel notes his magic has stabilized even though his fever remains high. It worries about the humiliation Johan will face tomorrow when he is paraded before the guests.
The creature realizes Ella is using Johan's poor condition to secure his brother's inheritance and status.
Overwhelmed by the situation, the squirrel covers its face in frustration at the impending disaster.
It recalls Tezen arrogantly wearing a face pack in preparation for the beautiful heroine's arrival.
A mischievous idea forms as the squirrel considers leaving dirty footprints on the sleeping boy's face.
It imagines the footprints standing out perfectly on his skin, causing a scene of hilarious chaos.
As the squirrel prepares to sneak out, Johan wakefully asks if it is already leaving him.
Johan looks visibly hurt by its departure while the squirrel silently vows to protect him.
A heavy silence fills the room as they look at each other with lingering sadness.
Realizing his loneliness, the squirrel turns back and hops toward the young master's waiting hands.
A soft tap sounds as the squirrel asks Johan to open his palms for a surprise.
The small creature rolls onto its back in his hands, presenting its belly for a rub.
Johan stares down at the orange beast, momentarily confused by its sudden, vulnerable display of affection.
The squirrel enthusiastically offers its stomach, and Johan realizes it wants a playful belly rub.
He gently pokes the creature's soft fur, his expression softening as they share a lighthearted moment.
The squirrel revels in the attention, finding the interaction just as refreshing and pleasant as Johan does.
Looking at the beast, Johan admits a deep, secret wish to stay together with it forever. As a paper flutters away, a warning states that magicians become intensely possessive of their divine beasts.
The narration explains that this obsession can grow until they cannot stand to see others nearby.
The final warning notes that such magicians eventually become completely consumed by overwhelming jealousy.
The grand estate stands under the morning sun.
The squirrel looks exceptionally fluffy after being thoroughly scrubbed by the mansion servants this morning.
The squirrel narrows its eyes suspiciously. Tezen, dressed in a formal gray suit, asks his companion if they are ready to enter.
Stepping into the grand room, Tezen offers a polite apology for his tardiness.
Seated at the dining table, Tezen lies to the guests, claiming the divine beast was performing a soothing ritual for his headache.
Disgusted by the blatant lie, the squirrel suddenly notices a strange bright light nearby.
A blinding pink flash overwhelms the squirrel.
The creature is instantly struck by how stunning Mary appears.
Looking at the blonde girl in her pink dress, the squirrel considers her the world's most beautiful woman.
Heart pounding, the creature wonders how Johan will react to such beauty.
The squirrel expects Johan to fall in love with her at first sight.
A moment of deep confusion follows. Johan gazes silently, wondering why Tezen is staring at him with such an intense look.
The blue-haired boy remains puzzled as to why the girl is staring at him.
Watching Tezen hold the squirrel, Mary exclaims in delight at seeing a divine beast.
Clasping her hands in wonder, Mary notes how rare and difficult it is to find such creatures.
The blonde woman remarks that possessing enough magical power to attract a divine beast is quite impressive.
The woman in blue comments on Tezen's resemblance to Duke Highland, though Tezen modestly claims he still has much to learn.
While the squirrel thinks Tezen would be a perfect con artist, Marie mentions how difficult life is without a beast's aid.
Mary leans forward, asking for more information on how one actually calms a divine beast.
Johan looks away, mentioning that he heard the process involves direct physical contact.
Tezen demonstrates by potting the squirrel, causing it to grunt as Johan watches with wide eyes.
Tezen explains that his beast specifically places its hand on his forehead, which infuriates the squirrel.
As Tezen describes the relief of the pain fading, the squirrel notices the wine glass on the table beginning to vibrate.
Johan's expression darkens just before the glass shatters into pieces on the floor. The dining room falls into silence. The mother in blue notes that Johan has seemed to be in significant pain for some time. She orders him to compose himself while the squirrel wonders why Johan's magic is rampaging despite yesterday's calming ritual. Sensing Johan's distress, the squirrel attempts to jump toward him but accidentally slips.
Falling through the air, the creature feels a wave of intense shame.
The squirrel lands softly in Johan's waiting hand.
Johan quietly warns the creature to be more careful to avoid another fall.
He mutters under his breath that if it isn't careful, he won't be able to protect it.
The squirrel is startled by his unexpectedly dark and decadent tone. Despite the intensity, the creature feels a sense of gratitude toward Johan. Tezen reaches out his hand, demanding that Johan return his squirrel immediately.
A subtle smirk plays on Johan's lips.
Johan asks Tezen what the squirrel's name is, catching his brother completely off guard.
Johan points out that such a precious beast needs a name, noting that Tezen clearly hasn't chosen one yet. Tezen nearly blubbers out the word slave as he remembers how he truly treats the creature.
Flustered, Tezen insists he is working hard on a name, earning a disappointed headshake from the squirrel.
Johan offers to help with the naming process, driving Tezen to rage and the squirrel to madness.
Mary interrupts the bickering, drawing the attention of both brothers.
She asks if she might be allowed to provide a name.
Gushing over how adorable the creature is, Marie is filled with excitement.
Tezen quickly agrees, claiming the squirrel would be honored to be named by her.
The blonde girl decides this is the perfect moment to improve the mood of the dinner. Mary leans in close, promising the squeaking squirrel that she will give it a beautiful name.
The orange squirrel poses with expectation.
Marie beams as she suggests the name Blackie, leaving the squirrel horrified by her tacky naming sense. The older women and Tezen praise the choice, claiming the creature will absolutely love the new name.
The orange squirrel resists as hands tie a golden thread around its leg, while the blonde girl bids the creature a polite farewell.
Startled by a sudden surge of magic, the squirrel watches as the blonde girl presents the golden thread as a special gift.
The squirrel examines the golden thread on its leg as the blonde girl praises how well it suits the small creature.
Touched by the girl's kindness and the value of the gift, the squirrel squeaks its appreciation for the gold.
Tezen demands that the squirrel return to him while Johan remains silently observant at the dinner table. Frustrated by the lack of obedience, Tezen orders the creature to return to its master, earning the squirrel's silent contempt.
The small creature looks back toward the table with a lingering gaze.
Johan stares ahead with a stoic expression, worrying that his brother will eventually direct his frustration toward him.
The squirrel leaps through the air across the table, making its way back to the group.
Tezen praises the creature for being a good squirrel as he roughly pets its head. While Tezen boasts about his growing bond with the beast, Johan clenches his hand in silent frustration. Within a dim library, someone reflects on a suspicion they held regarding recent events.
A man in formal white robes calls out to Rabina, expressing deep regret for ever parting with the divine beast.
The man informs the red-haired woman that they must retrieve the squirrel from the Highland estate immediately.
Rabina pauses her work, questioning the necessity of retrieving that specific divine squirrel.
The man explains the creature's unique importance to their experiment, dismissing the idea of using any other beast as a substitute.
A dark-clothed figure holds a small creature, confirming the target is currently with the Highland family. Narrative details warn that if the beast humanizes through high-level magic, it may recover suppressed memories of past experiments. The man dismisses these concerns, asserting that they conducted thorough checks before the beast's departure. He recalls handing the beast over to the Duchess, confident that the second son's lack of magic posed no risk of triggering a transformation.
Rabina notes the sick eldest son is isolating, explaining the temple's strategy of selling beasts to low-magic families to prevent humanization.
Despite the logical safeguards, Rabina admits that a nagging sense of unease continues to bother her. She considers the slim possibility that the eldest son possesses significant magic and has made contact with the divine beast. Insisting on the scroll's vital role in their research, Rabina urges the man to bring it back as soon as possible.
The man sighs in resignation, agreeing to manufacture a justification to reclaim the divine beast from the estate.
Back at the tower, Johan stands by the open balcony doors as the night sky looms behind him.
The squirrel peeks tentatively into the room, greeted by Johan's presence.
Johan offers a gentle smile, telling the small creature that it doesn't need to knock before entering.
He promises to always be waiting for its return, leaving the squirrel feeling slightly flustered by his warmth. The squirrel is struck by Johan's radiant appearance, noting how much healthier he looks.
Reflecting on the past 40 days, the creature realizes that absorbing Johan's magic has dramatically improved his complexion.
The squirrel notices a pleasant, soapy scent lingering around the young man.
Noticing the intense gaze, Johan asks the squirrel why it is staring at him so fixedly.
The squirrel quickly dismisses the attention with a squeak, privately vowing to help him continue his recovery.
Johan sits calmly on his bed with the small orange creature.
The squirrel demands to touch his forehead to perform a calming ritual, but Johan asks it to wait.
He suggests they take a more relaxed approach today, allowing the creature to stay until things are settled. Johan smiles warmly as he brings the squirrel closer to his face.
The creature stares into Johan's eyes, mesmerized by his gentle expression.
Johan thanks the squirrel for its help, receiving an affectionate response.
The squirrel perches on Johan's shoulder as he remains in a thoughtful silence. It leans into his touch, enjoying the softness of the moment.
Johan's attention is drawn to the golden ribbon still tied around the squirrel's leg.
He recalls the blonde girl saying goodbye to the creature earlier in the day. A look of quiet contemplation crosses Johan's face as he looks downward. Johan gently pets the creature while it rests comfortably on his lap.
Johan brings up the topic of the squirrel's name, capturing its full attention. He rejects the name Blackie, pointing out that the creature's eyes are clearly not black.
Visualizing a girl with vibrant pink eyes, Johan remarks on the squirrel's beautiful eye color.
Johan asks the squirrel if it likes the new observation, leaving the small creature in suspense.
Recoiling in disbelief, the orange squirrel inwardly critiques the boy's naming sense as absolutely terrible.
The creature worries that refusing the name Momo now might make it seem rebellious after accepting the name Blackie.
Looking down at the squirrel, Johan asks if it also believes the new name suits it perfectly.
As Johan gushes about how the name is charming and bright, the squirrel wonders if such grandiose adjectives are truly necessary.
Forcing a cheerful squeak, the squirrel pretends to agree that the name is the absolute best. A gentle, affectionate tuck. Johan gazes at the creature, asking if it thinks their meeting was merely a coincidence.
Looking deep into the squirrel's eyes, Johan confesses that he keeps feeling as though their meeting was fated.
A startled squeak as he pulls the creature closer. Laughing softly, Johan apologizes and admits he simply finds the small creature too adorable to resist.
Staring intensely, Johan reflects on how small and delicate the squirrel is, despite the way it tried to protect him.
A vision of the squirrel bravely standing its ground while holding an acorn flashes through his mind.
Leaning over the small beast, Johan promises to provide it with even more gold in the future.
Holding the creature in his palm, he vows to give it the best room and fulfill its every wish.
A vow of absolute devotion.
Johan's expression shifts as he promises to make the creature much happier than it ever was while with Tezin.
Standing tall with the beast in his hands, Johan declares that from now on, he will be the one to protect it.
Watching him with a lingering gaze, the squirrel silently calls the young man a fool.
Visions of the battlefield and temple-developed calming potions that suppress magic and memories loom in the distance.
A dark shadow of a night stands over the squirrel as narrative details describe the potion's power to make one forget even a divine beast.
Looking down with large, somber eyes, the squirrel realizes that when that time comes, Johan will no longer need it. Embracing the moment of warmth, the creature vows to do its best for Johan during the time they have together.
As dawn breaks, a carriage from the shrine pulls up to the grand estate.
Maids whisper amongst themselves about the high-ranking officials visiting so early, noting that the high priest himself has arrived.
Inside the parlor, the man with the beard sips tea and asks the high priest what he means by his previous statement.
Putting his tea down with a sharp clack, the high priest explains it has been confirmed that the beast given to Tezin lacks calming abilities.
The high priest demands that the divine beast be returned to the temple immediately.
Addressing the Duchess directly, the priest repeats that the creature given to Tezin is useless and must be returned to the shrine.
The Duchess grits her teeth in a sudden, silent fury. The priest notes that no one else knows of this matter, as it is strictly connected to the authority of the shrine.
Placing her hand firmly on the table, the Duchess declares that the discussion regarding the squirrel is over.
She insists they stop the matter there to prevent the story from spreading to both parties, yet she remains pensive.
Looking sharply at her guest, the Duchess notes that other measures must be taken regarding the magical pain of her son, Jay.
The priest reveals he has brought potions often purchased by sorcerers who cannot summon divine beasts to help Prince Tezin.
The Duchess reflects silently on the mention of potions. Pleased to have an alternative, the Duchess requests the potion, noting it wouldn't matter if rumors spread about using reagents like her father. Since the reward money is settled, the Duchess asks if she might make one more request of the priest.
Reflecting on how the beast rebelled and fled to the tower, the Duchess decides it is best to remove any potential threats in advance.
She asks if there is a potion capable of turning a person into a mindless puppet.
With a dark smile, she suggests doing so without leaving any trace within the shrine.
The grand tower stands tall against the morning sky.
Perched on a high branch, the squirrel realizes it is facing a significant problem.
The creature panics, realizing the priest is lying about its lack of calming abilities just to take it back to the shrine. Recalling the original work, the squirrel remembers disappearing and being taken to a cage at the shrine around this time.
Memories of a red-haired woman and experimental potions fill the creature with dread, making it desperate to avoid a return.
A realization of an even greater threat dawns. Running along the branch, the squirrel realizes that Ella is planning to use the potion to harm Johan.
The creature identifies the substance as the terrible potion from the original story used to turn people into hollow dolls.
Determined to save him, the squirrel vows that it cannot let such a fate befall Johan.
Within the quiet room, Johan remains focused on his papers, unaware of the plot moving against him.
A sudden, sharp cry rings out, catching the black-haired boy's immediate attention. Johan turns toward the windowsill, surprised to see the orange squirrel appearing so exhausted. He questions the creature's risky daytime visit, while Momo urgently signals that there is a dire emergency.
The squirrel frantically paws at a mark on its chest, pleading with Johan to erase the restrictive seal.
Momo warns the boy that he is in immediate peril because of a new plot being orchestrated by Ella. Stunned by the revelation, Johan struggles to process a plan meant to cause him deep suffering.
Frustration mounts for the small beast as it realizes the difficulty of explaining complex dangers through simple gestures.
Faced with a lack of time, Momo decides to resort to a desperate, energy-draining transformation.
Johan watches in bewilderment as the squirrel leaps onto the bed, preparing to change its form.
A blinding radiance fills the room, reflected in the boy's widening purple eyes. As the light fades, a beautiful brown-haired girl appears, wrapped in the white bed sheets.
Johan is momentarily speechless, asking why she would risk such a premature transformation.
The girl commands his focus, explaining that she is being hunted by those who wish to return her to the shrine.
She reveals that the temple officials claim she lacks her divine power and intend to drag her away.
Johan asks if her sudden appearance means she intends to flee the estate immediately. Looking up at him with desperate pink eyes, she begs for his assistance in securing her freedom.
Her expression is one of pure, raw determination as she prepares to ask for his help.
She explains that only a direct descendant of the bloodline can break the seal keeping her trapped.
Fear clouds her gaze as she admits that being returned to the shrine would surely mean her death.
Moved by her plight, the black-haired boy drops to his knees by the bedside.
Johan looks her in the eye and solemnly vows to break her chains and protect her life.
A faint glow emanates from her collarbone as the magical mark is completely wiped away.
Relieved to finally be free, she offers a heartfelt thanks to the boy who saved her.
Johan stares back at her, seemingly taken aback by the weight of her gratitude.
A dark vision of the Duchess holding a glowing potion flashes through the air as the girl shares a warning.
She cautions Johan to avoid all hot food and drink, explaining that the poison he is being fed only activates with heat.
She urges him to endure his current hardships until he is finally sent away to the front lines. The girl explains that once he is away from this influence, his magic will stabilize and the pain will cease.
Johan takes her hands in his, reassuring her that his own safety is not his primary concern right now.
He asks if she truly exhausted all her stored magical energy just to bring him this vital information.
Johan looks on sadly, knowing that her temporary human form is already beginning to fade away.
The brown-haired girl reaches out, gently stroking his head with a comforting, motherly touch.
She promises to find a way to humanize again soon and tells him not to worry about her fate. A moment of quiet, emotional connection passes between the two as they face an uncertain future.
Johan clutches her hands tightly, acknowledging the profound debt he owes her for his very life.
He bows his head in a gesture of absolute loyalty, vowing to survive exactly as she instructed. He asks her where she plans to hide once she leaves the safety of the tower.
A soft poof sounds as a cloud of magical sparkles signals the end of her transformation.
The girl vanishes, leaving only a small, dazed orange squirrel lying on the white sheets.
Johan whispers her name into the quiet room, his heart heavy with the cost of her sacrifice.
Momo lies motionless for a moment, the toll of the magic evident in her tiny frame.
The squirrel admits to herself that her reserves are completely spent after the long conversation. The sound of heavy footsteps echoing in the hall snaps Johan back to the present danger. He tells the squirrel they must act fast and suggests she escape through the trees to avoid detection. Quickly and gently, Johan begins to tie a small thread around the creature's slender leg. He instructs Momo to wear the token carefully so he can find her again in the future. Johan explains that the golden thread will be his signal, and he invites her to return to him if she ever needs magic.
Looking at her with newfound resolve, he promises to stand as her protector regardless of the cost.
He tells her to flee while he prepares to create a chaotic distraction for the arriving guards.
A final, lingering look is shared as Johan says goodbye to his small companion.
The squirrel gazes affectionately at Johan, silently reassuring him that he is not the villain everyone believes him to be. Struck by the kindness in the young man's heart, the creature finds itself deeply moved by his true nature. Johan playfully teases the small beast about its sharp intuition, though his lighthearted comment only earns him a loud, indignant squeak.
With a sudden, nimble spring, the orange squirrel leaps from the windowsill, leaving Johan to watch its departure with a somber expression. Perched on a high branch, the creature looks back one last time to bid Johan a silent farewell as it prepares to leave. Watching from the balcony, Johan reflects on the difficulty of letting the creature go, yet he remains confident that it will thrive on its own.
The squirrel considers the short time they spent together a true blessing, having seen the real person behind the world's cruel labels.
A final, heartfelt expression of gratitude echoes through the creature's thoughts as the grand tower looms in the distance.
Johan stands alone at the open doors, a heavy silence filling the space where the small creature once rested.
Accepting the reality of its absence, the young man stares at the empty room, feeling the weight of the squirrel's departure.
Johan clenches his fist in frustration, his mind racing with worries about the seal and the shrine's pursuit of his small companion.
Gazing out at the estate courtyard, Johan suspects the temple's true motives and realizes they likely underestimated the beast's potential.
A sudden, sharp sound at the door pulls him from his thoughts, prompting him to wonder if someone is already searching for the creature. Turning toward the entrance as a series of loud, quick taps ring out, Johan hears a servant calling out to him urgently.
The red-haired man pushes the door open, offering a brief apology for his sudden intrusion into the room.
When asked if he has seen the divine beast, Johan flatly denies it, privately mocking the terrible name given to the creature by others. The servant begins tossing the bedding aside in a frantic search, driven by the hope of claiming a reward for the squirrel's capture.
Johan warns the man that a failure to find the beast will result in a chaotic search that might keep the entire estate awake all night. The servant pauses, his expression shifting as he considers a new, potentially deceptive plan to settle the matter.
Johan listens intently as the man prepares to explain his idea for resolving the disappearance. The servant suggests faking the squirrel's death by using a common beast marked with the family seal to fool the temple officials. Surprised by the young master's willingness to help, the red-haired man asks why he would bother assisting with such a ruse.
Johan agrees to the plan on the condition that the man secretly provides him with simple food, like cold bread.
Looking toward the man with a weary gaze, the young master confesses that he is truly starving. Realizing the poor quality of the meal sent to the tower, the servant looks on with a touch of newfound sympathy. The man bows and promises to carry out the task, leaving to find a suitable substitute for the missing divine beast. Once the door closes, Johan stands in the center of the quiet room, the immediate threat of the search temporarily neutralized.
He reflects on how this deception will likely buy enough time to trick the temple scouts and protect the squirrel. A moment of quiet contemplation as he stands alone in his dimly lit quarters. A memory of the playful orange squirrel jumping on his pillow flashes through his mind, filling the room with a phantom warmth.
Johan admits to himself that he nearly let his own loneliness cloud his judgment regarding the creature's freedom.
A vision of a beautiful, brown-haired girl appears, representing the human form he almost selfishly kept bound to his side.
Despite his deep longing for her company, he decides that her safety and survival must take priority over his own desires. The image of the girl's radiant smile lingers, a bittersweet reminder of what he has chosen to let go.
Sitting on the edge of the bed, Johan smiles faintly, trusting in the creature's intelligence to stay safe from the temple's reach.
He continues to admire the small beast's surprising blend of dainty charm and fierce resolve.
Clutching the pillow where the creature once slept, Johan remembers the long nights he spent anticipating its return.
Now, as he hunches over in the quiet dark, he realizes those nights of companionship have come to an end. The moon hangs high over the sprawling estate, casting a cold, silver light across the silent gardens.
Inside a separate wing, a pen scratches rhythmically against parchment as a blonde girl works late into the night. She sighs over a new request for aid, her face clouded with the stress of mounting administrative duties.
Reviewing the territorial demands, she questions how such excessive amounts can be justified during these difficult times.
The girl notes that while their finances are strained, she cannot simply ignore the needs of those stationed on the front lines.
Paralyzed by the difficult choices before her, she wonders what the right course of action for the family should be.
A series of unexpected, heavy taps against the glass startles her, causing her to jump in surprise.
Panic sets in as she looks toward the window, realizing that someone or something is making noise on the second floor.
Trembling slightly, she cautiously approaches the glass and demands to know who is outside.
Her eyes widen in pure shock as she peers through the window and sees an unexpected visitor.
A small orange squirrel sits on the ledge, looking in with a tired but determined expression.
Staring at the creature's leg, the girl immediately recognizes the distinctive golden thread tied there.
The orange squirrel pauses in realization. A sharp call for Blackie rings out, slowly awakening in the oppressive dark.
A blurred room begins to sharpen.
The small creature wonders where it is.
Mariel's voice greets the waking squirrel. Mariel arrives with a trace friend.
She marvels at Blackie's healthy appetite.
Mariel encourages the hungry beast to eat. She questions how it traveled so far. Panic strikes as she offers overtime. Blackie refuses to go back to Highland,
desperate to communicate its dire plight.
Mariel watches the squirrel wash away. Blackie begins pawing at confidential documents.
It points out a very specific paper.
Pure shock washes over Mariel's face. Blackie highlights words suggesting its past abuse.
A determined look from the small creature.
Mariel asks if it was abused. She leans in close to the beast.
Heartbroken, Mariel comforts the little squirrel.
She finds the tiny creature absolutely adorable.
A sudden realization dawns on her,
recalling Tezin's cruel treatment to Johan.
Vowing never to return Blackie to Highland.
Mariel promises to protect her new companion.
The current mission is successfully completed.
A man commends Ravina's handling of things. Ravina reports finding a dead beast. He mentions serum and hidden secrets.
The man admits to feeling a bit unsettled.
He dismisses the girl's lingering obsession. He insists beasts rarely want human forms.
A final dismissal of the beast's potential.
The squirrel strikes a confident pose.
It notes the rapid accumulation of magic.
Mariel possesses incredible magic like Johan's.
Her massive magic is remarkably sable. Mariel calls out to her small friend.
She greets the squirrel with a smile.
Mariel admits the day was exhausting. Sadness clouds the blonde girl's expression. She explains a tax payment to her.
Blackie questions the logic of the situation.
Mariel cries over the difficult political news,
narrating her kindness and lack of schemes.
The downfall of the Modeste family photon.
Blackie notes the girl's lavish lifestyle,
vowing to stop people from exploiting her.
The orange squirrel points toward the fireplace.
It imagines manually chopping firewood.
The small creature acts out exhaustion.
Blackie rejects the idea of taxes. Mariel stares blankly at its antics.
Muriel explains that the hot region doesn't need firewood taxes, while Blackie admires her intelligence.
The squirrel nods in enthusiastic agreement. She affectionately nuzzles her small companion. Muriel asks if the squirrel would listen to her worries, and it eagerly agrees.
Blackie promises to listen to everything to repay the favor of absorbing magic.
She expresses deep gratitude for its presence. Muriel thanks Blackie before the seat. The Duchess weeps alone on her bed.
She expresses deep regret over going to the temple on the day she lost her child.
She laments how much her child would have grown if they were still alive. The infant's pink eyes stare blankly. The grand estate gleams under the sun. The squirrel relaxes peacefully in a tree.
Kind servants offer it fresh acorns.
Life at the mansion feels incredibly perfect. Distant sobbing catches the squirrel's attention. It wonders who is crying nearby, looking through the window at the bugkiss. A sudden look of firm determination. It identifies the mourning Duchess of Medest, recalling rumors of her fragile health.
A creak sounds as it enters.
The Duchess is startled by the sound. A small squirrel suddenly appeared before her. She wonders where the creature came from. Recognizing the beast, she asks if it is the squirrel Mariel has been raising.
Blackie looks down at the bedsheets.
She identifies the lock of brown hair as belonging to baby Eureka.
The squirrel gazes at the lock.
Blackie realizes the Duchess is referring to the loss of her second child.
An official asks the Duchess if there is any news regarding her missing second daughter.
Mariel calls out to her mother during a tense, somber dare.
A black-haired woman remarks that Modeste families seem strangely prone to losing children.
Muriel looks on while the narration notes she grew up well under the Duchess's care.
The Duchess confirms that disappearances often target the second or third children in Modeste.
The narrator explains Mariel was raised carefully within the manor's safety.
She recounts the terrifying bandit attack that occurred during a trip for a baptism.
The Duchess calls herself foolish for talking about her trauma to a small squirrel.
Blackie desperately wants to comfort her. A brilliant idea strikes the squirrel.
It lands on the bed with a fag.
The squirrel coos at the Duchess, striking a cute pose to cheer her up.
The Duchess asks if rubbing its belly will make her feel better, and Blackie confirms. She thanks the squirrel with a smile.
A gentle hand strokes the squirrel's belly.
Looking down with a soft smile, the Duchess asks the squirrel if it would mind visiting her room occasionally.
She promises to fill a dish with sunflower seeds and acorns just for the little creature.
The orange squirrel beams with pure happiness. The Duchess sits comfortably on her bed while holding her small companion.
The grand estate stands bathed in golden light.
Johann stands alone by the window in his hour.
A voice informs him that it is time to depart, and he agrees to go.
Johann leaves the room, reflecting on how he felt no emotion upon hearing news of his father's death.
His purple eyes narrow with intense focus.
He remembers Momo's warnings about the battlefield and the forced potion.
He realizes that without Momo, he would never have known the truth behind the meals he was served.
He knows he would have eventually lost himself to Ella's control.
Johann decides to trust Momo and head to the battlefield as she suggested.
He vows to eventually destroy both Hyrod and the temple that threatens his friend.
Standing tall in his armor, he announces his departure.
Mariel reads the morning paper and learns that Lord Johann has safely reached the battlefield.
She worries about him being sent to war with such a fragile body and notes he will remain in the rear.
Blackie sits with an acorn, noting that Johann has finally left.
The squirrel worries for his well-being despite believing the battlefield might be a safer environment for him.
Mariel pets Blackie and notes that her mother's condition has improved significantly since the squirrel began visiting.
While Mariel expresses her gratitude, the squirrel realizes she has gathered enough magic to return to her human form.
She is excited to be human again, but worries that her transformation will startle Mariel.
The squirrel suddenly bolts away from Mariel with a quick patter of feet.
Mariel is confused by the squirrel's sudden disappearance. A bright light shimmers in Mariel's pink eyes.
Mariel gasps in shock of the fight.
Clinging to a curtain for cover, Eureka promises to explain everything to her.
The door creaks as the Duchess enters, asking to speak with Mariel for a moment.
A heavy thud sounds as the Duchess is frozen in absolute shock.
Eureka looks back with wide, fearful eyes.
The Duchess screams out Eureka's name in disbelief.
She exclaims that Eureka has finally returned, while Mariel calls out to her in concern. The Duchess believes the gods have answered her prayers, and Mariel begs her to stay calm.
The Duchess begins to thank the Divine One for the child's return before her strength fails and she collapses, causing Mariel to scream out.
Mariel frantically calls for anyone outside to help because her mother has fainted.
Still hiding behind the curtain, Eureka panics.
She cries as she realizes her transformation did not go as planned.
Later, Eureka and Mariel sit across from each other in silence.
A quiet knock sounds at the door.
Dr. Brown, the personal physician, enters and reports that the Duchess has finally fallen asleep.
He informs Mariel that she should wake up within a few hours.
The doctor explains that seeing someone who resembled the person she longed for caused a moment of mental confusion. Eureka sits with her head bowed, listening quietly.
Dr. Brown expresses his concern about what will happen once the madam wakes up. He warns that if Eureka is not there, the Duchess might think she has lost her daughter again, which could worsen her health.
The physician suggests that it would be best for Eureka to stay at the mansion to ensure the Duchess's stability.
The doctor bids them farewell in Nice.
Mariel slumps into her seat with a heavy, exhausted sigh.
Eureka attempts to speak as Mariel looks up on her.
Mariel apologizes for startling her pink-eyed companion.
Mariel explains the physical similarities between her sister and Eureka, which caused their mother's confusion.
Eureka insists she should be the one to apologize for the surprise.
Mariel offers a warm, comforting smile.
Mariel reveals she studied divine beasts, leaving Eureka impressed by her knowledge.
Mariel asks where Eureka found enough magic to sustain a human form for so long.
Eureka hesitates, looking unsure how to respond. A sudden realization regarding her own magic strikes Mariel.
Mariel expresses confusion since she cannot cast spells, but Eureka remains uncertain.
Eureka confirms Mariel has massive magic power that she absorbed for 50 days.
Mariel considers the fact that her magic was being drained away.
Eureka worries that her shameless behavior has made the blonde girl angry.
Mariel laughs happily and praises her companion's hard work.
A radiant, sparkly light fills the room.
Dazzled by the kindness, Eureka wonders if Mariel is an angel.
Mariel ponders the situation before beginning to speak again.
Mariel asks Eureka if she would consider becoming her little sister.
The sudden proposal leaves Eureka completely shell-shocked. Mariel takes the girl's hands and admits her request is selfish. The two girls sit together in contemplative silence.
Muriel explains her desire for her mother to remain happy for the rest of her life.
Eureka reflects on the tragic events of the original story. The narration explains that the Duchess died of grief in the original timeline.
Mariel recalls the genuine joy her mother felt when Eureka appeared.
Mariel remembers her mother's affection for the small squirrel. A heavy, emotional silence fills the space between them.
Mariel apologizes for the burden but pleads for her to send. Mariel admits she does not want to part from such a supportive friend.
Eureka looks down while feeling guilty for the help she has received.
Eureka tearfully protests, claiming she is the one who should feel guilty.
Eureka realizes there is no reason to refuse such a beneficial offer.
A memory of Eureka as a small orange squirrel.
Mariel and the Duchess look happy together in their home.
Eureka clenches her hand and agrees to the proposal. Eureka officially accepts the role with a look of firm resolve.
Mariel hugs her sister while bestowing the name Eureka upon her. Eureka asks Mariel to take good care of her.
Mariel is absolutely overjoyed to hear the word sister.
Mariel faints from sheer excitement after being called sister.
Eureka resolves to live up to her new noble position.
She vows to protect the Modeste family fortune and honor. The grand estate stands tall under the bright sun.
Townspeople whisper to one another about the news of the orphan turned noble. Villagers gossip that the naive Miss Modeste has been deceived yet again.
The local commoners predict the eventual decline of the Modeste family's fortune.
Two men observe Eureka as she steps out of the building. Eureka looks ahead with a stoic and noble expression.
The magnificent manor is bathed in golden light. Staff members at the orphanage welcome Eureka with deep respect.
Eureka graciously greets them as she begins her first official noble duty.
Narrator reflects on the gossip about her new status and plans to use her title to her advantage.
Eureka arrives at the orphanage accompanied by a dark-haired man, determined not to hide her humble origins.
A silhouette of a person with glasses works diligently on a task. Eureka walks through the orphanage grounds while observing the staffing children. Eureka notes the happiness around her and mentions she is looking for a specific person.
Narrator explains that the Empire's greatest doctor will eventually save the Crown Prince from Johan's schemes.
A silhouette of a doctor prepares medicine for a bedridden patient.
Narrator explains that the doctor, Lunat, remains loyal to the orphanage and will save Muriel's lover. A silhouette of Lunat is shown as a genius physician who spent years studying.
Narrator notes that his skills took time to develop because of his long stay at the orphanage.
Eureka wonders if she can shorten the time needed for his training.
She is suddenly distracted by something nearby.
Eureka observes a group of children playing with a nanny under a large tree. A voice describes the nanny as a maternal figure to all the children.
The nanny smiles warmly while receiving flowers from a young girl.
The blonde Duchess affectionately touches Eureka's face and calls her daughter.
The two share a pleasant tea time together in the garden. The Duchess expresses her immense happiness at having Eureka by her side. Eureka reflects quietly on the Duchess's deep affection.
She remembers the Duchess's kindness toward her when she was just a small squirrel.
Eureka clenches her hand, determined not to lose the lady who showed her such love.
Standing before the building, she resolves to find Lunat immediately.
Eureka vows to send Lunat to the academy early and cure the Duchess's illness.
The dark-haired man and woman watch Eureka in silence.
The two staff members exchange a knowing, solemn look.
A sharp creak sounds from the wooden stairs.
The warden leads Eureka to the second floor, mentioning the study and library areas.
The warden addresses Eureka, who turns to respond to him.
A loud crashing sound interrupts the warden as he begins to ask about sponsorship details.
The warden sighs at the children's mischief and invites Eureka to look around while he investigates. Eureka agrees but suspects the staff is subtly fishing for more financial support.
She notices someone interesting through a nearby doorway.
A silver-haired boy sits alone on the library floor, deeply focused on a book.
Eureka calls out a greeting, causing the boy to look up in surprise. The boy is startled and apologizes for not hearing her enter, but Eureka reassures him.
Eureka curiously asks what book has captured his attention so completely.
The boy excitedly explains that it is a fascinating new medical book featuring unconventional treatments.
Eureka is stunned by his passionate response to the medical text. Beaming with excitement, she asks the boy for his name.
The silver-haired boy introduces himself as Lunat Cardin. Eureka is thrilled to have found him and gives him a warm welcome. She immediately proposes that he attend a medical academy, leaving him bewildered. Lunat hesitates, his expression clouded with doubt and worry.
The warden suddenly reappears and addresses Eureka.
The warden urges Lunat to finally be honest about his own desires.
Lunat frantically denies any interest in medicine, much to Eureka's confusion.
The warden decides he can no longer keep quiet about the situation.
The warden asks Eureka to consider sponsoring Lunat's education.
He explains that Lunat is brilliant and dreams of the academy, but stays silent to avoid burdening them.
The warden admits he kept quiet out of respect, but cannot let this opportunity pass.
Eureka tells the silver-haired boy that he is clearly passionate about medicine, and that if he misses this chance to formally study it, everyone at the orphanage would be heartbroken. Eureka promises that under the Modeste family name, she will ensure the orphanage receives proper support so that he can pursue his studies without any worries.
Moved to tears by the girl's generosity, the boy looks up with wide, shimmering eyes and addresses her as Your Highness.
The dark-haired warden and the orphanage staff encourage Lunat to go and follow his dreams, asking him to write to them if he ever feels lonely.
Kneeling on the wooden floor and clutching his medical book, the boy says thank you while the staff and children watch him with supportive smiles. A soft, relieved exhale sounds as Eureka reflects on how she has finally found Lunat safely.
Eureka sits at her desk and thinks that now all that remains is organizing the sponsorship lists for the orphanage before reporting everything to her sister tomorrow.
A happy pew escapes her as Eureka finishes her tasks for the day and decides it is finally time to get some rest.
Eureka thinks to herself that back when she was a divine beast, she used to prepare to meet Johan around this time every single day.
A dark-haired boy with deep purple eyes stands alone in a golden forest as Eureka wonders how he is doing now.
The scene shifts to a quiet campsite at sunset where a voice asks, "Sir, what are you doing?" Johan puts a finger to his lips and hushes his companion while another man in the background asks if he intends to eat dinner.
The blonde soldier looks at Johan with an expression of pure confusion. A close-up shows a small pile of peanuts resting on a burlap sack atop a large rock.
The men recall that Johan is always out gathering acorns or peanuts, and other soldiers excitedly offer him their own collection of nuts. The man wonders why Johan is leaving his carefully gathered food by the base of a tree as a small orange tail flickers among the leaves.
Johan and the blonde man both let out a small gasp as they look toward the rock.
A small orange squirrel sits on the rock, happily munching on the peanuts while the men ask in surprise if it is a square.
The blonde man laughs heartily and remarks that the squirrel must be hungry because it is eating quite well.
Johan watches the squirrel with an incredibly gentle smile, though his companion thinks to himself that he can't get used to that face no matter how often he sees it.
Johan mentions that the evening meals are being distributed and tells the blonde man to head back, to which the soldier agrees to leave immediately.
As he watches the squirrel, Johan softly whispers the name Moma. A transparent memory of a small squirrel holding a large acorn appears alongside the real one.
Johan reflects on how whenever the sunset settles, he is reminded of the time he spent with his small companion.
Looking up at the warm sky, Johan remembers that the sunset was always the time he waited for Momo to come running to him under the cover of night.
A soft rustling sound follows Johan as he stands in the grass and thinks about how much he misses Momo. Johan resolves that once the war has ended and he finds her again, he will fulfill his promise to turn her into a human.
Johan thinks that as a human, she will have no place to go or family to return to, so the only one she will have is him.
A vision appears of Johan and a brown-haired woman in an elegant pink dress standing together as the narrator calls them each other's one and only family.
A magnificent carriage travels along a road through a lush, sparkling forest under a bright sun. Renat sits inside the carriage wearing formal blue clothes, looking extremely nervous as a quick thump-thump sounds from his chest.
Eureka asks if he is truly that excited about attending the academy, and Renat replies that it is all thanks to her.
Renat excitedly tells Eureka not to worry about the Duchess's illness because he will study hard to ensure she recovers, while Eureka calls him Renat and says she is counting on him.
Renat expresses his gratitude for her help with the orphanage and mentions that everyone is thrilled about the increased donations and the new library being built.
Eureka thinks to herself that the success is actually thanks to Mariel reading the inspection report and taking decisive action.
Eureka informs Renat that the Modeste family will handle any further support he needs so that he can focus entirely on his studies.
Renat cries out in joy and asks if she is an angel, while Eureka thinks that handling the groundwork while letting Mariel take the credit is her best strategy.
Eureka's pink eyes glow with a sharp intensity as she reflects on the fact that Mariel needs to have power. A silhouette depicts a man kneeling to propose to an elegant woman in a grand gown.
Mariel stands confidently in a blue dress as the narration asks if she should be someone who relies solely on love.
Renat calls out to Eureka while she offers him a warm and reassuring smile.
Renat asks if she plans to drop him off at the academy and leave immediately, worried that they will be parting ways as soon as they arrive.
Eureka explains that it is almost Mariel's birthday and she must return for the celebration because all the relatives will be gathering. A sudden stop sounds as Eureka freezes in place, realizing that Mariel's uncle will also be present at the party. Eureka recalls that the uncle was Mariel's only advisor but died unexpectedly early, and she struggles to remember the exact cause of his death. Eureka abruptly asks Renat what he knows about poisons, causing the boy to look at her in complete bewilderment. Eureka thinks to herself that the idea just crossed her mind and wonders if her mother was actually poisoned.
Renat looks down at their feet and repeats the word poison as they sit across from each other.
Renat explains that poison is strictly regulated by the temple, so even doctors would not be able to obtain enough to kill someone outright.
Renat adds that it might be different in a case of prolonged exposure, which leaves Eureka wondering how someone would even manage to do that.
Mariel runs toward her guest with a joyful shout of recognition. Her face lights up with a radiant smile as she welcomes him, certain her mother will be thrilled by his arrival.
The blonde man dismisses her enthusiasm, coolly noting he is familiar enough with the estate to find his own way.
Undeterred by his coldness, Mariel cheerfully explains she simply wanted to offer a proper greeting. Her smile falters as the man turns back to her with a look of pure disbelief, questioning her judgment.
Jaden Albert Count stands tall in a sharp red and black outfit, his expression one of irritation.
He grumbles about the risk of her catching a cold before roughly draping his heavy black coat over her shoulders.
Jaden lectures her on the need to remain healthy and resilient, especially with her mother's worsening condition.
With a firm command, he tells her to take his coat and immediately head back inside.
Mariel stands frozen in the oversized garment, silenced by the unexpected weight of her uncle's concern.
As they walk together toward the entrance, Jaden sighs in annoyance while Mariel hopes to keep smiling before the real scolding begins. Jaden brings up the news of the family's recently adopted foster daughter, and Mariel confirms the adoption.
When Mariel reveals the girl's name is Eureka, a sudden, heavy stop sounds as Jaden freezes in his tracks.
He looks at her with a piercing, solemn gaze and asks about the decision to name the child after her late sister. Mariel explains that her mother views the girl as the original Eureka and that she has come to love her like a sister as well. She offers a hopeful smile, expressing her confidence that Jaden will eventually grow fond of the new addition to the family too.
Her optimistic thoughts are quickly overshadowed by a sense of foreboding as the reality of their meeting looms.
A crackle of static fills the air as Eureka and Jaden lock eyes, an immediate and intense rivalry forming between them.
A low growl echoes as a metaphorical wolf and squirrel face off, leaving a trembling Mariel to wonder if their dinner will survive the tension.
The scene shifts to an elegantly set dining table bathed in the warm, flickering glow of candlelight.
Mariel invites everyone to begin their meal, noting that her mother has already finished eating and is currently resting. Jaden remains silent, his displeasure evident as he takes a slow sip of red wine.
Eureka tries to break the ice by wishing him a pleasant meal, though she can sense his lingering hostility from their earlier encounter.
She recalls his earlier rudeness toward Mariel and his blunt rejection of her presence, causing her to doubt his intentions.
A sharp clink of a glass being set down sounds as the two girls nervously begin their dinner under the man's watchful eye. Jaden abruptly interrupts the meal, demanding to know Eureka's true identity beyond the name she was given. He leans back in his chair, unimpressed by her response and insisting on hearing her original name.
Eureka hesitates, closing her eyes as she prepares to reveal the name she used during her time as a divine beast.
Her pink eyes widen with a mix of embarrassment and determination as the truth hangs on the tip of her tongue.
Jaden looks on with absolute bewilderment as a series of nonsensical sounds seemingly fill the air. A sudden, warm rush of color fills her cheeks as Eureka finally confesses her embarrassing real name, much to her own chagrin.
Jaden is struck speechless, his face a mask of confusion as he wonders if anyone could actually bear such a name.
Eureka secretly reflects on the fact that her name makes perfect sense given that she is not actually a human being.
Shifting his focus, Jaden resumes his criticism of Mariel, accusing her of wasting time on hopeless endeavors. He scolds her for failing to manage the household properly and for making the dangerous decision to grant soldiers to the borderlands.
Jaden continues his stern lecture, questioning her judgment and making such critical military and jurisdictional concessions.
Mariel defends her actions, explaining that the nearby battles left her with no choice but to grant permission for the troops.
She adds that the decision was not made without strategy, as she negotiated specific conditions in exchange for the soldiers.
A panel displays cotton and millet as Mariel explains her plan to raise tax rates and shift the tax burden away from cotton.
She details how tightening the food supply will naturally force a reduction in troop numbers once the immediate threat of war has passed.
Jaden is stunned by the depth of her political insight, his previous irritation replaced by a sense of shock.
He stares at her in awe, confessing that for a moment he felt as though his late brother had returned to lead the family.
Jaden asks if she has sought out a new mentor to guide her thinking, but Mariel simply laughs off the suggestion.
With a warm and proud expression, Mariel credits Eureka as the one who has been providing her with such invaluable advice.
Jaden's gaze lingers on Eureka, clearly impressed by the young girl's remarkable intelligence and strategic mind. He reflects quietly on the child, trying to process the significant impact she has already had on his niece.
Jaden's expression softens as he clears his throat, acknowledging the bond they share.
Mariel beams with joy, feeling validated by her uncle's change in heart and his recognition of Eureka as part of the family.
Jaden watches Mariel with a complex look, noting how the entire household seems to act as if the original Eureka has returned. He is overcome with a profound realization about his niece's growth and the girl who stands by her side.
Sienna's hopeful words about the real Eureka's return are interrupted by a door opening.
Jaden and the girls are startled as a loud thump sounds from the door.
Sienna enters the dining room, greeting Mariel and Eureka during their meal with Jaden.
The Duchess asks Eureka about her day, and the child reassures her of her safety. Sienna laments that her worsening condition keeps her from spending more time with them.
Muriel cheerily proposes a future group trip together to lift her mother's spirits.
Jaden watches the family's warm interaction with a pensive and serious expression. A radiant vision depicts the three women standing together in a moment of peace.
The table falls quiet after Muriel leaves to escort her mother back home.
Eureka finds the silent atmosphere with the watchful Count to be quite suffocating. Jaden breaks the silence with a surprising and formal apology for his earlier attitude. He admits his previous behavior was immature and regrets potentially hurting Eureka's feelings.
The Count prepares to speak plainly about the Modeste family's serious internal crisis.
Narrative text emphasizes the dire and urgent situation currently facing the household. The Duke remains missing while Mariel continues to lead without an official title. Jaden worries that Mariel's clumsy inexperience makes her vulnerable to lurking enemies.
He clenches his fist while contemplating the potential dangers facing the family's future.
He warns Eureka that Mariel's downfall would leave her dangerously exposed and alone.
Eureka is stunned by the weight of the Count's grim and honest warning. She reflects that beneath his harsh words, the Count is genuinely worried about them.
Eureka recognizes that Jaden is actually a good person who truly cares for her. She politely thanks the Count for his concern and acknowledges the weight of his worries.
A symbolic bird crest appears as Eureka begins to state her own position.
Eureka clarifies that holding a high social title is not important to her. She passionately declares her love for Mariel and Sienna with a loud, determined shout. Jaden is taken aback by the child's sudden and intense outburst of affection.
Eureka hopes for Sienna's recovery so they can remain a family.
The Count listens as she explains how precious they have become to her.
Eureka blushes with embarrassment after expressing her heart so openly in front of him.
Jaden smiles gently, crediting Mariel's improvement to the child's presence by her side. Eureka is struck speechless by the Count's rare and soft-spoken display of kindness. An embarrassed Jaden quickly retracts his words with a flustered and awkward apology. Eureka resolves that she will not let the Count meet his fated early death.
She determines to put Renat's plan into action immediately to change the future.
Carrying a small basket, Eureka ponders the mystery of the Count's potential poisoner. She interprets Jaden's rough scolding as a hidden sign of his concern for her health. Eureka stands before the Count's door, ready to begin her secret mission. Jaden is surprised to see Eureka suddenly appearing in his workspace late at night.
A cheerful Eureka enters with a basket, intent on checking the Count's health.
Jaden is bewildered by the sudden and late delivery of a midnight sandwich. Eureka energetically sets out the meal as a sharp clack sounds against the table. A close-up of the appetizing and fresh sandwiches she brought for the Count. She reveals she made them herself, leaving the Count stunned and impressed. Jaden relents to her persistence as a celebratory success rings out in her heart. Jaden asks if his earlier grim warnings were what made her feel uneasy.
The Count finds the food delicious while Eureka maintains her silent, watchful prayer.
Eureka asks about assassination attempts, which the Count dismisses as unlikely and illogical.
Jaden looks on as Eureka begins to ask a puzzling and deeper question. He mentions his chronically ill goddaughter, Salie Linisht, whose health is failing. Eureka is horrified to recognize the name of a notorious villainess from the story.
Narrative text describes Salie as a villainess driven by jealousy to torment Mariel.
An old book illustrates Salie's deceitful nature, pretending kindness while secretly plotting.
The tragic split between the Crown Prince and Mariel is depicted as a direct result of Salie's schemes.
Eureka questions the blonde Count about his goddaughter's health, wondering if she truly requires lifelong treatment. Jaden confirms the girl's incurable condition with a heavy heart, expressing his deep worry for her future. While the Count eats his sandwich, Eureka reflects on the suspicious nature of such a convenient illness.
Narrative text suggests that Mariel was actually the one considered weak and vulnerable.
A hand tops the table as narration reveals Salie's vast expenditures used to undermine Mariel's position.
Eureka grows suspicious of Salie's mysterious financial backing despite her humble origins. Jaden looks visibly unsettled as he begins to question the true source of his goddaughter's funding. A determined smile crosses Eureka's face as she realizes she can solve two problems at once.
Later that night, the Count sits alone in his grand, dimly lit bedchamber.
He touches his torso with a frown, noting an uncomfortable feeling of bloating after his meal.
He recalls Eureka's persistent efforts to feed him, wondering if he's simply overindulged.
A somber thought for the original Eureka passes through the air amidst a backdrop of white roses. The current Eureka stands radiantly, her joyous expression contrasting with the heavy atmosphere.
A sudden sharp knock echoes as the Count invites Dr. Brown into his room.
The elderly doctor enters, explaining that he has come at Eureka's request. Jaden springs up in alarm upon hearing that the child is complaining of severe stomach pain.
Mariel tends to the girl in another room while the doctor suggests checking Jaden's health as well. The Count dismisses his own discomfort, ordering the physician to focus entirely on the child's recovery.
Dr. Brown insists on the exam, noting Mariel's personal worry over the food she prepared for him.
Jaden finally relents to the pressure, allowing the doctor to begin a thorough medical evaluation.
A soft clack sounds as the doctor opens his case filled with various medicinal tinctures.
The physician takes the Count's pulse, reflecting on the chaotic nature of the night's events.
Jaden remains skeptical of the need for an exam, convinced his issues are merely digestive.
His eyes widen in shock as a sudden, grim realization begins to dawn on him. Dr. Brown looks horrified as he delivers a grave warning about the Count's actual condition.
Dark vertical lines emphasize the doctor's claim that Jaden has been suffering for a long time.
The room falls into a stunned silence as the doctor reveals Jaden has been systematically poisoned.
Disbelief hangs in the air as the Count struggles to process the terrifying news.
A desperate cry against such cruelty echoes through the narrative.
The scene shifts to the serene exterior of a glass conservatory nestled among the trees.
Mariel is outraged, realizing that even the family doctor was complicit in faking Sela's illness.
Eureka listens intently as Mariel confirms that Sally Linisht has been perfectly healthy all along.
A dark flashback reveals Sela's plot to manipulate the Count and steal the family fortune through poison.
Eureka reflects on the narrow escape, wondering what fate would have befallen her uncle otherwise. Narrative text expresses relief that the truth came to light despite the pain of past losses.
Eureka silently thanks Renat for the vital information that allowed her to act.
The text explains the lethal nature of the slow-acting poison as it builds up in the body. A younger Dr. Brown explains that the toxin is specifically designed to bypass standard medical checkups.
The rare and expensive nature of the substance suggests a highly calculated and wealthy conspirator.
In a past meeting, Eureka asks the doctor for a way to expose the hidden poison.
He reveals that a specific southern plant will trigger a detectable reaction in any poisoned individual.
Back in the present, Eureka smiles into her tea, glad she hid the plant in Jaden's sandwich.
Mariel checks on her, and Eureka sheepishly admits that her own stomach pain was just a clever ruse.
Mariel shares a warm smile, mentioning that her uncle's recent letter was full of concern for Eureka.
The blonde woman happily announces that Jaden is returning to the capital specifically to thank the child.
Eureka is puzzled when Mariel adds that the Count has a special destination in mind for them.
A single candle flickers within a shadowy corridor, marking the start of a new chapter.
The blonde Count walks down the hallway.
Eureka follows Jaden down the dark stairs, wondering where he could be leading her at this hour. Jaden warns the child about the dim light, and she cautiously agrees to be careful.
Eureka stares in surprise as they arrive. Jaden reveals that this gallery is where the portraits of the Modeste Duke family heads are kept.
He introduces a grand portrait of the current head of the family, Oscar Modeste.
Eureka and the Count stand together before the large, ornate painting.
Jaden explains that Oscar is Mariel's father who tragically disappeared during the war. Eureka is struck by the Duke's powerful and commanding aura.
Looking at the many warriors on the wall, she realizes the family's legendary military history is real.
The Count confesses that he deeply admired his brother-in-law and followed him like a real brother.
He admits that he habitually visits this room whenever something significant happens in his life.
Facing the portrait, Jaden vows that he will never forget the kindness Eureka has shown him. He bluntly states that he would have surely died of poisoning if not for her intervention.
Flustered, Eureka tries to wave his gratitude away as nothing more than a lucky coincidence.
Jaden recalls his past role as her escort when she was taken to the temple for baptism. He remembers his sister's strong refusal to allow the baby to be baptized. Despite his sister's insistence on keeping her at home, he had insisted on taking the baby out.
A dark memory shows Jaden waking from an attack to find that Eureka had already vanished. He realizes now that he had always been suspicious of the Linisht family for many reasons.
He admits that his own guilt led him to overlook everything Sally did while she stood for Eureka.
The Count credits Eureka for finally pulling him out of his fixation on the past.
With a sincere and calm heart, he offers Eureka his genuine thanks.
He continues, asserting that everything worked out for the better because she considered him family.
Jaden resolves to stop repeating his old mistakes and do his best for the child standing before him. He asks to get along well, feeling relieved to have such a clever ally by his side.
Eureka beams with a radiant smile. Jaden looks on with a steady gaze.
Eureka addresses him as Uncle, catching the blonde man completely by surprise.
He demands she call him Uncle forever, finding the formal title, Count, too cold for a nephew.
As they head back, Jaden blushes while Eureka finds his flustered reaction to be very cute.
Eureka pauses as she notices the decor.
She asks why the hallway is lined with so many paintings of different animals.
Jaden shares the old legend that the ancestors of the Modeste family were actually beastmen.
The child stares in awe at the mystery.
On a distant battlefield, a bloodied knight despairs as their path is completely cut off by the enemy. Suddenly, a blinding flash of blue light pierces through the darkness of the battle. A massive surge of blue lightning tears through the sky with a thunderous boom.
The soldiers are baffled, wondering where such powerful magic came from so far from the front lines. Prince Hired appears, his silver armor covered in blood as he wields devastating lightning magic.
Though successful, the exhausted prince reflects that he only used the magic because they were facing certain death. Hayard coughs from the strain, explaining that his magic is now too disrupted to be used again. He orders his men to retreat and regroup while the third unit handles the final cleanup. A knight hesitantly asks if they should avoid disturbing the wild beasts in the area.
He explains that the army has avoided the local animals ever since the Duke of Modeste went missing.
The soldier recounts rumors from the ranks about the missing duke transforming into a massive tiger. Hayard smirks, agreeing to keep the secret but admitting he saw the transformation with his own eyes.
Back in safety, Eureka is stunned by the weight of these revelations.
As his men support him, the prince considers the strange turns his life has taken.
He chuckles to himself, imagining how Momo would surely try to take credit for his victory.
The chubby squirrel-like creature poses heroically.
He imagines her taking credit for his magic. The bloodied prince smiles through the exhaustion. He vows to repay her kindness forever.
He resolves to stay by her side.
Eureka grows through various happy encounters. She waves cheerfully to the smiling Malgers.
Eureka offers some acorns to the squirrel. Jaden makes sure she stays warm on side.
They look out over the peaceful grounds.
Mariel reads the incoming news with intent. Sunlight fills the quiet, ornate room.
She looks completely stunned by the message.
Mariel announces that a telegram just arrived.
Eureka waits for the news with anticipation. She joyfully proclaims that the war is over.
Evening light filters through the grand chamber.
Eureka calls out for Renat Tanter.
The silver-haired doctor stands ready to help.
He assures them that she is recovering well.
Renat explains the dosage change as the blonde woman expresses her relief.
He promises to be a dedicated physician. The blonde woman trusts him because of Eureka.
Renat is honored for his medical genius.
He rejects high salaries to serve Modeste.
He officially becomes the family's new physician.
Eureka is delighted by her mother's improvement.
She thanks Renat while he acts humble.
Renat recalls her childhood support printing.
He remains grateful while Eureka feels proud.
Eureka reflects on changing the original story. The blonde woman wonders why Mariel was onset.
Renat mentions seeing Mariel looking quite unwell.
Eureka focuses on the potential trouble brewing.
She wonders if a specific event happened.
Morning light shines through the bedroom window.
Mariel reads the news with a sigh. She contemplates how to handle the situation.
Eureka approaches her with a soft gaze. She asks if Mariel is reading again. Eureka notes the widespread happiness regarding peace.
Mariel agrees that the return of peace is wonderful.
Eureka senses Muriel's inner turmoil and worry.
Narrative reveals the marriage alternative offered to Mariel.
A new hero has emerged following the war. Joan Hyrad has awakened as a powerful liege.
Mariel's heart is already occupied by another.
She is deeply in love with Prince Raymond.
Eureka empathizes with her sister's difficult conflict.
She notices Mariel's persistent and heavy sign. Eureka asks if Mariel's distress stems from her impending marriage to the war hero.
Mariel admits Eureka is right after the child claims to see the truth written on her face.
Mariel reflects on her duty and her long struggle to suppress feelings for Prince Raymond.
The blonde woman laments that her secret emotions only cause a burden for those around her. She confesses to feeling pathetic for being unable to celebrate peace due to her personal despair.
Mariel apologizes for her heavy mood, but Eureka offers her complete and warm understanding.
Eureka recognizes Johann as no villain, yet understands Mariel cannot love him.
The narrative emphasizes the tragedy of Mariel being forced into a marriage with someone she doesn't love. Visions of a somber wedding highlight the pain of burying one's true love for the sake of duty. Eureka resolves to change the tragic fate of her sister, Johann, and the Crown Prince. Determined pink eyes signal Eureka's resolve to find a better path.
Mariel weeps in silence over her impossible situation. A brief memory of past happiness in the fields flashes through her mind.
Fireworks burst over the city while a celebratory pop sounds through the air.
Jubilant citizens cheer for the war hero who brought peace to Beland.
Discussion among the crowd turns toward the mysterious magician from Hyrad.
An official notice features a portrait of the dark-haired war hero in armor.
Villagers clarify that the hero is the first prince, not his younger brother Tezin.
Rumors describe the hero as a terrifying mage with a murderous gaze that people avoid. Other rumors paint a different picture of an incredibly handsome and young future duke.
He is hailed by some as a beautiful young hero.
The public eagerly awaits his return to the city.
Joan Hyrad rides his horse through the massive stone castle gates.
A knight informs Johann that the time for the royal procession has finally arrived. The dark-haired hero calmly acknowledges the command as they prepare to move.
Orders are given for all troops to begin their grand march into the capital city.
Johann rides toward the bright exit of the castle.
The city erupts in cheers as the triumphant army proceeds down the main street.
Curious onlookers catch their first glimpse of the celebrated man as he passes.
Joan Hyrad appears in full silver armor, looking every bit the legendary war hero.
A young boy with a squirrel on his shoulder watches the procession in awe. The child finds the passing hero to be incredibly cool.
Johann notices the child and uses a small playful flash of magic.
A magical acorn appears in the boy's hands, leaving him completely stunned.
A nearby soldier laughs, explaining the acorn is a personal gift from the hero himself.
The soldier reveals that Johann took special care of squirrels and their habitats throughout the war.
Johan looks back at the crowd with a gentle, violet-eyed gaze. He keeps a simple acorn in his armored palm as a reminder.
The hero continues his steady march forward toward the palace.
Back in the manor, Eureka prepares to share a new plan with her sister.
Eureka boldly suggests they work together to stop Muriel's marriage to the hero.
Muriel worries about the Emperor's contract, but Eureka acknowledges the military service exemptions.
Eureka points a finger as she hits on the perfect solution to their problem.
The child presents a blank sheet of paper, ready to change the narrative of their lives.
Mariel is baffled by the idea of succeeding without touching the formal contract.
Eureka places her hand on the table, signaling the start of their secret scheme.
The brown-haired child grabs a quill and prepares to dictate a clever letter. From above, the sisters begin composing their strategic message to the war hero.
They start the letter by thanking him for finally ending the long and arduous war.
The quill moves across the paper with a soft and steady scratch. The message discusses the impending marriage between the war hero and Princess Modeste.
A formal request is sent for confirmation regarding the marriage agreement. A hand holding a jeweled quill pauses over the parchment paper.
Mariel questions the awkward phrasing of her own name in the draft.
Eureka explains that the wording is meant to detach Mariel from the town.
Eureka suggests that the title of Princess Modeste now applies to more than one person.
Mariel realizes with shock that Eureka intends to take her place in the contract.
Mariel protests the perceived sacrifice, but Eureka remains firm and calm.
The brown-haired girl gazes out with a look of quiet resolve. Eureka credits the Modeste family for making her who she is today.
She asks to share the weight of the family's heavy responsibilities.
A radiant and confident smile spreads across Eureka's face.
Eureka playfully assures her sister that the matter will be settled easily.
Mariel clutches her skirts, overcome with gratitude for her sister's help.
The blonde woman remains worried that Eureka will face unnecessary hardship.
Eureka pulls her sister into a comforting and warm embrace. Eureka smirks as she thinks of the secret advantage she has.
Narrative reveals that the original story's obsession has already been completely derailed.
Flashbacks show how Eureka changed Johann's childhood by caring for him.
Eureka believes her past kindness has made Johann a better person. She recalls teasing Johann about being his ultimate life-saving benefactor.
The completed letter is ready to be sent to the war hero. She wonders if they will finally be able to meet again.
Eureka looks forward to seeing how much Johann has changed.
A glowing orb in the night sky reflects her wondering thoughts.
Stars shine brightly over the sprawling and silent castle grounds.
A hand holds up a single acorn against the crescent moon.
Johann gazes at the acorn, wondering where Momo is located now.
The black-haired man feels lost on where to start a search.
A blue-haired man enters the room to address Johann.
He reports that the Duchess and Prince Tezen are now imprisoned.
The assistant presents a new letter that just arrived from Modeste.
Johann accepts the envelope, his expression turning cold and sharp.
A sharp rip sounds as Johann angrily crumples the paper in his fist. He scoffs at the very idea of a marriage proposal.
Johann prioritizes his own feelings over the political influence of high society.
He trusts that the person he loves knows his true, kind nature.
The blue-haired assistant stares back with a completely bewildered expression.
Johann fears that Momo might misunderstand his connection to the Modeste family.
He decides to go to the Modeste estate immediately the next day.
Johann assumes the family is being overly pushy about the marriage.
He resolves to demand an annulment to prevent any further talk.
An ornate wooden door is left standing slightly open.
Eureka sits on the floor of the hallway lined with paintings.
She finds herself drawn back to the gallery of animal portraits.
The hallway is her preferred place for quiet and deep reflection. The silent eyes of the painted beasts seem to offer her comfort.
Eureka's face is illuminated by a soft, thoughtful light.
She speaks to the portrait of the Duke, announcing the war's end. Eureka informs the blonde man in the painting about the returning peace. The woman acknowledges that the end of the war is personally significant.
Dark imagery underscores the fear that the temple will resume its mysterious activities.
The brown-haired woman recalls the temple's deceit regarding her magical abilities.
A dark-haired man wonders if the temple's lies were a ploy to reclaim him.
Eureka searches family archives but finds only generic legends about her beastkin ancestors.
Narratives link ancient beastkin legends with the temple's management of divine creatures.
Eureka decides to verify her suspicions despite her hopes that they are unfounded.
Startled in the hallway, Eureka prepares to head upward immediately.
She looks upward with realization.
A man wears medals and fur.
A shout of surprise echoes across the Grand Palace courtyard.
Mariel is stunned to hear that Lord Johann has arrived at the manor.
The blonde woman is panicked that he appeared without any prior notification.
A maid reports the visitor's urgent demand to meet as Mariel reels in shock.
Mariel paces frantically, fearing the hero is rushing to demand their marriage.
She wonders if Johann fell in love at first sight while the maid attempts to call her.
Mariel desperately wishes for Eureka's presence to help handle the unexpected situation.
She remembers that Eureka is currently occupied visiting their mother with Renat.
Fearful of worrying her mother, Mariel resolves to face the visitor love.
A maid brings an urgent message from Eureka that Mariel demands to see. A hand holds a cursed blare. Renat informs Eureka that the war hero has arrived at the Modeste estate.
Eureka instructs Mariel via the letter to stall for time until she can arrive.
Mariel's pink eyes widen in shock as she reads the instructions.
The blonde woman stares at the parchment in complete confusion.
They stand before a grand door.
Renat expresses his gratitude for the lady's assistance with the medical treatment.
He suggests sharing tea, but Eureka declines, citing her need to attend to a guest.
Eureka and Renat sprout playful dog ears as she explains her urgent need to leave.
Renat notes Eureka's sudden paleness, though she claims to be unaware of any change.
Eureka panics internally, completely unprepared for Johan's sudden arrival.
She asks Renat if he possesses a medicine that could make her appear sickly.
Eureka explains her need to look pitiful as Renat ponders if such a drug exists.
Renat enthusiastically presents his medical bag, confirming he has exactly what she needs. He introduces a drug that reverses mana flow to ruin one's complexion, guaranteeing its safety.
Eureka questions why he would ever invent such a strange and specific substance.
Renat admits he planned to use the drug to fake an illness and avoid academy duties.
Eureka is unsettled by the revelation that kind people can be quite devious when motivated. After Renat reassures her with his personal testing, Eureka accepts the vial with thanks.
She drinks the pink medicinal liquid.
Renat asks for her reaction, and Eureka notes the taste is surprisingly decent.
A sudden and intense wave of dizziness washes over Eureka.
Eureka nearly collapses as the effects hit much faster and harder than Renat anticipated.
Her face flushes from the dreck.
Eureka asks to be held for support while a blushing Renat complies.
She eventually signals that she has recovered enough to walk on her own. Despite her thanks, Renat remains deeply concerned about her poor physical state.
Renat worries the effect is too strong and tries to check her condition again. A man steps into the room planning to demand an annulment from the Emperor.
The blonde woman is left stunned by the sudden mention of an annulment.
The black-haired man prepares to leave.
Eureka stares ahead with focused intensity.
Renat supports the unsteady brown-haired woman.
Johan questions why the pair is peasant. Mariel resolves to stall for time.
She aims to discourage his interest.
Determination fuels her as footsteps approach.
Johan enters abruptly, startling the staff.
Johan cold-heartedly greets the blonde woman. Mariel expresses shock at his arrival.
Surprise reflects in her wide eyes.
They face each other in silence.
Mariel perceives his aura as much more intimidating.
She panics at his cold gaze and resolves to follow Eureka's clan.
Mariel criticizes his rude and unannounced appearance.
Johan accepts her bluntness assessment.
Johan rejects any obligation toward the woman.
He refuses to waste any words.
A bold proposal to call off the engagement is delivered.
The blonde woman is utterly speechless.
Johan remains firm despite her shock.
Mariel enthusiastically accepts his unexpected proposal.
Johan suggests drafting the paperwork immediately.
He dictates the formal annulment terms.
Mariel questions the Hyrad faction's motives.
She wonders if something was overlooked.
Mariel requests he wait for Eureka.
Johan refuses any further family contact.
He calls the connection burdensome, insulting her. Mariel bristles at his arrogant dismissal.
A quick clack sounds as she slams the pen down.
Johan adds a finality clause as Mariel agrees.
He demands that titles remain formally specific.
The signed document rests on the desk.
Mariel demands he keeps word.
Johan promises to uphold his decision.
He begins to walk away quietly.
A sharp creak sounds as the door opens.
Mariel celebrates the easy and successful resolution.
Johan focuses on finding Momo after the easy annulment.
A sudden realization dawns upon the black-haired man.
Johan recognizes the brown-haired woman as Weller.
Absolute shock fills his violet eyes.
His hand trembles as he questions her identity. Mariel gleefully informs Eureka that their problem is solved. Eureka reassures Renat of her well-being.
Muriel confirms the finality of the annulment as Johan stares in paralyzed horror. Mariel mocks his awful character while noting his reliability.
The war hero is left utterly stunned. Eureka politely requests a moment at this time.
Eureka reflects on her successful human transformation.
Johan acknowledges her words with a quiet, observant time.
Johan shares his relief at her safe return and his long-held curiosity about her well-being.
Eureka laments their abrupt parting and her own uncertainty during their time apart.
She warmly welcomes him back, glad to see him unharmed.
A soft sound of a tear falling.
Johan smiles, noting her kind heart remains the same.
Eureka reflects on how she was once his only source of support and family.
She realizes he has gained a whole new family in her absence.
Johan clarifies that those new family members are also by her side.
Johan questions the identity of the man she was seen with previously.
Eureka cheerfully identifies Renat as her friend and the local physician.
She reveals her past in an orphanage prior to her adoption into the Modeste family.
Eureka asks Johan to keep her history secret, fearing the temple's previous interest in her.
Johan reassures her that he will handle the temple's interference.
Eureka suddenly feels a wave of nausea and asks to summon Wadat. A sharp gasp escapes Johan. Johan cries out Momo in a panic as she disappears from her clothes.
A confused squeak sounds as an oral squirrel suddenly sits within the empty dress.
Muriel expresses her relief that the engagement was settled without any major conflict.
She vents her frustrations about Johan's arrogance and worries for Eureka's safety.
Renat asks if Eureka's earlier sickly appearance was a genuine sign of illness.
Renat explains that the pollard was merely a side effect of a requested potion.
Muriel is surprised by the drug's effectiveness. Renat mentions that Eureka's condition seemed to genuinely worsen after the dose.
Mariel reacts with a shocked "What?"
Renat begins to fret that he may have botched the medical prescription.
Johan sits in bewildered silence beside the pile of empty clothing.
Reverting to her animal form, the squirrel panics at the unexpected transformation.
A soft rustle sounds.
Eureka is horrified to find herself a squirrel again after 5 human years. She realizes the potion's magic-disrupting properties likely caused her to revert.
The tiny creature looks up at the massive Ran.
Johan wonders aloud why she's suddenly turned back into a squirrel.
He notes how much she has grown while she makes the same observation about him.
The squirrel fits snugly within the palms of Johan's much larger hands.
She squeaks indignantly, trying to correct him that her name is Eureka, not Momo.
Johan wonders if she wants to turn back, while Eureka sighs at their lack of communication.
Johan gazes tenderly at her. Eureka resolves to transform back into a human so they can finally talk.
A warm glow begins to emanate from the squirrel.
A shimmering light signals change.
Eureka is relieved to find the potion's effect was only temporary.
A sudden, sharp realization strikes the squirrel.
She panics, realizing she will be naked upon returning to human form.
Eureka frets over her lack of clothing in this tiny state.
The squirrel leaps away as a confused Johan tries to understand. She screams internally, desperate to halt the transformation.
Eureka suddenly reappears as a human, looking utterly mortified.
A bright blush spreads across Johan's face as he turns away awkwardly.
Eureka desperately clutches her dress, screaming for him not to look while blushing intensely.
A sudden clatter rings out in the hallway as Renat and Mariel stop in their tracks, startled by the noise. Mariel urgently notes that the scream sounded like Eureka and asks if something could have happened to her.
Footsteps thump rapidly as the pair races toward the room in a state of panic.
A sharp knock sounds as Mariel desperately calls out for Eureka.
Inside, Johan sits blushing while clutching Eureka's shoulder, both of them looking utterly stunned.
Mariel begs her sister to hold on while Eureka frantically tells Johan to hurry up. Hands fumble nervously as they struggle with the intricate laces of her dress.
Outside, the pair notes that both voices sound incredibly strange and that Lord Hyrod seems uncharacteristically flustered. Renat decides that they must enter immediately, regardless of manners, fearing a true emergency.
A creak signals the door opening as Mariel prepares to face the scene. Bursting into the room, Renat announces their arrival as they rush to assist her.
Both the gray-haired man and the blonde woman are frozen in complete shock by what they see.
Eureka casually adjusts her hair and asks why they've suddenly barged in, while a mortified Johan hides his face.
Eureka sighs in relief internally, feeling she nearly aged a decade from the fear of being exposed. Renat asks if they are all right since they look breathless, but Eureka lies and claims she was just enjoying the sunshine on the terrace.
She laughs off their concern, reassuring them that her complexion has returned to normal.
Eureka asks Renat for more of the pale complexion potion, prompting him to wonder why she needs so much.
She vaguely explains that she might need it occasionally and thanks him for agreeing to prepare it.
Now that her health is confirmed, Eureka politely asks them to leave so she can finish her discussion with Johan.
Renat and Mariel stand dejected in the hallway after being dismissed so quickly.
Renat observes that Johan actually looks like the one in worse health after the encounter.
He suggests that the man might be the one in need of medical treatment instead.
Johan remains dazed, fixated on the memory of Momo transforming back into a human right before his eyes.
He struggles to process the fact that she returned to her human form while he was so close.
A deep blush spreads across Johan's face as he averts his eyes, overwhelmed by the memory.
Eureka places a gentle hand on his shoulder and calls his name to bring him back to the present.
She apologizes for the shock of the sudden transformation, realizing it must have been quite intense for him.
Eureka sheepishly admits she forgot how the process worked since it has been a long time since her last transformation.
Johan asks for clarification on why she reverted to a squirrel earlier and what exactly happened.
Eureka admits she isn't entirely certain of the cause, but she has a strong guess.
She asks if Johan is willing to help her test her theory, and he immediately agrees.
She mentions his upcoming victory celebration at the temple as the perfect opportunity. Eureka proposes that he take her along, hidden safely in his arms in her squirrel form.
The night sky hangs over the Grand Cathedral as the narrator notes the war ended much sooner than expected. In a dimly lit laboratory, a red-haired woman and a man discuss the birth of a new hero following the creation of a powerful elixir. The man marvels at the eldest son of Hyrod's hidden magical talent, while the woman suggests the divine beast might have humanized. The man questions if the beast was dead, but the woman confirms the presence of the Hyrod crest.
They discuss the suspicious appearance of the Mediste family's adopted daughter and the ease of faking a crest.
The man touches his head in frustration, noting they are no longer easy targets now that Johan is a war hero.
The red-haired woman resolves to step in directly and investigate the matter herself.
A carriage clatters along the busy town street, carrying its passenger through the crowd.
A blond man watches the passing scenery from the window of his carrots.
He reads a newspaper detailing how Johan Hyrod broke off his engagement upon arriving at the capital.
He thinks of how he left immediately out of concern for the children, yet Johan still beat him to the estate.
The man worries that things were resolved far too easily and wonders if there is more to the story.
A noisy murmur drifts from the street, catching the blonde man's attention. Two local women gossip about the shocking events surrounding the Hyrod ducal family.
They whisper about how Johan locked the Duchess and Baron Tezen in an underground prison.
The news confirms that he has ascended as the new duke and dismissed the entire former staff.
The blonde-haired man in the carriage thinks that Johan's treatment of his stepmother was cruel, regardless of her character, and reflects on the family's complexity.
He reads a news report about Duke Hyrod requesting a victory celebration at the temple after previously refusing one, which the article notes as a contradiction.
A close-up reveals his wide-eyed, shocked expression. He reads another article reporting that the Duke has been visiting Lady Eureka daily after their breakup, wondering what the reason for such unusual behavior could be.
The blonde-haired man is visibly shocked and distressed, questioning if Johan is planning to reverse the engagement annulment.
He gazes at a dark-haired man in a thought bubble, wondering if the engagement really wasn't annulled after all.
He thinks about using magic to turn back time while lost in thought, until Eureka calls out his name to get his attention.
Eureka admits she didn't realize he had refused all victory celebrations and apologizes for asking him to accompany her without a specific reason.
A chibi-style panel shows Eureka apologizing for the trouble her request cost, but Johan dismisses it as being perfectly fine. Eureka worries that his actions will cause people to misunderstand him as someone who pokes at the temple, but Johan smiles gently and says he doesn't care.
She wonders why there are so many strange rumors about such a kind person as Johan informs her that the victory celebration is scheduled for next month.
Eureka plans to conduct more experiments with Renat's elixir before they attend the event and mentions another detail she needs to discuss.
Johan explains that the imperial family has announced a victory banquet that will take place earlier than the temple's scheduled event.
Eureka's wide pink eyes convey her shock.
Johan notes that the crown prince wouldn't simply stand by and let things happen as a silhouette of a man in uniform appears behind a scale.
Chibi Eureka explains that she advised Johan to accept the banquet invitation if the topic was raised.
Johan starts to call her by her old name but quickly corrects himself to Eureka while looking slightly hesitant. Johan stares at her with a gentle expression while holding his tea.
Johan looks away with a flustered blush.
Eureka mentions that she is still deciding on her partner and has a short list of men she is familiar with.
Johan freezes mid-sip, appearing deeply unsettled by her mention of being familiar with other men. A dark aura surrounds Johan as he asks with a forced smile who those familiar men could be.
Eureka points directly at him and names him as her first candidate. Johan is stunned and questions if she means him, while Eureka enthusiastically confirms it.
She explains that attending together would normalize the situation even if her sister and the prince are partners, strengthening her family's standing.
She continues, noting that attending as the main guest's partner would provide further benefits.
A silhouette depicts a couple making a grand entrance into a crowded ballroom.
Johan looks serious as he realizes that his protection would make it difficult for the temple to deal with her.
Eureka looks shaken as she recalls the hardships she faced because of the temple's actions.
She frantically stops Johan from doing anything destructive, arguing they need to investigate the temple to find the full truth.
Eureka sternly warns him not to even dream of acting out, and Johan quickly agrees to listen.
Chibi Eureka watches him with a skeptical expression, wondering if he actually understands her warning.
Their conversation is interrupted by a sudden, loud noise from outside the room.
A loud, forceful shout of "Rika" sounds as the door is kicked open.
Eureka stands up in surprise, recognizing the voice of the person who just arrived.
The blonde-haired man bursts through the door in a panic, desperately asking if she is all right.
He yells about the nuisance of a hero who has been clinging to her, appearing very angry. Eureka is shocked to see her uncle, while the black-haired man watches the scene unfold from his seat.
Eureka stares in complete, wide-eyed disbelief.
The blonde-haired man's anger turns to shock as he realizes the person he was just insulting is sitting right in front of him.
The scene refocuses on the blonde-haired man bursting into the room to check on Eureka's safety.
The man stands frozen in the doorway as an awkward silence fills the room.
Johan begins to ask who the intruder is, but Eureka interjects by calling out to her uncle to stop him.
Johan's eyes widen in genuine shock at the realization that the man is her uncle.
Eureka asks why he barged in so suddenly, and her uncle explains he was worried about the rumors of Johan's daily visits.
Eureka introduces them, and her uncle offers a polite, albeit awkward, greeting.
Johan formally introduces himself as Johan Hyrod with a pleasant smile.
Jaden looks on in silent, stunned realization.
He introduces himself as Jaden Albert while shaking Johan's hand, thinking the rumors about the man were very misleading.
Jaden tries to address his earlier behavior and Johan dismisses it, acknowledging that the news reports might have caused misunderstandings.
Johan thinks to himself that if he wants to even consider bringing up the topic of marriage again, he would really like to explain everything to her directly first.
Johan calmly suggests that they should all sit down and have a conversation together before anything else happens. Jaden observes Johan and thinks that the man is actually much more normal and composed than he had expected him to be.
Jaden sits down and asks the two of them if they had already known each other from a previous time.
Eureka happily confirms this, explaining that Johan helped her out in a very significant way when she was much younger.
She elaborates that they lost contact when Johan went off to war, so he was quite excited to finally reconnect with her when they met again.
Jaden thanks Johan for helping Eureka in the past, and Johan humbly replies that he has also received a great deal of help from Eureka himself. Jaden admits that knowing they already share a connection puts him at ease, though his expression remains somewhat guarded. Jaden tops the table with a quick, rhythmic top and asks if he might inquire about what was recently reported in the newspapers.
He explains that he loves his nieces and nephews dearly and simply wants to clear up any rumors or information that is currently bothering him.
Johan tells him to feel free to ask anything he wants while Eureka watches the exchange with a nervous, wide-eyed expression.
Jaden points to a report and asks if the claim about Johan canceling the victory ceremony and then suddenly changing his mind is actually true.
Eureka is visibly startled and shouts out that the change in plans was entirely because of her.
A chibi version of Eureka in her squirrel form panics, thinking she absolutely cannot reveal the truth about being a divine beast in this moment.
Johan explains that he made the request to reinstate the event to honor the hard work and sacrifice of the soldiers, and Eureka thinks he is handling the questions very well.
Jaden considers the explanation for a moment and decides that the reason given makes perfect sense. Eureka's eyes widen as she notices another specific article and points it out to the two men.
The newspaper headline states that Duke Hyrad imprisoned his stepmother and half-sibling in a dungeon, and Johan looks on with a cold, serious gaze.
The three of them remain seated around the tea table, the atmosphere growing more serious as they discuss the family scandals.
Jaden notes that dismissed servants claimed the Duchess provided Eureka with medical care, but Eureka's painful memories reveal that the treatment was actually a form of torment.
Eureka gently calls out to her uncle to get his attention and steer the conversation.
She tells him that family matters are something only those involved can truly understand, and asks him to judge Johan by his own experiences rather than by rumors.
Eureka insists that Johan is a good person and much kinder than the articles portray him, causing Johan to look at her with a touched, grateful expression. Jaden watches Eureka's face closely, taking in the sincerity and conviction in her eyes as she defends the Duke. Johan thanks Eureka for her support, and Jaden privately concludes that seeing him in person makes the Duke seem like a decent and respectable man. Jaden offers another apology for acting rudely based on rumors, and Johan tells him it is fine and that he is grateful for the chance to explain.
Jaden suggests they put the matter to rest, but as he moves his papers, Johan's attention is caught by something else on the table.
Johan points to a specific book and asks what it is, and Jaden realizes he is looking at something personal.
Jaden explains that it is a scrapbook filled with articles featuring Mariel and Eureka that he has kept over the years. In a chibi-style panel, Jaden excitedly asks Johan if he would like to take a look at the little Eureka scrapbook, and Johan leans in with curiosity.
Jaden points out an article from the first time Eureka visited an orphanage, and Eureka is relieved to see the two men bonding over the book.
Eureka notices a different, separate news sheet sitting on the table and looks at it curiously.
She asks her uncle what the document is, and Jaden explains it is a news sheet from the Eastern region that he brought along just in case.
He adds that the news contained on that sheet has not yet been published in the capital newspapers.
The document details the engagement of Prince Theodore, who reportedly fell in love at first sight with a woman named Ravina Sevs from an emerging noble family.
Eureka is completely frozen in shock as she reads the name of Prince Theodore's new fiancé.
She recalls that Theodore was the ambitious half-brother of the crown prince who eventually betrayed Johan in the original version of the story.
Eureka's eyes are wide with alarm as she thinks that she has never heard of Ravina Sevs before and wonders if this was even part of the original narrative.
Jaden asks if she is interested in the prince's engagement, and Eureka admits she is just curious because she has never heard of the Sevs family.
Jaden agrees it is strange that an imperial engagement would be so quiet while Johan asks Eureka if she is feeling all right.
Eureka realizes that if this news is true and the engagement is announced at the banquet, the star of the event will be different than expected. Johan looks at her and confirms the name of the man who will be the center of attention is Prince Theodore.
He tops the image of the woman on the paper and notes that Theodore will be the star along with whoever he brings as his partner. Eureka worries that this development will ruin her current plans and reflects on who her own partner should be to counter this.
Jaden is startled when Eureka suddenly speaks up with a look of intense determination on her face.
Eureka looks directly at Johan and asks him if he will be her partner for the upcoming victory banquet.
A heavy, rhythmic thud-thud of footsteps echoes through the empty, sunlit hallway of the grand estate. A sharp red drip sounds as a single drop of blood falls onto the ornate pattern of the carpet.
The red-haired woman, Ravina Sevs, bows her head and offers a formal greeting to the prince who stands by the window.
Prince Theodore turns his head slightly and welcomes his new fiancée to the room.
Johan asks if she brought the divine beast Squirrel.
The pair strolls to the Berber.
Eureka suggests that arriving as partners will cause gossip.
She contrasts his war hero status with her orphan background.
Johan suggests preparing a fake backstory for their Rito.
The black-haired man whispers her name with deep affection.
Johan worries she only sees him as a friend.
He fears a political marriage would prevent romantic feelings.
A detailed view of an ornate brooch.
Johan asks Eureka how she feels about his plan.
He holds her hand while mentioning breaking his engagement.
Johan confesses that he fell in love at first sight.
Eureka stares back in wide-eyed shock.
He explains his daily visits were driven by love.
Eureka calls his name in disbelief.
Eureka loves the cover story, but Johan realizes she doesn't believe his feelings.
Eureka suggests claiming they are lovers considering an engagement.
Johan blushes and asks if they could simply get engaged.
Eureka laughs and insists they wait for better timing. Eureka walks away satisfied while Johan follows in silence. Johan watches her with a pensive look.
He resolves to spend more time winning her heart. The grand manor stands against the sky.
Muriel notes the excitement for the upcoming victory banquet.
Muriel feels buried under a mountain of invitations. She explains she declined them all to hide her royal partnership.
Eureka agrees that keeping their romance quiet is wise.
A note confirms she gave her heart.
Muriel imagines the harsh public criticism they might face.
Eureka agrees that avoiding social parties is best. Eureka asks her sister if she is truly staying.
Muriel says she has reasons but encourages Eureka to socialize.
Eureka cheerfully states that she has Johan as a friend.
Mariel remains suspicious of the Duke's intense, beastly gaze. A sharp talk sounds as the cup is placed. Eureka jokingly reminds her sister that she is actually a beast.
Muriel panics and argues that cute squirrels aren't beasts.
Eureka smiles warmly at her sister's reaction.
Eureka reflects on being an animal living in human form.
She worries about having to leave if the real Eureka returns.
She gazes at her hidden reflection.
Eureka tells her sister she has an appointment.
Eureka promises to return after her secret tasks. Footsteps echo through the quiet city streets.
Cloaked in shadow, she monitors the temple's suspicious activities. A heavy creak sounds as the door opens.
She arrives at the headquarters of the History Neld.
Eureka lowers her hood and greets the guild members. Lean, the blue-haired guild leader, welcomes the lady.
Lean notes the perfect timing of her visit while Eureka orders tea.
At their meeting place, the blue-haired guild leader, Lean, asks what news she was meant to receive before reporting that malicious rumors are being spread about the lady.
In a dramatic silhouette, Lean details how the gossip labels the lady a spoiled, adopted daughter and a cunning orphan who tricked Mariel.
Lean reveals the source of these dark claims is Count Siev's household located in the eastern region.
Eureka's eyes narrow as she admits she suspected them immediately and worries if they have discovered the truth about her actual identity.
Sitting across from Lean, Eureka decides they must monitor the situation closely for temple involvement while letting the enemies move freely for now.
As a servant brings tea to the table, Lean shifts the subject to address a more personal concern with the lady.
Lean looks directly at her and warns that attending the victory banquet as the Duke's partner requires extreme caution.
Lean explains that mages are cunning and obsessed with sincerity, causing Eureka to pff as she sprays her tea in shock. In a playful moment, Eureka argues she is no longer a child, though Lean insists she still looks completely adorable and cute.
Smiling warmly, Eureka defends Johan by stating that despite how other mages act, he is a genuinely kind and good person.
Eureka stands up to leave for an evening appointment as Lean asks why she is departing so quickly.
Eureka promises to keep in touch as a rhythmic tack-tack sounds from her footsteps, while Lean calls out a final reminder to be careful.
Lean watches the empty space where Eureka was standing, her expression filled with lingering worry.
Walking through the city streets, Eureka thinks about how well things have gone so far while hoping nothing goes wrong during the upcoming banquet.
The Grand Imperial Palace stands illuminated against the bright sky, ready for the evening's festivities.
Inside the ballroom, the atmosphere is electric as dozens of noble couples dance under the massive chandeliers.
Guests whisper excitedly about the return of Prince Theodore Roulé from his period of recuperation in the East.
Standing tall with a glass of champagne, Prince Theodore Roulé is noted for looking far healthier than he did previously.
The crowd turns their attention to the red-haired woman by the prince's side, wondering about her mysterious background and her obvious favor from His Highness.
Theodore leans in to tell his red-haired partner that since his engagement is at stake, he expects a fruitful result from their arrangement.
Ravina smiles back at him and promises to handle her responsibilities with care and gratitude.
Drinking his champagne, Theodore claims he will handle any delays swiftly and reflects on his secret life as a mage being a fair exchange for the temple's help.
Ravina recalls how keeping Theodore's mage nature's secret prevented him from being sent to the war, allowing the temple to maintain influence over the crown.
Theodore notes that the calming potions provided by the temple have removed the need for mages to visit the holy site personally.
Ravina wonders how many times he will mention the creature before asking if there is truly a difference between the potions and a divine beast.
Looking at a golden vision of a squirrel, Theodore insists the first blessing he received from that specific divine beast was uniquely powerful. Ravina realizes the prince is surprisingly perceptive and knows the squirrel was a beast infused with the magic of Duke Medest. Theodore gazes into the distance, wishing he could experience the sensation of the divine beast's blessing just one more time.
A heavy thud-thud echoes through the hall, drawing the attention of both the prince and his fiancée toward the entrance.
The herald announces the arrival of Duke Johan Halard and Lady Eureka Medest as they step into the bright light of the ballroom.
Looking around at the massive crowd, Eureka notes that nearly every noble family has gathered for this first post-war victory celebration.
Eureka is startled when she overhears guests nearby complaining that her presence is an act of excessive extravagance.
Other guests gossip loudly, claiming the rumors about the adopted daughter not knowing her place must be true.
Eureka's eyes sharpen as she realizes the malicious rumors have already begun to spread the moment she arrived.
A brief moment of quiet follows as flowers frame the tension in the air.
Clad in her dark red gown, Eureka decides she will live up to their expectations by acting as extravagantly and rudely as the rumors claim.
Johan stands silently by her side, though his mind seems occupied by a different, unsettling thought.
Johan asks if she is alright, while a chibi Eureka panics internally about potentially harming his reputation at his very first banquet.
Eureka tells him she is grateful he agreed to be her partner and promises she will make it seem like he rejected her later to save his name.
Johan looks at her with deep affection, stating the honor is his and thinking how fortunate he is that chose him.
Johan's pensive look returns as he remembers a warning he received earlier about things not being as simple as they seem.
His blue-haired aide had explained that just finding someone to like isn't the end of the story, as love always involves conflict.
The aide warned him that at a ball full of young nobles, there is a high risk that others will fall for Eureka as well.
Johan's expression turns troubled as he realizes he will likely meet many rivals for her heart in a place like this. Back in the present, Eureka notices his distraction and asks if he is feeling unwell, but he quickly dismisses her concern.
With a sudden, protective movement, Johan pulls her closer and tells her to stay right by his side as he resolves to be more vigilant.
As they walk, Eureka asks if he is nervous, and he admits it might be true while asking if he can lean on her for support.
From across the room, Prince Theodore watches their close interaction with a silent, calculating gaze.
The king stands before the assembly and begins a formal speech about the great debt the empire owes to the brilliant Duke Johan Halard.
As Johan is called to the stage, he laments that he has already been separated from Eureka and wonders why the speech must happen now.
Eureka realizes she will be left on her own for a while as the Duke's romantic speech continues at length. She listens skeptically as the Emperor's speech highlights the Duke's respect for life after sparing his half-brother.
Eureka drifts away from the crowd while other nobles watch her pensive departure.
She is startled when she overhears malicious whispers labeling her a fake noble and an orphan. Noblewomen mock her for appearing more extravagant than Mariel, while predicting she will be cast out once the Duchess recovers.
A subtle, knowing smile plays on Eureka's lips despite the surrounding insults.
She admires the details of her dark red gown while deciding this is the perfect opportunity to start her plan.
The pink-haired Lady Eladri is stopped in her tracks by a sudden, firm presence.
Eureka confronts the group, noting they have been talking about her, which causes Lady Eladri to call her rude for eavesdropping. Eureka smiles warmly while pointing out that their loud gossiping was the real rudeness in the room. Eureka claims that Duke Halard is deeply infatuated with her, causing Lady Eladri to cry out in shock.
She asks how the lady will explain her behavior once Eureka eventually becomes the Duchess of Halard.
Furious, Lady Eladri asks if Eureka truly thinks she can be intimidated by such baseless threats.
A sudden splash echoes through the hall as Lady Eladri throws her champagne directly at Eureka.
The crowd watches in stunned silence as a mess is made on the ballroom floor. Lady Eladri screams about a fake ruining her dress until a red-haired woman offers a calm greeting.
Ravina Sebes introduces herself politely to the gathered intense group of nobles.
Ravina scolds them for causing a commotion during the Emperor's speech, while Eureka thinks the lady approached exactly as planned.
Ravina suggests resolving the matter silently to preserve the joyous occasion.
As a token of goodwill, Ravina offers a fresh glass of champagne to the lady.
Eureka stares at the offered glass with wide, suspicious eyes.
She worries that the drink might be dangerous if Ravina is truly connected to the temple.
Eureka thanks her for mediating but decides not to take any unnecessary risks. In a clever move, Eureka offers the champagne to Lady Eladri instead as a gesture of gratitude. Lady Eladri hesitates and stammers, clearly caught off guard by the request.
Eureka thinks her point has been made and begins to turn away from the scene.
A sudden, huh? Escapes Eureka's lips as someone approaches her from behind.
Prince Theodore stands beside her, looking tall and imposing in his ornate military attire. Lady Eladri and her companion bow deeply, greeting His Highness in a sudden panic.
Theodore tells the assembly that they shouldn't cause a commotion on such a good day.
He insists they focus on the Emperor's speech while Eureka wonders why the prince is stepping in personally. Theodore suggests putting the matter to rest as Eureka wonders if he is being used by Ravina. With a sudden movement, Theodore takes the champagne glass from Eureka's hand.
Their fingers briefly brush against each other as the glass is exchanged.
A sharp flinch ripples through the prince as he reacts to the contact with the lady.
Theodore stares at Eureka with a look of profound recognition and shock.
Eureka worries that the prince and Ravina are in on a plan together and feels there is nothing she can do.
Bowing her head, Eureka thanks him for his mediation and prepares to retreat for the moment.
A sudden firm thud echoes as Theodore catches her hand to prevent her from leaving.
Theodore looks her directly in the eye and asks for her name.
After she identifies herself as Eureka Modeste, she wonders if the prince intentionally brushed against her earlier.
Theodore studies her face closely and asks if they have met before. Chibi Eureka is internally bewildered by what she considers a very third-rate pickup line.
Theodore remains pensive as he watches the lady's confused reaction.
He eventually dismisses his own question, telling her never mind if she doesn't remember.
Theodore walks away with Ravina, telling Eureka they should talk again later.
Eureka stands in the middle of the ballroom, completely baffled by the interaction.
Her eyes widen as a terrifying possibility suddenly strikes her.
Chibi Eureka panics, wondering if seducing her is actually part of their grand plan. A low murmur sounds through the hall as the ceremony continues with Johann kneeling on the red carpet.
Close up on Johann's contemplative face.
Johann wonders if Theodore knows Eureka.
Ancient pact restricts magic against realty.
Johann vows to remain highly cautious. The banquet's opening speech finally concludes.
Eureka starts moving through the crowd.
Eureka runs toward Johann, calling him.
Johann is startled by her hug.
Eureka claims being apart was unbearable.
Johann feels flustered by her affection.
Eureka whispers for help firm.
Johann smiles warmly at his partner. A sudden romantic dip pose follows.
Johann calls her beautiful with sincerity.
He promises to fill her room with jewels.
Johann asks her to remember him.
Eureka finds his acting skills impressive. Music fills the room for dancing.
The couple gracefully joins the dance.
Johann asks about her link to Theodore.
Eureka finds the prince's companion suspicious.
Johann's gaze sharpens as he listens.
He warns her to avoid the prince.
Their feet move in perfect tonality.
They conclude their dance with elegance.
Johann notes their incredible shared synchronization.
Eureka believes Johann is a genius. Eureka's attention is snagged by gossip. Nobles mock the Duke's battlefield experience.
Johann contemplates retaliating against the Gossecks.
Eureka looks for an upcoming opening.
Prince Theodore announces he was news. Theodore confirms his engagement to Ravina.
Guests compare Ravina to other nobles.
Theodore praises Ravina's Eastern business success.
Ravina discusses the potentials trade. Ravina plots to destroy Eureka's reputation.
Eureka interrupts loudly, calling to Johann.
Ravina is startled by the interruption.
Eureka shouts her desire for engagement.
She asks Johann to engage Ter.
A sudden, loud call interrupts everything.
Ravina is confused and seeing.
Eureka demands an engagement right now.
Whispers fill the room about Eureka.
Ravina is furious at the interruption.
Ravina realizes Eureka stole the spotlight.
Ravina senses Eureka's deep-seated wariness.
Johann agrees to Eureka's bold request. Johann suggests marrying her immediately instead.
Lady Lella and the other noble women are overcome with shock at the sudden talk of marriage.
Eureka leans against Johann's chest and tells him that now is not the time for such displays.
Eureka describes her dream engagement in a garden by the sea while the surrounding nobles look on with intense annoyance.
Chibi Eureka internally worries that she may have been too convincing while acting alongside Johann.
A sudden rush of wind echoes as Mariel charges forward, horrified by how quickly the two are moving.
Mariel grabs Eureka and reminds her that she used to prefer someone kind and gentle.
She warns Eureka that she is merely blinded by a temporary spark and needs more time to think.
Mariel promises to find a more suitable partner, causing an irritated Johann to think her intervention is unnecessary.
Eureka argues that as the younger sibling, she should not be the first one to get engaged.
Mariel is taken aback as a tall, light-haired man approaches and agrees with Eureka's logic.
The man suggests that if they want to fulfill the Duke of Hyrad's wishes, they should move quickly.
Crown Prince Raymond Roelle formally proposes that he and Mariel get engaged immediately.
Raymond begins leading the stunned Mariel away to meet the king, while Johann happily watches them depart.
Muriel calls back to Eureka to reconsider, while Eureka waves her off with a cheerful goodbye.
Eureka is delighted that the focus of the banquet has successfully shifted toward Mariel's engagement.
The surrounding nobles begin gossiping about how serious the two couples seemed about each other.
A subtle, calculating look enters Eureka's eyes as she realizes her plan is working perfectly.
Prince Theodore and Ravina stand in the background, their own engagement news completely overshadowed by the commotion. Eureka wonders if she should finally seal the deal and conclude her current scheme.
Eureka calls out to Johann, who turns toward her with a look of surprise. Eureka asks Johann to prepare a specific engagement gift for her before anything else.
Johann is completely captivated by her adorable request and feels his heart race.
Johann leans in close and promises to do anything for her, leaving Eureka flustered by the proximity.
Eureka loudly mentions that she has heard great things about the quality of artificial leather.
She notes that modern artificial leather is ethical and indistinguishable from the real thing.
Eureka claims her family's legend of being beastkin makes it impossible for her to use products made by harming animals.
She expresses relief that an alternative exists while the other nobles listen with growing interest.
Eureka smirks, knowing that using real leather now makes the other socialites look arrogant and cruel compared to her.
A sudden rhythmic click of heels sounds as someone approaches the gathered crowd.
Eureka's blonde-haired uncle arrives at the banquet and is greeted warmly by his niece.
He displays a pair of high-quality artificial leather gloves, claiming they are almost perfect replicas. Theodore and Ravina watch the demonstration in a tense, brooding silence.
Theodore asks about their stock, while Ravina reveals they have already bought up all the real leather in the East.
The group realizes that Ravina's plan to profit from a leather monopoly has been ruined by this new alternative.
Johan remains standing alone by the ballroom doors, keeping a watchful eye on the entire assembly. Eureka and her uncle lean over a railing together, discussing how perfectly their move played out.
Eureka looks out at the ballroom with a satisfied smile, noting things went exactly as predicted.
A flashback shows Eureka meeting with a blue-haired guild member to learn about the Sevs family's leather hoard. Eureka explains that despite her uncle not being a major noble, he is a very successful merchant.
She notes that her uncle is influential enough to sway the opinions of the general public.
Chibi Eureka gloats over ruining the plan to use leather wealth to dominate the social circles. The uncle warns Eureka that he will be watching her next moves very closely.
He advises her not to let the baseless chatter of the socialites bother her too much. He reassures her that the gossip will eventually die down when it's on.
Eureka admits to herself that she is indeed very lucky to have such support.
Her uncle becomes flustered as Eureka continues her honest and humble assessment.
Eureka looks out at the night sky, thinking about how she is technically standing in someone else's place.
A look of sudden shock and realization ripples across Eureka's face.
Her uncle calls out her name gently, sensing her momentary distraction.
He tells her that while they call her Eureka for convenience, he has never considered her a mere stand-in.
Eureka's hands tremble against her dark red lace dress. A thought bubble reflects on being liked for who she truly is.
Eureka gazes out from the balcony with a wide-eyed, stunned expression. From off-screen, a voice offers to take action if she simply gives the command.
Johan looks down at Eureka as they stand together in the moonlight. He gently asks if she would prefer to go by a different name.
Eureka's feet come to an abrupt halt on the stone tiles. A quick, sharp gasp escapes her as Johan calls out her name from behind.
Johan offers a gentle, welcoming smile as Eureka approaches him. She asks if he has been waiting long, but he dismisses it and asks how her talk with the Count went.
Johan reveals that the Count was crying when he left. A small vision shows the blonde man sobbing into a handkerchief as he takes his leave.
Eureka explains to Johan that her uncle simply has a very soft heart. She suggests that Johan might have mistaken simple sweat for tears, as the man isn't usually prone to outbursts.
A sudden, sharp tisk sounds as Eureka turns her head toward Johan. He stands tall and silent beside her on the darkened balcony.
Johan leans against the stone railing and looks out at the night. He notes that the long banquet is finally drawing to a close. Eureka looks up at him with a satisfied expression, glad that things went better than they hoped. She believes their extended presence together will effectively bury any rumors about the second prince.
Eureka envisions the gossiping nobles below, imagining the scandal their private time together will create. She realizes the entire social circle is likely monitoring their every movement.
Eureka praises Johan for his hard work and his incredible performance during the banquet. Johan seems genuinely surprised by the compliment.
Johan leans in very close to Eureka, his face mere inches from hers. She notes that anyone watching would have been certain they were a real committed couple.
Eureka internally panics as the lines between acting and reality begin to blur. She admits to herself that the performance was so convincing she almost fell for it.
The scene focuses on the back of Johan's head as he remains silent. The stars twinkle in the dark sky behind them.
Johan stands before Eureka and admits that his behavior wasn't merely an act. A soft, quiet hush falls over the balcony as he reveals his sincerity.
A sudden cold whoosh of wind causes Eureka to shiver. Johan notices her discomfort and suggests they move, leaving her confused about what he just said.
Johan's hand reaches out as a soft rustle sounds. He begins to take off his heavy, decorated coat to offer it to her.
Johan drapes his coat over Eureka's shoulders, causing her to let out a surprised gasp. He stands close, his hands lingering on the fabric near her neck. Johan looks directly at Eureka and repeats that he was happy to help her. He firmly reiterates that the feelings he displayed were completely genuine.
Eureka stares at him in wide-eyed shock, her face turning pale. Johan confirms that he meant every single word he said to her throughout the day. A deep blush spreads across Eureka's cheeks as she looks away in embarrassment. Johan asks if she is cold and suggests heading back inside, to which she stammers in agreement.
A sudden, sharp stop sounds as Eureka freezes in place. She looks down over the edge of the balcony with a startled expression.
Close-up on Eureka's dilated pink eyes as she focuses intently on something. She wonders if she is actually hearing voices coming from below.
From their vantage point, Johan and Eureka spot Prince Theodore and Lady Sevs talking in a secluded area below. Eureka is shocked to see the two together at this late hour. Eureka whispers urgently to Johan, pointing out the suspicious pair. She wonders why they would sneak away together before the end of the royal banquet. As they watch the two below, Eureka realizes that Theodore and Lady Sevs have nothing to gain from being the center of gossip. She notes that their secrecy is a deliberate move to avoid attention. Eureka's eyes light up with excitement at the chance to uncover their secret plans. Johan looks at her with a concerned expression, sensing her impulsive energy.
A chibi version of Johan worries about what Eureka is planning. He fears she is about to suggest something dangerous or outlandish.
Eureka announces her intention to use the specific infiltration method they had previously agreed upon. The air around her seems to spark with renewed energy.
Eureka's red and black dress lies abandoned on a plush red chair. Johan's voice echoes through the room, questioning if she is truly certain about this plan.
Johan sits on a sofa looking downcast and worried. He warns Eureka that there is a high risk that the prince or Lady Sevs might recognize her.
Johan holds a small orange squirrel in his palm while giving it strict instructions. The squirrel, Eureka in her animal form, lets out a loud squeak and tells him to stop nagging her.
With a quick jump, the tiny squirrel leaps from Johan's hand. A sharp, bright snap sounds as she lands on the floor to begin her mission.
The squirrel stands on her hind legs and repeats Johan's instructions with an annoyed huff. She insists that he has already drilled the plan into her ears enough times.
Johan watches her go with a soft, affectionate smile playing on his lips. His gaze is warm as he follows her tiny movements. Close up on Johan's mouth as he speaks softly to the departing squirrel. He expresses regret that he cannot accompany her on this part of the journey.
Johan lifts the squirrel back up and presses it gently against his face. A soft, affectionate sound echoes as he tells her he will wait right here for her return.
The squirrel looks back at him with big, shiny eyes before scurrying off. Johan reminds her that he is always there for her and urges her to be extremely careful. The scene shifts to the lower terrace where Prince Theodore and Lady Sevs are standing in a tense standoff. The night air is cold and silent around them. Lady Sevs lets out an annoyed sigh and complains about the prince's stubbornness. She asks what he wants to discuss so urgently that it couldn't wait. Theodore remains silent for a moment before speaking a single name, Eureka Modeste. Lady Sevs freezes, her eyes widening in surprise. Theodore questions her about the Modeste's adopted daughter, noting that Lady Sevs previously asked for help to remove her. He mentions that the girl is allegedly interfering with important temple business. Theodore looks contemplative as a sudden, heavy thump sounds. He reveals that Eureka reminds him intensely of a divine squirrel spirit he once saw. A dark, grainy flashback shows a woman with long hair and a floating squirrel spirit. The narrative wonders if the spirit sent to Hyrad long ago actually survived and returned to the Modeste family. Theodore's boots click against the stone floor as he continues his explanation. He reveals that he has been demanding the temple turn over the divine spirit ever since he first heard of it. Theodore leans into Lady Sev's personal space, his expression intense. He claims that the excitement he felt when he saw the spirit was unlike anything else he has ever experienced. Theodore explains that the temple ignored his demands and sold the spirit to an unknown mage. The text highlights his growing frustration with the situation. Close up on Theodore's glowing blue eyes as he reflects on his loss. His expression is one of cold, simmering anger. Lady Sevs looks down with a grimace as Theodore reveals the final piece of news. He says that when he tried to find the spirit again, he was told it had already died. Prince Theodore leans over Lady Sevs with an intense gaze as a sharp, quick tap sounds. He questions if Ravina might still be alive. Standing together on the balcony, Theodore wonders if the lady currently being called a fake is actually the long-lost daughter of the Modeste family.
Deep in the darkened forest, a soft, light rustle sounds through the leaves as the orange squirrel watches the pair from the shadows.
Hidden among the branches, the squirrel trembles in shock at the conversation she has just overheard. In a brief memory, Johan looks at Eureka and asks if she would prefer to go by a different name. Eureka stares ahead with wide, stunned eyes, repeating the idea of having a different name to herself. Eureka reflects on how the name she currently uses belongs to someone else and thinks about finding a name that is truly her own.
A warm vision shows a blonde woman affectionately cradling the face of a young girl in a sunlit meadow.
Johan gazes down with a somber and contemplative expression, his thoughts hidden.
Eureka looks away with a slight blush, lost in her own complicated feelings.
Eureka offers a bright, grateful smile and tells her uncle that she will give his suggestions serious thought.
Back in the forest, the squirrel's mouth hangs open as the realization of her true identity begins to take hold.
A vision of her human self appears behind her squirrel form as she realizes she was the real Eureka Modeste all along. Theodore looks out from the balcony and questions if the divine beast is actually a direct descendant of the Modeste bloodline. Theodore stares down at the red-haired woman and threatens to end their partnership if she attempts to lie to him. Theodore internally struggles with the risk of exposing temple secrets versus the catastrophic loss of his royal ties.
Lady Sevs shuts her eyes tightly and finally confirms that the prince's suspicions about the girl are correct.
Lady Sevs admits they haven't confirmed if the princess is the divine beast, but Theodore states he is now certain of it.
Theodore smiles and notes that the memories of the purification were accurate, admitting he was captivated by her.
Theodore wonders how the beast attained human form when such creatures usually lack the desire for it.
The squirrel remains perfectly still in the foliage, pondering the prince's comments about her transformation.
Looking through a window, the squirrel recalls that since her awakening, she has felt a constant driving urge to become human.
She wonders if her possession by another spirit created a desperate external will that forced her into a human shape.
Theodore turns his head slightly, wondering if there is an even deeper connection to the current events.
A sharp, loud snap sounds as Theodore asks if the situation is linked to the Duke of Modesta's presence at the temple.
Lady Savs looks down with a grim and serious expression, agreeing that it is a strong possibility.
A single bubble notes that it was unlikely the beast had the inherent will to change at the start.
The text explains that the infusion of the Duke's mana during the purification test was the catalyst for the change.
A large tiger and a small squirrel-like creature lie together inside an intricate, glowing, magical circle.
Theodore asks about the girl's unconscious mind, and Lady Sevs confirms that the results of the human experiments were precise.
Lady Savs warns that the Duke's mana makes the girl a dangerous variable because they cannot know what she remembers. A hazy vision shows Eureka interacting with Johann and the Duke as Lady Sevs complains about her constant interference.
Lady Sevs declares that the girl will become a massive threat to the temple's power if she's allowed to continue her current path.
Theodore and Lady Sevs continue their tense discussion as the night grows colder around them.
Theodore wonders if she might remember him from the purification and see him as someone familiar.
Lady Sevs lets out a sharp, irritated breath at the prince's line of questioning.
Lady Sevs calls the prince a fool and asks if his personal feelings are more important than the temple's security.
Lady Sevs states she cannot give a definite answer now, but expects the truth to surface soon, and Theodore agrees.
Theodore insists they must change their strategy because the girl completely outmaneuvered them earlier that day.
Lady Sevs looks at him with a calculating gaze and asks if he has a new plan to propose.
The plan involves another mana infusion to distort the girl's sense of time and rewind her to her original state.
They intend to turn her back into a memoryless, obedient divine beast that will serve their purposes.
Lady Sevs questions Theodore's obsession with the girl's form and asks why he doesn't just eliminate the Duke.
Theodore looks away with a neutral, unreadable expression as he considers her blunt questions. Theodore turns to leave, noting that since they are fully committed to this path, there is no turning back.
Theodore looks back and demands that the divine beast be handed over to him if the time-rewinding experiment succeeds.
The squirrel's feet grip the branch tightly as she watches the two conspirators conclude their meeting.
Johann stands alone in a sunlit doorway, looking out toward the balcony with a patient and focused expression.
A sudden, soft gasp escapes Johann as he spots a small, familiar shape rushing toward him.
Quick, rhythmic thumping sounds as the squirrel sprints across the floor, and Johann calls out Eureka's name in relief.
Johann welcomes the squirrel back and asks if her mission was a success.
Johann questions if she is truly the one she claims to be.
The orange squirrel looks down in silence, appearing deeply troubled. Eureka realizes she occupies the real daughter's body and that the temple orchestrated her family's downfall.
She reflects on how her family was robbed of the truth while hooded figures oversaw the abduction.
A tragic vision shows a couple desperately trying to help their distressed child. Tears well up in the tiny squirrel's eyes as the weight of the past hits her.
The squirrel covers her face in grief, wondering what her family did to deserve such cruelty.
She looks up with a sad, questioning gaze from the safety of Johann's palms.
Johann notices her distress and offers to listen whenever she is ready to talk. Johann admits that waiting for her return made him reflect on their shared history. He recalls the lonely nights he spent waiting for her in a high stone tower. Johann explains that his original intent was to stabilize her power, but his feelings changed over time.
He confesses that eventually he began waiting for her simply because of who she is.
Johann tells the squirrel that she is a precious person who helped him endure everything.
Johann gazes down with a gentle smile, expressing his relief at her safe return.
The squirrel lets out a soft sound, echoing his sentiment of shared affection.
A soft glow begins to emanate from the squirrel as she looks up at him. A bright, magical light flashes intensely as a transformation begins to take place. Johann's eyes widen in absolute shock as he witnesses the sudden change.
Eureka, now in her human form, throws her arms around Johann and thanks him for everything.
She clings to him tightly, seeking comfort after the shocking truths she discovered.
Johann stands frozen and blushing as he processes the sudden intimate embrace. They stand together in a warm embrace, surrounded by a soft floral atmosphere.
As the heavy door creaks open, the pair enters the grand hall together.
Eureka thanks Johann for his help with her dress while his heart thumps loudly in his chest.
Johann looks away with a flustered expression, trying to hide his growing embarrassment.
Guests in the ballroom whisper and gossip about the mysterious lady's identity.
Eureka asks why he is so red, and Johann admits he feels overwhelmed by his own awkwardness.
Lady Sevs watches them from the shadows, recognizing the girl as the true Eureka Modesta.
Lady Sevs notes Eureka's cleverness, but thinks the girl remains unaware of her own fake status.
The grand ballroom is filled with light and elite guests mingling beneath a massive chandelier. Mariel spots Eureka from across the room and calls out to her sister in surprise. Eureka explains that she feels unwell and needs to return home after hearing so much shocking news. The family gathers around her, expressing deep concern for her sudden pale appearance. Eureka looks down with a panicked expression, fearing the consequences of the evening's revelations. Johan watches the interaction with a serious and protective gaze.
The group attempts to reassure Eureka and tells her not to worry about the situation.
Johan steps forward and offers to personally escort Eureka back to the mansion.
The head of the family agrees to the arrangement and entrusts her to Duke Hirod's care.
Mariel and the other nobles watch in silence as the pair departs the ballroom. Muriel worries that Eureka looked much worse than she let on.
The blonde nobleman notes that the malicious rumors likely made Eureka feel incredibly uneasy.
He regrets that they allowed the gossip about her identity to spread so far.
The brown-haired man suggests they prepare a surprise gift to lift your spirits.
He explains that a grand gesture will prove to everyone how much the family cherishes her.
Mariel and her companion agree that a special gift is an excellent idea. Chibi versions of the characters ponder how to ensure Eureka understands their sincere intentions.
Gold coins jingle as the blonde man promises to spare no expense in supporting the plan.
The brown-haired man suggests a symbolic gift inspired by the ancient beast folk legends of their family.
Mariel ponders the idea of gifting a squirrel figurine.
Mariel questions why they would choose a squirrel.
The blonde man explains that he recalls seeing a squirrel illustration in the Modeste section of a restricted book.
He notes that the book in question is one that cannot be removed from the emperor's private library.
The book, titled The Curse Upon the Great Noble Houses, lies open to reveal an illustration of a squirrel and other magical beasts. Mariel repeats the ominous title and recalls that Eureka had mentioned something similar in the past.
Mariel reflects on how the girl attained human form using magic, even though Mariel herself possesses no magical ability.
Muriel realizes that while she once dismissed beast folk as legends, the library is suspiciously lacking in books on the subject. The blonde man tells Mariel to focus on planning an event for Eureka rather than worrying about the squirrel.
Mariel's hand rests on her dress as she feels that the family curse, the squirrel, and Eureka are all somehow connected.
Mariel stands alone in the bright hall, looking thoughtful and determined.
Eureka wakes up to the bright morning sun and lets out a soft, groggy murmur about the light.
Eureka sits up in bed and is surprised to see her mother sitting right beside her.
Eureka worries that she has overslept, and her mother notes that sleeping until noon means she must have been exhausted.
Her mother leans in with a gentle gaze and asks if she enjoyed the banquet the previous night. Eureka reflects on the realization that her mother recognized her as her real daughter from the very beginning.
She thinks about her previous fear of getting hurt when it was time to leave, but decides she will no longer separate herself from her identity as Eureka.
Two figures, one light and one dark, stand face to face as Eureka vows to live as the real daughter in her place.
Eureka feels a sense of relief, realizing she no longer needs to feel guilty when she calls out to her mother.
Eureka throws herself into her mother's arms, seeking the warmth and comfort of a long overdue embrace.
Her mother looks down with a peaceful and genuinely happy expression.
Her mother strokes her hair affectionately and agrees to let her rest and enjoy the morning.
Chibi versions of the two characters celebrate as the mother suggests having tea with Mariel and Jaden later that day. Eureka smiles brightly and says she wants to tell her siblings the news herself because she missed them.
Dressed in a new blue outfit, Eureka stops in the hallway and wonders why there is so much noise coming from the foyer.
Looking down from the balcony, Eureka questions if a new visitor has just arrived at the mansion.
A sudden, sharp gasp escapes Eureka as she spots a familiar and unexpected face below.
Guests and staff whisper in the grand entrance as they witness the arrival of a mysterious brown-haired girl.
Mariel meets the newcomer, who offers a polite but nervous greeting to the household.
The girl, who has brown hair and freckles, claims she arrived because she heard they were searching for their lost daughter.
A heavy silence falls over the grand hall as everyone processes the girl's shocking declaration.
Staff members whisper among themselves, questioning if the newcomer is truly the second young lady of the house.
The girl explains that she was working at Baron Verini's estate when she heard the news and felt compelled to come.
She looks down at the hem of her simple dress and explains that the Baroness encouraged her to investigate.
Eureka watches from above and realizes that the temple has launched a vicious new attack against her position.
Eureka remains surprisingly calm, noting that she would have been shaken by this event if she didn't already know her own truth.
She worries that the timing is poor because Mariel does not know the truth and might be fooled by the imposter.
Mariel looks at the newcomer with an unreadable expression and asks what she should call her for the time being.
Muriel notes that the girl must have had a name she used before coming to the mansion.
From her vantage point, Eureka is stunned by how incredibly calm Mariel appears during the interrogation.
The girl shyly introduces herself as Lizzie, just as Jaden's voice calls out to Mariel from across the hall.
Jaden enters the room with a look of confusion and asks who has arrived at their home. Mariel explains that the girl is named Lizzie and that she is claiming to be the lost daughter, Eureka.
Lizzie quickly interrupts, stating that she brought an object she believes will help prove her identity.
A floating bubble explains that the Baroness took her in many years ago.
Lizzie holds out a small white garment with intricate details.
Lizzie explains that she was told this was the dress she was wearing as a baby, causing Jaden to gasp in shock. Jaden's internal thoughts reveal that he was on guard duty that day and remembers the events with perfect clarity.
A vision of a baby Eureka appears, showing her wearing the exact same white outfit for her baptism ceremony.
Jaden stares at the garment and realizes that the embroidery on the dress is undeniably his sister's unique handiwork.
Jaden observes the small white garment and confirms that it truly belongs to Eureka.
Mariel stares intensely as she contemplates the existence of a real second young lady.
Mariel points out that the sudden appearance of the girl is highly suspicious given their history.
Mariel apologizes for her blunt assessment while the brown-haired newcomer listens with a humble expression.
Mariel suggests they move their discussion to the drawing room to find some quiet.
A maid asks Eureka if she is all right as the girl hides behind a corner.
Eureka realizes the dress is genuine and thinks the temple's plan is incredibly cruel.
In the shadows, Eureka worries that without proof, she will be labeled as a troublemaking fake.
Eureka tells the maid to keep her presence a secret while reflecting on the temple's desperation.
A jagged bubble signals Eureka's intent to watch the temple's next move.
The group walks down the sun-drenched hallway toward the drawing room.
Jaden remains silent, lost in thought as he follows the others.
Eureka finds Mariel's calm reaction unexpected and wonders if they share the same concerns.
A chibi Jaden pensive thought appears while Eureka's wide pink eyes reflect her shock.
The blonde mother enters the hall and calls out to her daughter, Mariel.
The mother asks about the identity of the newcomer, prompting a sharp reaction from Lizzie.
Mariel grows frantic, fearing the mother will suffer another collapse if she mistakes the imposter for Eureka.
The mother clasps her hands in prayer, thanking God for the girl's safe return.
Lizzie looks up with hope, asking if the mother finally recognizes her true identity.
The mother clarifies that she is thanking the girl for returning her daughter's dress.
Jaden interrupts to ask Mariel if she remembers the white garment the girl brought.
The mother warmly recalls the baptism dress, noting that she hand-embroidered the intricate details herself.
The mother offers a reward, but Lizzie insists she wore the dress when she was a baby.
The mother stands perfectly still, repeating the girl's claim in a skeptical low tone.
The mother's gaze turns icy as she declares the newcomer to be a thief.
The mother accuses the girl of coming to steal even more while Jaden tries to de-escalate.
The mother is outraged that a thief was invited inside, but Mariel promises to handle it.
Eureka and the maid stand alone in the expansive, ornate hallway.
Eureka observes the tense atmosphere as staff members watch the drama from the distance.
Eureka requests that the maid prepare some tea for her to calm her nerves. Eureka reflects that she would have fled the mansion if not for a deeper purpose.
As the door opens, Eureka gasps in complete disbelief at what she sees.
A massive mountain of colorful gifts and stuffed animals overflows in the center of the room.
The maid reveals that Mariel and Jaden worked through the night to prepare this surprise for her.
Eureka's pink eyes widen as she takes in the overwhelming display of affection.
Eureka reflects on the tradition of post-banquet gifts while looking at the piles of presents.
A jagged bubble expresses Eureka's disbelief at receiving such a grand, heartfelt gesture.
Mariel smiles in a vision, holding an envelope and wishing for them to grow even closer.
Jaden is shown writing a letter formally declaring Eureka as his precious family.
Tears stream down Eureka's face as she holds a letter and smiles with genuine joy. Eureka sits quietly on the floor, surrounded by the gifts and the warmth of her family.
Eureka vows to never forgive those who would exploit such kindness by sending a fake.
Mariel stands at the closed door and calls out to Eureka, announcing her arrival.
Eureka turns her head, her face wet with tears as she hears her sister's voice.
Eureka's cheeks are flushed pink as she tries to compose herself for the meeting.
Mariel enters with a gentle smile, stating she also has something important to discuss.
The two sisters sit across from each other at a small table for tea.
Mariel asks if Eureka's overwhelmed by the news about Lizzie, and Eureka reassures her.
Eureka thinks about her failed plan to reveal her truth before the imposter arrived. Eureka worries that any claim now would just seem like a desperate attempt to stay.
Mariel apologizes for troubling Eureka with unnecessary worries.
Mariel explains that she actually came to find Eureka for a different reason.
Mariel recounts hearing from the Crown Prince about a book in the Emperor's secret library that contained the weaknesses of nobles.
Eureka stares in shock as she hears about the existence of such a dangerous book.
Mariel confirms the library's location and notes that the book also contained a record about the curse of the Medest family.
A gasp sounds as Eureka looks at an open book featuring a drawing of a squirrel finally finding a link to her past. Narrated text explains a legend that a Medest ancestor was a beastkin and reminds Eureka of her own high magical energy.
Mariel admits that considering all the evidence, she wonders if their family is hiding a deep secret.
Mariel clutches the fabric of her dress, questioning if that family secret has something to do with Eureka as well.
Mariel looks up with a bright, teary-eyed expression and realizes they are much closer than they thought.
Eureka remains speechless, her eyes wide with overwhelming surprise and budding hope.
In a lighthearted moment, Mariel admits she has no logical evidence but simply feels that Eureka is the real one compared to Lizzie.
A vision of their mother appears as Eureka reflects on how Mariel has always put her first, no matter the situation.
Overcome with emotion, Eureka begins to speak, her voice trembling with the weight of her feelings. The two sisters share a quiet moment of mutual understanding and silent connection.
Mariel begins to weep, her hand covering her mouth as the truth finally settles between them.
Mariel reaches out a trembling hand toward Eureka, seeking to bridge the gap between them.
The two sisters fall into a deep emotional embrace, finally acknowledging their bond as true family.
A sudden angry shout rings out over the tea table as Mariel curses the people from the temple.
Mariel is absolutely livid, declaring that those at the temple deserve to be eaten by tigers for their cruel deceptions.
Mariel apologizes for not recognizing her sooner, but Eureka gently reassures her that it is okay since she had no proof.
Eureka asks if Mariel truly believes her, and Mariel firmly agrees, noting that their mother must have had a reason for her recognition. Eureka smiles with pure happiness, deeply grateful to finally have someone believe in her truth.
A warm memory surfaces of Eureka being held as a small squirrel, a time when her family understood her perfectly.
Eureka looks at her younger self holding the squirrel and wonders if such a connection was only possible because they were truly family. A formal portrait of the blonde-haired Metist family stands as a reminder of the legacy Eureka is a part of. Eureka looks forward with a steady, determined gaze, ready to face the challenges ahead.
Mariel leans in and tells Eureka that she has a plan in mind to deal with the situation.
Mariel explains that this is the perfect chance to expose Lizzie as a fake and go after the people pulling her strings.
Eureka offers a soft, supportive smile, signaling her readiness to help with the plan.
In the bustling town square, flyers announce the shocking return of the real second daughter of the Metist family.
Commoners whisper about the news, noting that the adopted daughter from the orphanage is now being accused of causing trouble. A sharp, wet slap echoes as Lizzie falls to the floor in front of a stunned Mariel.
A maid rushes to help the fallen Lizzie, while Eureka watches the suspicious scene unfold from a distance. Lizzie tearfully claims she fell on her own, a blatant lie that leaves Eureka looking on in complete disbelief.
The atmosphere grows heavy with suspicion as staff members begin to question what really happened to the newcomer.
Lizzie casts a sly, triumphant glance back at Eureka as she's escorted away, revealing her true manipulative nature.
Night falls over the grand mansion, and Eureka sits alone at her desk, lost in thought.
A soft pitter-patter of feet sounds as Eureka investigates why she hears someone crying in the middle of the night.
Eureka and her maid arrive at the garden to find a group of staff gathered around a sobbing figure.
A maid explains that Lizzie's baby clothes suddenly disappeared and were found ruined in the flower bed.
Eureka gazes at the dirty garment, her eyes wide as she recognizes the very item that belonged to her. Eureka realizes that while she planned to take the dress back, she never imagined the temple would go this far to frame her.
Lizzie wails that Eureka went too far just because she didn't like her, while Eureka defends herself against the baseless accusation. The maids look on with cold, judging gazes, clearly swayed by Lizzie's carefully orchestrated performance.
Eureka feels the sting of their changing attitudes and feels a pang of guilt for the trouble this brings to her family.
A new day begins as a grand carriage pulls up to the entrance of the sunlit mansion.
A rapid, rhythmic thudding of footsteps sounds as someone rushes through the hallways in a hurry.
A dark-haired man bursts into the room, calling out Eureka's name with a look of pure shock and relief. Eureka smiles brightly at the newcomer and cheerfully announces that she has run away from home.
Eureka asks Johan if she can stay at his mansion for a few days.
Johan is visibly shocked by the news that Eureka has run away from home.
Eureka notices his intense surprise while maintaining a cheerful, upbeat facade.
Eureka reflects on the difficulty of her hasty departure and the lack of prior contact. Eureka apologizes for the sudden intrusion and mentions the circumstances of her leaving.
Johan interrupts her apology by softly and seriously calling out her name.
Johan enthusiastically declares that Eureka can stay for as long as she desires. The atmosphere between them grows warm and sparkling as they stand together.
Johan reaffirms his welcome while the household staff watches with baffled expressions.
The butler and maids whisper amongst themselves about their master's transformation. A chibi butler and maid are utterly confounded by their master's sudden change in personality.
Johan turns to lead Eureka through the grand, sunlit halls of the High Rod Mansion.
The two sit across from each other at an exceptionally long, ornate dining table. Eureka eats while reminiscing about her first meeting with her sister in this very room.
Eureka's expression grows solemn as she prepares to address a difficult topic.
Johan admits he was considering a direct confrontation with the Modeste family before she arrived.
Johan explains he only held back because he believed she might have a plan of her own.
Eureka considers how the scandals regarding the imposter Lizzie must have reached his ears.
Eureka is confused by Johan's unwavering trust despite the evidence presented against her.
Eureka directly asks if he has any doubts that she might be an imposter.
Eureka questions if he suspects her previous stories were merely elaborate lies.
Eureka worries that Johan's kindness is actually a burden he feels forced to carry.
Johan cuts off her spiraling thoughts by firmly calling her name again. Johan promises that he will believe her regardless of what she says or does. Johan gently advises her to stop saying things that only serve to hurt herself.
Johan confesses that he has been waiting a long time to stay peacefully by her side.
Eureka reflects on their past meetings in Hyrad and the pain of their rushed partings.
Eureka expresses her deep gratitude to Johan for his kindness and support.
A chibi Johan asks if it was Mariel who ultimately drove her out.
Johan continues to speculate on her mistreatment while Eureka desperately tries to correct him.
Eureka explains her strategic departure was part of a secret operation planned with her sister.
Thump thump, Johan's heart races as he realizes Eureka considers him her only safe haven. Johan vows to protect her forever before Eureka nervously mentions another favor.
Eureka sheepishly asks to borrow some clothes since she arrived with no luggage.
A brief silence falls between them as Johan takes in her humble request.
A soft sigh escapes Johan as he admits he feels bad for her current situation.
Clack! Johan swings open a pair of grand doors to reveal a surprise. A magnificent room is revealed, filled with luxury clothing and a custom squirrel nest.
Eureka feels overwhelmed with relief, realizing she could stay in this welcoming place forever.
The scene shifts to a garden path lined with vibrant, blooming flowers. Mariel and Lizzie stroll together through the peaceful, sun-drenched gardens.
Mariel sighs while explaining that Eureka left despite their many attempts to stop her.
Lizzie secretly mocks Eureka's pride while enjoying the opulence of the estate.
Lizzie wonders to herself if Eureka's complaints were really enough to justify leaving.
Oof, Lizzie recalls how she used to subtly provoke Eureka into reacting poorly.
Lizzie decides that Eureka's absence is a victory she intends to fully exploit.
Mariel stops and considers giving Lizzie a more permanent place in the family.
The two women stand before the entrance to a lush, sunlit, gated garden area.
Mariel explains the history of the garden, which was built specifically for her father's daughters.
Mariel hands over a key, granting Lizzie access to the garden that originally belonged to Eureka.
Mariel smiles warmly and suggests they try to get along from now on.
Lizzie agrees to be a good little sister, but Mariel sharply rejects the idea.
Mariel maintains her distance while Lizzie seethes internally over Eureka's lingering influence.
Lizzie resents how the Duchess and the uncle refuse to acknowledge her as the true daughter. Lizzie looks at her golden key, hoping they will eventually warm up to her.
Lizzie plans to exploit Mariel's supposedly weak will for her own benefit. Lizzie envisions a life filled with kindness and immense family wealth.
Greed consumes Lizzie as she imagines gaining total recognition and lavish riches.
Lizzie even dares to dream of winning over the Duke of Hyrad himself.
Lizzie clenches her fist, vowing not to let her current plan fail.
Lizzie decides she must secure the temple's approval to fully usurp Eureka's identity.
A grand mansion stands tall against a clear blue sky.
A dark-haired guard reacts with profound shock to some unexpected news. Theodore's expression turns serious as he ponders Eureka's residence in Hyrad.
A subordinate explains that Eureka fled to her lover's house because of the imposter.
Theodore slams his desk in fury, questioning Ravina's chaotic methods.
Theodore commands that a letter be sent to the Duke of Hyrad immediately.
Theodore sternly announces that he will be visiting the estate personally.
Johan and Eureka enjoy a peaceful stroll through a flower-lined garden path.
Eureka looks around, remembering her time spent here in her squirrel form.
Eureka notes that the estate remains largely unchanged, save for the staff.
Eureka acknowledges that the mansion's owner is the most significant change.
Johan looks ahead with a steady, tranquil gaze as they walk together.
Eureka reflects on their past, never imagining they would one day walk side by side.
The two share a quiet, companionable moment amidst the blooming flowers.
Eureka expresses concern, asking Johan if he is currently experiencing any pain.
Johan reassures her, mentioning he still has calming potions from his time at war.
Johan suddenly reaches out and takes Eureka's hands into his mun.
Eureka flinches slightly at the sudden, intimate contact with Johan's hands.
Johan explains that her human form still provides a faint, calming effect.
Eureka is amazed and slightly embarrassed that she can still calm him in human form.
Eureka realizes Theodore must have identified her as a divine beast through physical contact.
Eureka recalls reading that stronger calming effects require even deeper physical contact.
Johan admits their current level of contact only has a minor effect on him. Eureka asks why Johan isn't taking his calming potions if he truly needs them.
Johan remains silent, looking at Eureka with a gaze full of unspoken meaning.
Eureka suspects the temple may be attempting to harm Johan with their potions.
A dark thought occurs that the temple might lace the medicines with poison.
Several potion bottles sit on a table, one glowing with an ominous light.
Contaminated supplies are distributed to Hyrad to carry out a hidden plot.
Eureka feels guilty for bringing trouble to Johan, but he gently interrupts her.
Johan reveals he was already planning to destroy the temple once the war ended.
Johan recounts how the temple tried to control him with horrific drugs.
A look of cold, intense resolve settles over Johan's purple eyes.
Eureka watches Johan's display of determination with a mixture of surprise and worry.
Johan softly notes that he hasn't forgotten the help Eureka gave him either.
Johan pulls Eureka into a tight embrace, vowing to never let her go again.
Johan looks down at Eureka, who calls out his name in surprise.
Johan playfully minimizes his pain, claiming he has grown stronger since they were young.
Eureka holds Johan's hands and promises to help calm him whenever they are together.
Johan smiles gently at the brown-haired woman, saying he will be counting on her from now on. 3 servants whisper amongst themselves, questioning if the rumors about the fake noble lady being a fox were true.
Chibi Beast versions of the pair walk by. The servants think it's obvious that the dark-haired duke is the real fox here.
The servants observe the interaction, feeling as though an innocent girl has unknowingly walked into a dangerous beast's den.
Eureka stops in the garden, noticing a familiar swing still hanging from a tree as Johan watches her.
Eureka fondly recalls how Tezin used to push her on the swing, while Johan stiffens and stops in his tracks.
Dark energy swirls around a thought bubble, reflecting that the swing holds precious memories involving Tezin.
A sharp crackle sounds as Johan's mana shatters the wooden swing into pieces, leaving the servants utterly shocked.
Johan casually points away, explaining that parts of the garden are undergoing repairs and suggests they move to another area.
Eureka mentions how Tezin used to bring guests to a specific stone bench just to show her off. A loud snap rings out as the stone bench is suddenly pulverized into debris, causing the servants to stare in wide-eyed horror.
Eureka points out a statue that Tezin claimed resembled her, only for the sculpture to spontaneously shatter under Johan's intense gaze.
A sudden boom echoes as the chestnut tree stump explodes into splinters while Eureka reminisces about Tezin.
Eureka begins to mention another spot associated with Tezin before a violent crackling sound echoes through the air.
The servants panic, screaming that it will be a complete disaster if the Duke and this lady don't end up together.
A heavy thud sounds as a desperate plea for someone to ensure nothing comes between the couple goes out.
Johan and Eureka stand together in a grand hall as the sun sets outside the large windows.
A silver-haired man greets them, calling Lady Modeste's arrival a pleasant surprise as he gestures with a smile.
Eureka and Johan react with surprise. Eureka asks the Highness what could have brought him to the Highroad estate.
The prince explains he came to see Eureka personally, mentioning she left quite an impression on him during the banquet.
Johan tells the prince that it would be best if he refrained from saying such things in front of her lover.
The prince ignores him, telling Eureka that if staying at her house was difficult, she could have come to the royal palace.
Eureka retorts that his fiancée would surely be displeased if she were to stay as his guest at the palace.
The silver-haired prince touches his chin thoughtfully, claiming that the engagement in question was actually fake all along.
A simple text panel confirms that the engagement mentioned was a complete fabrication.
The prince suggests that their relationship is a sham, just like how Johan and Eureka are pretending to be lovers.
The prince continues his mockery, asking if they are truly just pretending, leaving Eureka speechless with shock.
Eureka is stunned by the prince's sudden and open revelation regarding the fake nature of their engagement. Eureka recovers and claims she has no idea what he is talking about as Johan places a protective hand on her back.
Johan asks the prince why they would ever need to pretend to be a couple in the first place.
Johan realizes that according to Eureka, this silver-haired intruder is a powerful and dangerous mage.
Johan calls the prince rude and demands he leave the estate immediately if he has no other business to attend to.
The prince smiles and challenges them to prove their love right there by asking why they don't simply share a kiss.
A heavy, expectant silence falls over the ornate room as the candles flicker in the background.
Eureka is incensed, mentally calling the prince a crazy man for demanding something so private and inappropriate.
Eureka argues that even if they were real lovers, they would have no reason to kiss in front of a stranger like him.
The silver-haired man leans in closer toward Eureka, his expression unreadable and challenging.
The prince tells Eureka that the title of a prince's fiancé is far more useful than a war hero with no political backing. A sudden grip rings out as Johan's hand tightly clenches the prince's arm, interrupting his advances.
Johan stares down at the intruder, his expression darkening as he prepares to address the insult.
A surge of murderous intent radiates from Johan as he declares that he will not let the prince leave with his life. Eureka notices Johan's mana is fluctuating wildly and worries that things will get out of hand if she doesn't intervene.
Eureka steps between them and firmly declares that she doesn't know why he has such a misunderstanding, but they are real lovers.
Eureka asks the prince if his claims aren't just completely ridiculous as she stands her ground.
Eureka explains that if someone wanted to, they could easily fake a gesture like holding hands or a kiss.
Eureka pulls Johan's hand to her lips to prove their intimacy, causing Johan to blush a deep shade of red.
Eureka tells the silver-haired man that she doesn't mind if he chooses not to believe in the reality of their relationship.
Eureka mocks the prince, stating she didn't know he had such a perverted hobby as wanting to watch a couple's private affections. Eureka leans into Johan's embrace, stating they don't have such indecent tastes as she holds him close.
Eureka tells the prince to leave, explaining that she and Johan would like to spend the rest of the night alone together.
A carriage waits by a grand fountain under the moonlight.
The silver-haired prince leaves, grumbling about how his interference only brought the couple closer together.
The prince reflects on Johan's intense reaction and vows to trap Eureka at the palace with a royal seal. A sudden, sharp impact catches the prince off guard, making him cry out in shock.
The prince turns back in a rage, demanding to know who would dare attack him.
A flurry of small objects rains down on the prince, causing him to recoil in pain.
2 simple acorns lie harmlessly on the stone floor of the courtyard. The prince stares at the ground, utterly bewildered by the strange, small projectiles. Back inside, Johan welcomes Eureka home as she approaches him with a bright smile.
Eureka excitedly declares that she got her revenge, imagining her squirrel form looking triumphantly cool.
Johan, blushing slightly, agrees that the prince fully deserved whatever trouble Eureka cost him.
Johan apologizes for any discomfort his protective behavior caused, but Eureka insists she didn't mind.
Eureka looks away shyly, worried about having kissed his hand without asking first.
Johan immediately grants his full consent, leaving Eureka stunned by his quick response.
Johan resolves to give Eureka his consent for everything she does, even considering a formal statement.
Johan officially declares his unconditional consent for any of Eureka's actions as she looks on in confusion.
Eureka warns Johan not to make such careless promises as they stand before the quiet mansion.
A freckled woman lurks in the bushes, noting she is in the garden area belonging to Mariel.
The woman hopes to eavesdrop on the crown prince after spotting him heading into the garden.
A dark, cunning smile spreads across the freckled woman's face as she remains hidden.
The spy watches from the shadows as the prince speaks with Mariel and another man.
The woman recognizes the man with the prince as the renowned doctor, Rabat.
Renat formally addresses the prince as they walk through the flower-lined garden.
The doctor reveals that the prince's recent health issues are all caused by Arla petals.
Renat explains that these rare desert flowers produce a purple dye the prince is severely allergic to.
The doctor warns of potential paralysis, leading the prince to realize he must avoid anything purple.
The prince requests absolute silence regarding this vulnerability, and Renat solemnly agrees to keep the secret.
The freckled spy reels from the discovery of the crown prince's secret weakness.
The woman realizes she can use this information to curry favor with the prince's enemy, the high priest.
The spy plots to eliminate the prince and Mariel to secure her place as the sole heir. The grand mansion stands peacefully under the bright morning sun.
Eureka pauses in the hallway, looking startled by some sudden news.
A blue-haired man approaches her, asking what has caused her such distress. The man informs her that Count Albert has arrived and is waiting to see her.
Eureka is overwhelmed by the sudden influx of visitors following Theodore's arrival the day before.
Eureka apologizes for the trouble her presence brings, but the blue-haired man quickly dismisses her concerns.
The man laughs warmly, telling Eureka she is welcome to stay at the estate as long as she likes.
He notes that her presence brings a sense of peace to the staff and the master of the house.
A blonde man in military attire stands waiting outside the heavy drawing room doors.
Theodore reflects on the irony of barging in after he had scolded the Duke for doing the same.
Theodore sighs at his own lack of manners as he waits to be received.
The massive ornate doors swing open with a heavy, resonating sound.
Eureka bursts into the room, calling out to her uncle with a look of pure relief. Eureka begins to ask what brought him there, but her words are cut short. Theodore pulls Eureka into a tight, emotional hug amidst a shower of flower petals.
Theodore asks Eureka if she has been well, his eyes filled with concern and relief.
Theodore expresses how deeply he worried for her as Eureka stares back in wide-eyed surprise.
Theodore tells her he understands why she was so aggressive toward Lizzie, much to Eureka's confusion.
Theodore proudly claims he would have done worse and laughs as Eureka smiles at his defense.
Theodore looks at her tenderly, affirming his absolute trust that she had good reasons for her actions. Eureka smiles softly as a gentle light surrounds her.
Eureka thanks her uncle and suggests they find a place to sit and talk. Count Albert explains he has been seeking a moment for a private conversation for some time.
Eureka thoughtfully agrees that his reasoning makes perfect sense. Eureka recalls how Lizzie constantly stayed by her uncle's side, preventing any private talk before her departure.
Albert explains he took advantage of the crown prince's arrival to slip away from the busy mansion.
Albert asks Eureka to consider staying at his estate if she feels uncomfortable returning to her home.
Eureka is visibly startled by the sudden offer to visit the Albert estate. Albert suggests she view it as a much-needed vacation to help her feel more at ease.
Albert clenches his fist, expressing his deep unease about her staying in what he calls a wolf's den.
Albert imagines her father would have dueled the Duke immediately, while Eureka wonders what he finds wrong with Johan.
Eureka insists that Johan has been very welcoming, but her uncle remains unconvinced.
Albert yells that he simply cannot stand any man getting too close to his beloved niece.
Albert rants about men being predatory while reflecting on how much he has cherished her since childhood.
Eureka feels touched that her uncle still cares for her so deeply despite Lizzie's appearance.
Albert affirms that his care is natural for family before Eureka begins to ask a difficult question.
Eureka asks her uncle if he has ever considered the possibility that Lizzie might be an imposter.
Albert's expression turns dark and solemn as he processes her shocking question.
A sudden realization strikes as Albert somberly reflects on the mystery of the baby clothes.
Eureka realizes her sister understood the truth because of her divine beast nature, which her uncle doesn't know.
Albert resolves to uncover the truth about the baby clothes and ensure any imposter pays for their deception. A close-up highlights the intense pink of Eureka's eye as she watches him. Eureka offers a small, knowing smile during the tense conversation.
Eureka plans to stay until Johan's victory celebration in 3 days before Albert asks one final favor.
Albert dramatically offers to pay for everything so she never has to feel indebted to the Duke. Eureka reassures her uncle that she will be returning home soon regardless of the current situation.
The blue-haired aide tells Johan that he did a good job controlling his temper the previous day.
The aide notes that Johan's mana was so unstable that the entire mansion nearly collapsed from the pressure.
The aide warns that harming royalty would have been a catastrophe despite the prince's behavior. The aide continues to nag about the potential for a disastrous ceiling collapse while Johan ignores him.
Johan suggests he could have simply thrown the prince out a window even without using his magic.
A weary sigh escapes the aide as he confirms that all the mansion's repairs are finally complete. The aide credits Lady Eureka for calming Johan down and preventing further destruction.
The aide wonders what she did to have such an effect and asks if he should fetch her.
Johan blushes and declines, admitting that seeing her now would make it impossible to restrain his feelings.
A message goes out requesting that Eureka meet someone at the tall tower later that night.
Instructions are given to ensure the meeting remains completely private and undisturbed.
A bright orange squirrel scampers quickly through the dark trees toward the tower. In her animal form, Eureka wonders why she has been summoned to such a specific location.
The squirrel assumes the meeting is for her to fulfill her promise of helping Johan stay calm.
Human Eureka prepares by bringing potions, knowing her calming powers are most effective in her beast form.
The squirrel stops in its tracks, surprised by something it sees at the base of the tower.
A look of pure shock crosses the squirrel's face as it stares ahead.
Eureka spots a set of wooden stairs built for a small animal and a cute drawing of herself.
Johan stands on the balcony, prompting Eureka to wonder what else he has specially prepared for her.
The Duke waits patiently in the moonlight for his small, furry guest to arrive.
The squirrel begins to hop up the wooden planks attached to the stone wall.
Eureka finds the climb much easier than her previous struggles and recalls how much her muscles used to ache.
Eureka scampers up the tower, determined to do her best to help Johan find peace.
The squirrel reaches the top ledge with a determined look, ready to meet the Duke. The black-haired man waits in silence. Johan warmly welcomes Eureka into the room as she sits on the table in her squirrel form. Johan gently pets the small orange squirrel's head.
Johan notes her choice of animal form while Eureka reflects on her mission to calm his unstable mana.
The squirrel encourages the Duke to hurry with the procedure. Johan questions if her animal form was truly the best choice for this task.
Johan rests his head on the table and leaves the calming process in Eureka's hands.
The squirrel places a tiny paw on his cheek, a soft light beginning to glow between them.
Eureka is shocked to discover that his magic is far more unstable than she initially anticipated.
Eureka realizes that Johan must have been in immense pain until now due to his condition.
She worries whether her calming powers are actually having any effect on him. Eureka recalls how much more quickly he used to relax when they were children. A memory surfaces of a younger Johan smiling peacefully as a small squirrel clung to his cheek. Back in the present, the squirrel continues its work, but Eureka remains doubtful of her success.
Johan suddenly opens his eyes and looks at her with a gentle expression.
Johan tells the squirrel that she's beautiful.
He repeats the compliment, his gaze filled with affection.
Johan affirms that his feelings remain the same whether she is a human or a squirrel.
A sudden, sharp tack sounds as the squirrel urges him to stop talking and focus on the treatment.
Johan gazes down at his small companion with a thoughtful look. Johan insists she is beautiful even when still and suggests she simply stay by his side. The squirrel looks up at him with wide, curious eyes.
Johan asks if absorbing more mana would cause her to return to her human form.
Eureka explains that turning back into a human right now would only cause more trouble. Johan praises her for a jawbone gun.
The orange squirrel lets out a happy cue and lands on the soft bed with a joyful bounce.
Eureka revels in the nostalgia of being in her beast form on such a comfortable bed.
With a soft plump sound on the mattress, the squirrel invites Johan to rest while he reflects on the familiar feeling. Johan lies down on the bed next to his tiny furry pest.
Eureka decides that, given his current state, Johan desperately needs to get some rest.
She promises to return in her squirrel form the following day to continue the treatment.
Johan's eyes soften as he watches her.
The squirrel is caught off guard by a sudden change in his expression. Johan warns her that he may not be able to hold back if she continues to give him excuses. A vision of Johan holding human Eureka close highlights the growing tension between them.
Johan confesses how much it means to him that she is the one who needs him.
The squirrel stares at him, seemingly mesmerized by his words.
Johan vows to do anything she asks of him.
Johan's only request is for her to remain by his side.
The squirrel remains silent and still. Eureka wonders what is happening to the atmosphere in the room.
She realizes that while the setting and the person are the same, the feeling has shifted.
Eureka notes a distinct change in the energy surrounding them.
She recalls a warning about the intense and unpredictable obsession magicians can have with divine beasts.
Eureka begins to wonder if Johan's repeated exposure to her calming power has affected him deeply.
She questions if his special treatment and subtle advances are signs of a growing obsession.
The squirrel sits quietly in the palm of Johan's hand.
Eureka is struck by a strange and unfamiliar sensation.
Johan admits that his heart will not stop racing because of her.
Eureka's pink eyes widen in complete shock at his confession.
Johan tells Eureka to use him as a tool and never hesitate to follow her path.
The small orange squirrel watches him with a look of wide-eyed uncertainty.
Johan ponders the true nature of the affection he feels for her.
He dismisses these personal reflections as a luxury while dealing with the temple. Johan resolves to distance himself from Eureka once his mission is complete to regain his objectivity.
A soft cue sounds as he admits that avoiding her beautiful face will be difficult.
His secret plan remains the absolute priority for the time being.
He hopes Raymond has carried out his instructions at the palace effectively.
The Grand Imperial Palace stands under a clear, bright sky.
At a state meeting, the Crown Prince discusses the temple's past distribution of divine beasts.
He highlights the oddity of a weaker brother receiving a beast despite the current duke's superior power.
The Crown Prince calls for an investigation into potential corruption within the temple's distribution system.
Raymond notes that the sale of divine beasts has long since ceased.
Other council members push to move on to the capital's reconstruction plans instead.
The proposal is dismissed, which was exactly the outcome the prince expected.
The initial rejection of his suggestion does not seem to bother him.
A subtle, knowing smile plays on the Crown Prince's lips as he watches the room. He reflects that as long as the news reaches the High Priest, his goal is achieved.
The day of the temple renovation ceremony finally arrives at the Grand Estate.
Johann prepares himself in formal attire, noting that the critical moment has come.
The Crown Prince greets the Duke, noting it is their first meeting since the victory banquet.
He mentions news of Eureka staying at the mansion and refers to her as his sister-in-law.
Eureka reflects on how saving her sister led to her becoming the Crown Prince's sister-in-law.
The prince claims his fiancée Mariel is worried, while Chibi Johann looks skeptical of their conversation.
The ash-haired prince asks for an update on Eureka's well-being, while Johann begins to respond.
A heavy silence and sudden tension crackle between the two men as they lock eyes.
Johann firmly asserts that Eureka is happy and tells the prince to contact him if needed.
The Crown Prince walks away, focusing on his impending marriage to Mariel if the day goes well.
High Priest Partre approaches the two men with a polite and formal greeting.
The Crown Prince acknowledges the arrival of High Priest Parquet.
Partre offers to guide the group through the renovation ceremony's usual proceedings.
He explains a slight change in the traditional leadership order for this specific event. The High Priest requests that Duke Hyrat accompany the Crown Prince at the very front.
The men proceed together into the ceremony as the priest watches them from behind.
A dark and suspicious expression crosses High Priest Partre's face as he lingers. The group passes a small village housing patients suffering from the contagious Revs disease.
The disease causes severe skin blotches and extreme difficulty with movement in those affected.
Traditionally, the royal family stops at this isolated village to offer their support and service. Johann informs the priest and the prince that he will wait outside the village. He explains that as a non-royal, he will stay behind to secure the route with the guards.
The Crown Prince understands his reasoning and they agree to meet up later. Johann directs the guards to their assigned positions to ensure the path is safe.
A sudden realization strikes Johann as he hears nearby voices whispering from the woods.
Local children hide behind large trees, peeking out at the Duke with great curiosity.
They gossip about the war hero's reputation as a powerful mage and his surprising handsomeness.
Johann is mortified as the children notice his pocket is bulging and wonder what is inside.
The Duke's face turns a bright shade of red from the embarrassing attention.
A sharp cue sounds as the squirrel fumes over the children's gossip about Johann's muscles.
Johann checks on his pocket, worried if Eureka is having trouble breathing, while she makes a muffled sound.
The orange squirrel frantically tries to readjust her position while remaining hidden inside his pocket.
Johann blushes intensely as Eureka's voice tells him to hang in there for just a bit longer.
The small orange squirrel informs him that there is not much work left to do.
Eureka is determined to conclude the temple's business by the end of that day.
Raymond stands outside a small building while wearing a protective mask.
The Crown Prince notes one final building remains to check, and High Priest Partre offers to personally accompany him inside.
A steady, rhythmic tap sounds as the two masked men walk together toward the final stop.
Partre reflects on how the Crown Prince brought up the divine beast at a recent state meeting. He believes the prince is actively trying to diminish the authority of the temple.
The priest fears that if Raymond becomes emperor and investigates the curse of Modeste, the temple will be ruined.
Partre darkens, resolving to cut the prince off before his plans can progress any further.
Her entrance is signaled by a sharp, long creak sounding from the heavy wooden door.
Raymond enters the room and tells the sick patient to remain lying down and rest comfortably.
Looking at her condition, he suggests that it might be best to have her bedding changed.
Partre stands by the door and watches the interaction with a cold, calculating gaze.
A soft, crinkling rustle sounds as Raymond takes a bag of cookies, thanking the woman for her thoughtfulness.
The red-haired patient smiles and asks him to accept the small gift she prepared.
Raymond accepts the bag, admitting that he was just starting to feel a bit hungry.
Partre reflects on information that a specific flower is the prince's greatest weakness.
He reveals that he packed the cookies full of the poisonous flower petals.
A sudden, crisp crunch sounds as Raymond takes a bite, while Partre waits for the effects to kick in.
Raymond praises the cookies, but suddenly gasps in shock as a splatter of blood appears.
The prince falls backward in agony as his mask is pulled away.
Raymond collapses onto the floor, appearing completely lifeless.
Partre lets out a dark laugh, shocked that the assassination was so easy to accomplish.
The patient is stunned as the high priest mocks her and laughs at the fallen prince.
She asks about her reward for proving her innocence, but Partre reveals that she will be the one framed for the murder.
He explains that the hidden dagger and the cookies will be used as evidence to accuse her of killing the prince.
A sharp whoosh sounds as Partre raises a dagger, telling Raymond to return to the arms of the gods. The priest is suddenly startled as soldiers burst into the room to intervene.
Partry gasps in terror, dropping his weapon as the situation turns against him.
Raymond stands up and formally arrests High Priest Partry for the attempted regicide of a royal.
Guards lead the High Priest and the red-haired woman away in Masangs.
Partry shouts in desperation that the entire situation is a setup and swears he is innocent.
A rustle in the leaves sounds as the squirrel watches from a tree, mocking his claims.
Eureka asks the audience if they are curious how the trap was actually set.
The explanation begins with the day Eureka shared everything with her sister.
Eureka sits on a sofa with Mariel to discuss their strategy.
She explains that this is the perfect chance to destroy the temple that has been a constant nuisance. Mariel confirms that the Crown Prince will gladly cooperate with the plan for that reason.
She teases her sister that Raymond is so in love he would do anything Eureka asks.
Eureka decides she must leave the estate for a while to fool the temple completely. She requests her sister to open her private garden to Lizzie to let the traitor's guard down.
Eureka planned to have a fake weakness about the prince slipped to the temple through Lizzie.
The two sisters look at each other with a shared sense of determination.
Muriel agrees with the plan, hoping it brings them closer to uncovering their family's secret.
Back in the present, the orange squirrel cheers for the success of their operation.
Eureka recounts how she signaled Johann once the targets entered the room, allowing him to catch them in the act.
She is grateful for Raymond's help and plans to shower him with compliments later.
The group of allies stands together, having successfully executed their plan to expose the temple. A tiny orange squirrel blushes as she rests her paws against her chest.
The small creature darts through the forest with a look of intense determination.
Flashback, Eureka reflects that absorbing even a little mana forces her back into human form, preventing her from properly comforting Johann.
She resolved to reach Johann quickly, certain she could calm him the moment they were reunited.
The orange squirrel leaps through the air with a desperate shout for the Duke.
A sudden, firm grasp catches her as she realizes this strange, cold mana is not Johann's.
The ash-haired second Prince Theodore smiles down at her with a chilling, triumphant expression. He addresses the captive creature as his little squirrel.
Eureka finds herself trapped in a magically sealed pocket, unable to escape the prince's clutches.
Theodore tells her to scream all she wants, noting that her exhaustion only serves his purposes.
A sharp cue sounds as the squirrel struggles futilely against the enchanted fabric.
Eureka reminds herself to stay calm, but Theodore mocks her for trusting someone like Johann Hyrad.
He calls her naive and suggests that choosing him over the Duke would be a far better decision.
Theodore claims that for a mage, a divine beast is absolute, and his feelings for her are no different from Johann's.
He promises that marrying him would lead her to the throne of the Empire as its empress.
The squirrel is outraged by his proposal, shouting that he is not her type and has no concern for her satisfaction.
Eureka reflects that he is a bastard for exploiting her internal conflicts so ruthlessly. She wonders if the two mages are truly any different at their core.
Memories of Johann's warmth and his constant offers of support flood her mind.
She recalls his sincere promise to be there for her if anything ever happened.
Eureka remembers looking into Johann's eyes during a quiet, intimate moment.
She believes that the Duke has always prioritized her well-being above everything else.
She admits that even if his motives were partly selfish, his care for her felt genuine.
Eureka concludes that Johann is fundamentally different from the cold prince standing before her.
A sharp cue sounds as she demands to be let down, but the prince remains unmoved.
Theodore coldly informs her she will remain in her squirrel form until she changes her mind.
He declares that she will stay at the palace while wearing his mark.
Eureka is horrified, realizing she will be branded and never allowed to leave the imperial palace. She desperately prays for Johann to find her as she is carried away.
She suddenly remembers that mages cannot use magic on royalty and fears for Johann's safety.
A crackling, violent surge of mana begins to ripple through the air around them.
A massive, deafening boom sounds as an explosion of fire and light rocks the forest. Theodore is stunned, calling the unseen assailant a lunatic as a silhouette emerges from the smoke.
A voice echoes back, calling the prince the crazy one as a figure steps forward.
Johann appears amidst the swirling mana, his face cold as he demands to know Eureka's location.
Tucked away in the pocket, the squirrel wonders in shock what is happening outside.
Her fear turns to hope as she recognizes Johann's commanding voice.
The Duke stares directly at Theodore, his eyes glowing with a dangerous blue intensity.
A firm, rhythmic tap sounds as Johann continues his advance.
Theodore touches a small, bloody cut on his cheek, acknowledging that the Duke has arrived.
The prince asks if Johann is attacking indirectly because he knows mages cannot target royals. The two powerful men stand amidst the scorched trees, locked in a tense standoff. Theodore warns that threatening a royal with magic could be considered an act of treason.
Johann tells the prince to shut up as purple energy crackles violently around his hands.
Theodore remains unfazed, relying on the magical protection granted to the royal family.
He mocks the Duke for wasting his strength on a move that will have no effect on him.
The prince laughs at the idea that mere magical debris could harm a royal.
Johann retorts that if magic is forbidden, he will simply have to find another method. A sudden sickening thud sounds as Johann's fist connects with Theodore's jaw, drawing blood.
Johann calmly adjusts his glove, stating that he would simply do something like that instead.
Theodore looks dazed with blood staining his cheek and lip. The prince's eyes widen as he gasps in shock.
Theodore screams an insult at the black-haired man standing before him.
A sharp ack sounds as Johann delivers a powerful kick.
Theodore reels backward with a pained ah as he falls.
Inside the pocket, Eureka is confused by the sound of heavy blows.
A sharp "cuke" sounds as Eureka realizes Johann is physically attacking the prince. Johann stares coldly while demanding to know Eureka's location.
The battered prince remains silent as Johann repeats his demand.
Johann strikes Theodore again with a relentless physical blow.
A low sounds as the prince collapses onto the ground.
A pained coo sounds amidst the swirling dark mana. Johann stands with his back turned, breathing heavily from the exertion.
Eureka remains curled into a ball, trembling within the dark fabric. The squirrel tentatively peeks out with a look of uncertainty.
Eureka is relieved to find that the magic barrier has vanished.
The squirrel is horrified by the forest's total destruction. Eureka is stunned by the sight of Theodore's bloody, beaten face.
She quickly turns her attention toward the exhausted Duke. Johann looks down, his expression weary and strained after the fate.
He kneels and calls out Eureka's name in disbelief. Eureka worries about the Duke's terrible, sickly complexion.
She decides she must calm his unstable mana immediately.
Johann gently cradles her, asking if that bastard harmed her.
A sharp cue sounds as Eureka tells him to worry about himself. Glowing energy flows from the squirrel's paws into Johann's hand.
Eureka notes that his mana is completely tangled from reckless use.
She resolves to soothe the Duke's soul might aware.
Eureka pauses as she senses something unusual in his state. She wonders why the Duke's hands are still shaking.
Johann looks down, whispering her name with deep sadness. He reflects on the terror he felt when she didn't return.
Johann gazes at her with eyes filled with sorrow and relief.
The Duke admits he was terrified of actually losing her.
He explains he feared hurting her if he used magic directly.
Eureka realizes he wasn't looking for her just to calm himself.
She understands he held back magic entirely for her safety.
Eureka feels safe knowing he prioritized her over the royal decree.
Johann tenderly presses the small squirrel against his face.
The squirrel's eyes widened with a soft, affectionate glow.
Johann smiles, admitting he is finally starting to feel calm.
Eureka reflects on how a divine beast is absolute to a mage.
She realizes his care goes beyond mere magical instinct.
Johann gazes at her with a look of pure, gentle devotion.
Eureka's heart flutters as she considers the depth of his feelings. Johann looks surprised as the squirrel reacts to his popsh.
The squirrel affectionately nuzzles against Johann's warm hand.
Johann whispers her name, sounding deeply moved by her affection.
A sudden cough sounds as the moment is interrupted by a noise nearby.
Theodore begins to stir, prompting Eureka to wonder if he is waking.
The tiny squirrel makes a soft, quiet sound.
Johann holds the squirrel as she lets out a loud, high-pitched chop.
The fuming squirrel calls Johann a rascal for upsetting her with his useless and upsetting comments.
Johann asks if Eureka is feeling unwell, but she quickly dismisses his concern with a sharp chirp.
Eureka remains indignant, shouting that Theodore had the nerve to claim there was no difference between him and Johann.
Johann gestures to the battered prince, telling her not to worry since the man is beaten and magically drained, though Eureka feels he still doesn't understand her.
Eureka resolves to try harder at communicating just as a loud voice declares that the criminal has been found. The gray-haired man on horseback commands his men to arrest the target immediately.
A shocked voice calls out Raymond's name in the bright light.
Eureka watches in a panic as Raymond leads his knights toward them, fearing they intend to arrest the Duke.
She wishes they would at least listen to an explanation before taking action against her friend.
The squirrel leaps from Johann's hands as he looks down in surprise.
The tiny creature stands its ground with a determined look.
Standing protectively in front of the Duke, the squirrel declares that no one will lay a hand on Johann while she is there.
Raymond's voice booms out as he addresses the Duke by his full name.
Trembling but firm, Eureka shouts that anyone trying to get to the Duke will have to go through her first.
A voice praises someone for their hard work on a secret mission. Eureka is completely baffled by the mention of a mission.
The squirrel watches the two men face each other, wondering what on earth Raymond is talking about.
Johann is equally confused by the term secret mission, while Eureka wonders if it was a secret even to the person doing it.
Raymond gives a friendly thumbs up, promising to handle things and asking to be remembered to the Duke's sister-in-law.
Raymond looks down at the fallen prince, admitting he already had his suspicions about the man. He declares that even a prince is not above the law and will be charged for hiding his identity and dodging the battlefield.
The squirrel smiles brightly as Raymond orders Theodore's arrest and apologizes to Johann for the earlier misunderstanding.
Johann looks down at the creature as she lets out a soft, inquisitive sound.
The Duke gazes at her with a gentle, appreciative smile.
The squirrel stares back with wide, curious eyes.
Johann warmly admits that her protective display was impressive. Eureka curls up and makes a soft, happy sound. Johann laughs softly, deeply moved by the small squirrel's affection.
At the palace, a command rings out to search every single inch of the grounds. Inside the grand hall, knights surround the blonde man and Mariel. The man asks why the knights are there, but Mariel calmly tells her uncle to settle down.
She explains that because they are innocent, they should have no problem cooperating with the search.
The uncle looks hesitant and concerned despite her calm demeanor.
A desperate cry to be let go sounds as a struggle ensues.
Lizzie is forcibly detained by knights as she demands to know what she did wrong while her uncle watches in shock. Narration explains there is testimony that Lizzie leaked the prince's weaknesses and worked with the temple.
Flashback, witnesses saw Lizzie tailing the prince the day he visited the ducal estate.
The knights assure her that if she is truly innocent, she will eventually be released.
Lizzie shouts through gritted teeth that she is being framed for crimes she didn't commit.
She turns to her sister, begging for help and insisting this is all a setup. Frantic, Lizzie claims an imposter planned this to take her place and tells Mariel she can't lose her sister again. Mariel remains silent with a stern expression.
Mariel stares down at her sister, who continues to plead for her to tell the knights to arrest the imposter instead.
Mariel coldly informs Lizzie that she is the one who is actually the imposter. The blonde man is shocked by the claim, while Mariel ponders the connection between Lizzie, the temple, and Eureka's old clothes.
A hand begins to shake as the man realizes the implications of what has been said. Mariel confirms that Eureka is almost certain the temple is the mastermind behind the scheme.
Mariel reflects on the true identity of the Eureka who has been by their side all this time.
Mariel shocks her uncle by revealing that the child is the actual Eureka. A memory surfaces of a young, happy Eureka peeking through a doorway. The little girl smiles brightly while calling out for her uncle.
Mariel reflects on her true niece as the Count and current Eureka stand together. A close-up of the blonde man reveals eyes filled with shock and tears.
Muriel reminds him that she had warned him about this truth repeatedly. The Count calls out to his sister as she questions his lack of focus.
He dismissively wipes away his tears while Mariel observes his emotional state.
Lizzie desperately insists everyone is being deceived before she is abruptly silenced.
The Count furiously commands Lizzie to stop lying and vows to cooperate with investigators.
Lizzie is left devastated as the Count declares she will pay for her crimes.
She is dragged away by knights while screaming about her supposed innocence. Mariel turns her attention toward her sister while standing in the hall. The tearful Count pulls the two women into a warm, emotional embrace. He expresses his profound gratitude for finally finding the real Eureka.
A sudden realization prompts the Count to shift his focus immediately. He resolves to reclaim Eureka from the Duke despite Muriel's defense of the man.
Mariel calls out for Eureka to return home soon as the Count objects.
The scene shifts to the towering white spires of the Grand Temple. Johann stands with his arms crossed, projecting an air of cold authority. The priest argues against a parade, but Johann questions his reasoning. The young priest explains he lacks the authority to approve such a massive event.
Johann dismissively asks why that situation is any concern of his.
He insists that the temple representative cannot refuse a war hero's request. The young priest is stunned into a moment of silent realization. Johann remains unmoved by concerns regarding the palace's turmoil over Prince Theodore. The priest mentions the need for royalty, causing Johann to pause thoughtfully. Johann confidently claims he will simply find a royal family member himself. He declares the matter settled as the priest reluctantly agrees.
Johann offers to send his own knights to guard the temple.
The Duke turns to leave before remembering one final important detail.
Johann suddenly announces a strict deadline of only 3 days. He flashes a bright smile while demanding everything be prepared in time.
A loud slam sounds as the priest screams in frantic protest.
The terrified priest cries while calling the Duke a literal demon. Eureka expresses surprise that the temple agreed to such a tight schedule. Johann lies that the priest was happy to help as Eureka feels relieved. Narration notes that several days have passed since Lizzie was taken. Eureka recalls her uncle arriving at the estate in a grand carriage. A steady hand is shown writing a formal letter in cursive. Eureka looks out the window, deciding it is not yet time to return.
She resolves to exploit the current situation while everyone is watching her.
A book describes the downfall of the fake noble lady Eureka Modeste.
Eureka plans to use the family's distance to search the temple's laboratory. Johann asks why she agreed to wait 3 days for the parade.
A tiny Eureka exclaims that she intends to make full use of it.
Johann is left puzzled by her cryptic and determined response. He realizes she is planning to use a resource named Ravina Sevs. A banner announces the start of Eureka's complex strategic plan.
The first step involves spreading news about the parade and the knights.
Narration explains that the anxious Ravina will attempt to infiltrate the temple within 3 days as a red-haired woman in a lab coat looks on.
The plan moves to its next phase of watching and waiting as the black-haired boy and brown-haired girl observe the red-haired woman entering the building.
The brown-haired girl aggressively shakes the red-haired woman while the black-haired boy watches with his hands together, illustrating the plan to take her apart.
Eureka enthusiastically discusses raiding the temple with Johann, noting that their enemies are currently without backing. Johann startles Eureka by softly saying her name while she is deep in thought. Johann warns that even a single mistake in their plan could result in a complete disaster. Eureka's pink eyes widen as she processes Johann's words and his surprisingly gentle tone.
She wonders how a man who was once a potential villain could speak to her with such sweetness.
Eureka reflects on the idea of them staying together on the same side forever. Eureka blushes deeply and calls Johan a villain for making such sudden, heart-fluttering comments.
The scene transitions to the palace tower standing tall against the night sky.
Clicking heels echo through the grand deserted hallway lined with lion-crested banners.
A close-up reveals the serious expression of the red-haired woman as she walks.
Ravina wonders if a calming potion is necessary for the meeting she is about to have.
Theodore sits on a rug in a disheveled state, drained after recklessly using his magic.
Theodore looks up with a faint smile as he realizes someone has finally arrived.
Ravina approaches Theodore, commenting on how quickly he arrived despite his weakened state.
Ravenna clenches her fist in frustration, recalling how Theodore ruined her plans by appearing at the ducal estate.
A flashback shows Johan and Theodore facing each other, with narration noting that allying with a mage was never the plan.
Theodore asks why Ravina remains silent about the situation.
Ravina counters by asking why he chose to act on his own without a word.
Theodore demands to know why she didn't reveal that the divine beast could freely return to its original form. Theodore explains his mistaken belief that once humanized, the form was permanent as an image of the squirrel appears.
Theodore lets out a soft, mocking laugh as he looks at Ravina. Ravina is silenced by the realization that Theodore was just as unaware of the truth as she was.
Theodore admits he only ended up in his current state because he was trying to reclaim his divine beast.
Ravina is overwhelmed with shock and anger that there are things she doesn't know about her own creation.
She realizes that Eureka's ability to transform will make it incredibly easy for her to infiltrate the temple laboratory.
A large tiger is shown lying trapped behind bars in a dark room beneath the laboratory. Despite her reluctance, Ravina decides that joining forces with Theodore is her only remaining option. Ravina looks closely at Theodore as she begins to propose a way out of their predicament. She tells him that if he still wants the divine beast, there is one way to achieve it.
Ravina explains that they must succeed in a highly complex experiment.
The goal is an experiment to turn back time and erase the current present, depicted by a girl and squirrel amidst falling clocks.
The visual emphasizes the plan to completely erase the present reality and start over.
Theodore asks for clarification on the time rewinding plan while Ravina warns of its difficulty. Ravina reveals her plan to return to the past with her memories and brainwash Eureka once more.
Theodore asks for details on how she intends to carry out the brainwashing.
Ravina explains that she will whisper commands to Eureka while she is unconscious in her beast state.
The core of the brainwashing is to command the creature to never humanize, shown over the squirrel's image. Ravina wears a sinister smile as she promises to hand Eureka over to Theodore if the experiment succeeds.
Eureka is shown curled up and sleeping soundly inside a dark, ornate birdcage.
The scene shifts to a bright town square where people are gossiping about a prominent couple. Eureka is thrilled to be on a date with Johan, while the public watches them with suspicion.
Onlookers whisper about their surprise that the couple's relationship has lasted this long.
Gossip continues about Eureka being fake and whether the hero could still love her.
Johan is pleased that their public outing has successfully made them the center of conversation. Narration reveals that, according to the news, Ravina and Theodore's engagement remains intact. Silhouettes of the two conspirators appear as the text states they will continue to work together in the future. A final thought suggests that Ravina might already be aware of Eureka's squirrel form.
Ravina anticipates her opponent will be wary of her infiltration plans.
She believes the lack of information will force her enemy to act. Eureka resolves to wait for the red-haired woman to take the bait while Johan calls out to her.
Johan catches Eureka's attention at a local market stall during their outing.
Johan suggests a cute animal ear headband that he thinks would look perfect on her.
Eureka gasps in surprise as the man carefully places the headband on her head. The girl stands frozen in surprise, her pink eyes wide and shimmering. A playful energy fills the air as the pair poses with various themed headbands.
Johan compliments Eureka's appearance as they both wear matching ear headbands. Johan smiles softly as Eureka admires how well the ears complement his features.
Eureka jokingly reminds Johan that a headband doesn't change his true nature as the vendor observes them.
Johan points toward a new attraction, suggesting they continue their exploration of the town. The couple passes a sign for cold treats as they stroll through the sunlit streets. In a tender moment, Johan reaches out to wipe a smudge from Eureka's face. They continue their fun by trying on an assortment of stylish hats at another stall. Eureka excitedly spots a dessert shop and gestures for Johan to follow her inside.
She is mesmerized by the vibrant selection of puddings and strawberry cakes.
The girl is overwhelmed with delight as she prepares to enjoy her favorite sweets. Eureka offers Johan a taste of her cake, raving about the incredible softness of the cream. Johan leans and takes a bite of the dessert offered by the brawl.
He confirms the cake is delicious while wiping a small trace of cream from his lip.
Eureka wonders about Johan's charm before asking him if he's enjoyed their wonderful day together.
The girl reflects on how peaceful and pleasant the afternoon has been.
Johan confesses that walking freely through the streets with her has been his lifelong dream.
He notes that their past was restricted to meetings within the confines of the castle.
Eureka is deeply touched by his words, looking at him with watery eyes.
Johan asks Eureka how she was able to track him down originally.
The girl pauses, her expression softening as she prepares to tell her story.
For the first time, Eureka recounts the details of her life before their paths crossed. She explains that a single, overwhelming thought filled her mind the moment she became conscious. Eureka recalls being a squirrel in a cage, driven by a voice whispering that she must humanize.
She details how her previous owner's weak magic made transformation impossible despite his boastful claims.
Eureka admits she sought out Johan's family specifically to find someone with enough power to help her.
She worries that her intentions might sound selfish while Johan processes her confession.
Johan listens to her confession with a calm and unreadable expression.
A rhythmic thump, thump sounds as Eureka's heart pounds in the quiet of the shop. Their intimate moment is interrupted by a blue-haired knight seeking his master's attention.
The knight informs Johan that their guards at the temple have sent an urgent message.
He whispers that an unknown individual has attempted to sneak onto the temple grounds. Eureka realizes Ravina has finally acted, falling perfectly into the trap they set.
Johan orders his men to remain vigilant and not let their guard down for a moment.
Johan concludes that their goal for the day is complete and suggests they head home.
The three of them walk through the bustling town as the evening light fades.
Eureka feels a sense of accomplishment, happy with both her date and the success of her scheme.
She lets out a satisfied sigh, though her face remains flushed from the excitement. The girl's intuition flares as she hears a sudden, sharp noise nearby.
A blinding flash erupts as Eureka screams Johan's name in sudden terror. Johan reacts with a desperate shout as danger suddenly strikes apart.
3 daggers slam into the ground, pinning Eureka's skirt as he cries out her aim. Horror fills Johan's face as he continues to scream for the girl in the midst of the attack. Johan frantically checks if Eureka is injured following the sudden dagger's attack.
Bystanders panic as the blue-haired knight asks if Eureka is hurt, while she observes the lethal position of the daggers.
Eureka realizes her survival was only possible because of her sharp animal instincts as a divine beast.
The men shout for the culprit as Eureka wonders about the unknown attacker's identity.
A reflection in a shattered mirror highlights Eureka's grave concern about being targeted.
Eureka considers if Ravina is behind the reckless broad daylight assault but remains doubtful of its lack of subtlety.
Eureka's pink eyes widen as she senses that something about the situation is deeply suspicious.
Eureka spots a cloaked figure on a nearby roof and alerts Johan to the immediate danger.
A hand grips a cluster of explosives, prompting Eureka's terrified warning to Johan.
Johan shields Eureka as a massive surge of blue magic erupts against the threat.
The assailant curses as Johan's power detonates against the rooftop hiding spot with a loud boom.
A pillar of light and flying debris marks the site of the magical confrontation. Johan is livid as he glares toward the roof following the cowardly attack.
Johan commands the blue-haired knight to capture the fleeing assailant alive.
Johan scoops Eureka into his arms and declares they must return home immediately.
Eureka softly agrees to leave while Johan remains focused and fiery.
A heavy, ominous silence hangs over Johan as he protects the girl.
The ornate carriage rumbles through a sun-dappled forest with a steady rattle. Inside the carriage, a tense and somber atmosphere settles between the pair. Eureka's hands tremble visibly against the fabric of her elegant dress.
Johan reaches out to gently steady Eureka's shaking hands with his own.
Johan softly speaks her name to get her attention during the ride. Johan tells Eureka to remain indoors for her safety until the culprit is identified. Johan promises to personally provide everything she might need during her seclusion.
The man's hand provides a comforting, firm presence over Eureka's.
Eureka observes Johan's pale face and realizes his magic usage has destabilized his mana.
The two share a quiet moment of mutual concern within the moving carriage.
Eureka searches for a way to stabilize him without access to her usual medicine.
An ancient text reveals that close contact in human form can calm a divine beast's partner.
Johan asks Eureka why she is looking at him with such intensity.
Eureka explains her concern regarding his currently unstable mana levels.
Eureka unexpectedly offers to kiss Johan as a way to help settle his mana.
Johan is stunned as Eureka flusteredly explains the lack of calming potions.
Eureka mentally justifies her bold offer by acknowledging their status as lovers.
Johan remains speechless as he processes the girl's surprising suggestion.
Johan warns Eureka never to speak so lightly of such things to any other man.
The carriage continues its steady journey through the peaceful countryside.
Johan stays quiet as Eureka quickly offers to withdraw her proposal.
A deep blush creeps onto Johan's ear as he admits he is losing his composure. A gentle hand reaches out to cradle Eureka's cheek in a tender gesture.
Johan looks into Eureka's eyes and confesses that he doesn't dislike her idea.
A rhythmic thump sounds as Eureka's heart pounds in anticipation.
Johan leans in close toward Eureka's face as the air becomes heavy with tension.
Johan's violet eyes are filled with a mix of longing and hesitation.
Johan calls her name while Eureka suddenly pulls away with a soft apology.
A frantic thump sounds as her face turns bright red with racing thoughts.
The girl looks down in embarrassment, overwhelmed by the sudden romantic energy.
Eureka flusteredly suggests she can calm him in her squirrel form later instead.
Johan admits in a low voice that he feels the same way as her.
Johan holds Eureka's hand firmly as they share a quiet, romantic moment.
Johann looks toward the girl and asks if he appears mortis.
Eureka realizes Johann's heart is pounding incredibly hard.
Johann and Eureka share an intimate moment together.
Johann admits that as long as he's with her, he will always want it.
The black-haired man looks down with longing.
Johann tells Eureka to do as she wishes regarding his proposal.
Eureka is overcome with blushing and wide-eyed surprise.
Johann and Eureka share a deep and romantic kiss.
3 days later, the scene shifts to the temple restoration ceremony.
Priests in white robes welcome the Duke's arrival at the temple entrance.
A priest informs the Duke they have finished the preparations for him.
Johann appears in his formal and highly decorated military uniform.
Johann remarks that the setup is modest but looks decent enough.
The man looks on while stating he is not really satisfied.
Theodore greets Johann and notes it has been a while since they met.
Theodore suggests they shouldn't be formal since they will soon be family.
Theodore claims Johann's attitude toward love has left a deep impression on him. Johann asks Theodore what he means by his comment about love.
Theodore mentions Johann's broken engagement and his passionate love for Theodore's sister-in-law.
Theodore admires Johann's forward spirit in pursuing love without relying on paper pacts.
Flashback to the carriage where Eureka asks Johann if they should share a piss.
The couple shares a romantic kiss inside the moving carriage.
Johann is left completely flustered and blushing after the kiss concludes.
Theodore and Johann greet a young, green-haired priest at the temple.
The young priest welcomes them despite the temple currently being in disarray.
The group walks through the grand and sunlit corridors of the Kumbel. The priest explains they will start with a prayer at the altar followed by a banquet. Johann impatiently orders the priest to skip the long explanations and lead the way.
Theodore apologizes for Johann's straightforward and blunt personality to the startled priest.
Johann walks alone through a quiet and ornate temple corridor.
Johann arrives at a specific location and determines it must be the place. Johann questions how the tracking of the unknown target failed.
Flashback reveals the target's movements were much faster than expected.
A secret passage is described as the location where the target vanished swiftly.
Johann looks down a corridor where he believes the hidden passage exists.
Johann focuses intense blue mana into the palm of his hand. The young priest is surprised as a crackle of mana appears nearby. A sudden, deafening crash sounds as the temple ceiling collapses with a loud boom.
Theodore stands calmly while the young priest panics at the sudden destruction.
Large chunks of stone and debris fill the corridor where Johann stood.
Frantic thoughts question why the ceiling collapsed so suddenly when it was intact before.
Theodore explains that the Duke's mana went out of control and caused an accident. Theodore makes a joke about the literal collapse of the temple following the high priest's removal.
Theodore checks if Johann is hurt while Johann stays behind to compose his manner.
Theodore leads the group to the banquet while noting the Duke as Heim. Johann stands alone in the dark and dusty ruins of the corridor.
Johann tells Eureka she can come out as the coast is finally clear.
Eureka in squirrel form expresses her excitement at finally entering the temple.
Eureka notes that learning about the secret passage's existence is a significant gain.
Eureka hopes to find decisive clues about the divine beast and her father's whereabouts.
The small squirrel looks up with an expectant expression.
Johann asks if they should finally begin their journey.
The man is suddenly struck by a flustered memory.
Eureka blushes as she recalls their kiss and feels self-conscious.
Johann reminds himself to focus on the important investigation ahead. The pair walks cautiously through the dimly lit temple corridor.
Eureka tells Johann to wait as she senses something unusual.
The squirrel leaps toward the stone wall with sudden urgency. She quickly begins climbing up the rough stone surface.
Eureka discovers a specific section of the wall that stands out.
Johann identifies the small stone slab as a hidden button.
The man's hand reaches out to press the secret mechanism.
A hidden stone doorway slowly slides open with a rattle.
They discover a dark set of stairs leading to a basement.
Johann confirms that they have found the place they sought.
He begins descending the stone stairs into the dark depths. Johann observes the ransacked room and notes evidence was destroyed.
Eureka reacts with shock to a sudden noise from the shadows.
Johann points toward a dark corner and tells Eureka to look.
Theodore and Ravina stand before a large portrait in the palace.
Ravina admits she has been thinking about her father recently.
Theodore shares her hope that her father might still be alive.
Theodore notes that her older brother shared many traits with Eureka.
Ravina laughs and agrees that they share the same sharp intellect.
Theodore mentions her brother possessed incredible beast-like instincts for danger.
A massive tiger's paw rests on the ground with visible scars. Johann recalls the detail that her father's nickname was the Tiger.
A gloved hand sets a flask of green liquid on a table.
The red-haired woman mentions the difficulty of bringing the dip there. She dismisses her assistant after receiving the essential material she needed.
A document details the downfall of a barony and descent into madness. The red-haired woman's hand clenches the paper in a fit of rage.
She laments her family's disappearance and blames the Modeste family for it.
She vows to destroy them completely by using Oscar Modeste himself.
Johann stands silently before a large tiger in the hidden room. The man is stunned to find a live tiger in the basement. Eureka chirps in alarm as she spots the massive predator nearby.
The squirrel hides behind Johann's neck, visibly trembling with fear.
Johann asks if she is frightened because the creature is a predator.
Johann offers his hand to the squirrel to provide her comfort.
Johann pets her head and reassures her that she is safe.
The tiger suddenly lets out a fierce and deafening roar.
Johan flinches in surprise at the animal's sudden outburst of rage. He wonders why the beast suddenly became so incredibly angry.
Eureka considers if the animal's hostility comes from being experimented on.
Johan asks Eureka if she thinks the tiger is a divine beast.
The squirrel looks at him with a bewildered and questioning expression.
Johan recounts a rumor that the Duke transformed into a tiger. Eureka reacts with absolute shock to the man's startling revelation.
She stares ahead as she begins to process the terrifying possibility.
Paintings of animals line the hallway walls while Eureka asks if they were always there.
Eureka stands before a large tiger portrait while a voice explains the Modeste family's legend of being descended from beastmen.
Theodore and Ravina discuss on a balcony how the Duke's mana might be the key to his presence in the temple.
A close-up reveals the squirrel's tiny face as she focuses on the startling revelation.
Looking at the caged beast, Eureka begins to wonder about the animal's true identity.
The tiger's massive, furred paws are shown standing firmly on the stone floor.
A low grrr vibrates through the stone room as the tiger's clawed paw tenses. The squirrel's wide, dark eyes reflect her sudden confusion and concern. Deep scars on the tiger's leg reveal a history of horrific experiments conducted by a scientist and a priest. Eureka is overcome with rage at the humans who could commit such vile acts against her family. Johan reaches out toward the squirrel with a gentle, reassuring hand.
The tiny squirrel approaches the tiger's scarred leg with a sense of mourning.
Eureka's heart aches as she calls out to the tiger, realizing he is her father. The squirrel reaches out to touch the tiger's massive, scarred paw.
A soft "Q" sounds as the squirrel tries to communicate with the beast.
Johan looks down at Eureka with a gaze full of empathy and support.
Eureka gently nuzzles her father's scarred leg while questioning the depth of his sufferings.
She laments the lonely pain he must have endured while being held in the dark.
Eureka firmly vows to return her father to the Modeste home as soon as possible.
A soft "Q" sounds as the squirrel gazes up at the massive tiger and calls out to him with renewed hope.
Eureka asks her father if he would like to leave this dark place with her.
Johan bows slightly and formalizes his respect by greeting the tiger as the Duke.
A warm smile crosses Johan's face as he tells his future father-in-law he is glad he is safe.
With a crackle of mana, Johan shatters the cage bars and invites the Duke to step out comfortably.
An emotional "Q" sounds as Eureka reaches her paws up for a hug.
The massive tiger leans down to investigate the tiny squirrel with a curious sniff.
A soft "King" sounds as Eureka sits atop the tiger's head and chirps a question about their departure.
A low grrr sounds as the squirrel asks her father if she can ride on his head as they leave.
A bright, happy blush appears on the squirrel's face as she enjoys her new seat.
A happy "Q" sounds as Johan looks on with a tender smile and agrees to Eureka's plan.
Johan and the tiger walk side by side toward the exit while Eureka perches on her father's head.
A determined Q hung sounds as Eureka expresses her excitement about finally heading back to the Modeste estate. A carriage pulled by 4 horses arrives at the entrance of a grand white mansion.
A blonde woman with pink eyes enthusiastically welcomes Eureka back home.
A joyful Q sounds as the squirrel leaps into the air with joy to greet the blonde woman.
The blonde woman cradles the squirrel in her hands, delighted by her return. She tells Eureka to turn back into a human while noting the tiger's presence. The woman is puzzled when the tiger stops and seems to want to wait.
Eureka warns the blonde woman not to be shocked as she asks about Duke Hyrod.
The blonde woman turns around with a questioning look at the looming shadow behind her.
A low grrr sounds as the massive tiger steps forward into the light, revealing its presence to the woman.
A look of sheer disbelief washes over the blonde woman as she stares at the beast. The grand palace grounds are shown in the bright morning light. The sun begins to set over the sprawling rooftops of the royal estate.
Inside the palace, the blonde woman questions if the tiger could truly be their missing father. Ravina and the blonde woman sit together while Eureka's squirrel form confirms the truth.
The blonde woman is horrified to learn about the condition their father is in.
Ravina explains that the temple purposefully altered him to maximize his beastly power.
The tiger's piercing blue eyes stare forward with a mix of intensity and sorrow. Ravina resolves that they must find a way from now on to return their father to his human form.
Muriel's eyes widen in disbelief as a sharp pain pulses through her.
Marielle vows to never forgive those who abducted her sister and father, determined to find a way to save them no matter the cost.
Marielle tells Eureka that she has been conducting her own investigation, prompting Eureka to ask what she was looking into.
Marielle explains that during Eureka's absence, she utilized all her connections to track down individuals privy to the Modeste family's secrets.
Marielle mentions seeking advice from elderly retainers, causing Eureka to inquire about the information they shared. Marielle recounts visiting the elderly Baron Olteba after he failed to reply, noting that the man, who was over 90, suffered from a failing memory during their meeting. Marielle reveals that the Baron said something strange that deeply bothered her, sparking Eureka's curiosity. A single name echoes in Eureka's mind as she questions the significance of Arthea.
Marielle admits she has never heard of the name, and Eureka confirms that she is also unfamiliar with it.
Marielle notes that even within the mansion's historical records, there is no mention of a family by the name of Arthea. A large tiger rests silently on the floor, offering no response to the unfolding mystery.
Eureka initially dismissed the Baron's mention of Arthea as senility, but she now suspects a deliberate erasure of records, suggesting a hidden connection to their family.
Eureka expresses a desire to meet the Baron herself to gather more information, but Mariel warns her that such a visit would be problematic.
A text notification explains that the Baron's poor health has left him under the strict care of his son.
In a flashback, Mariel is startled when the Baron's son suddenly interjects during her visit to the old man's bedside.
When Mariel tries to introduce herself as a member of the Modeste family, the son abruptly cuts her off and prevents any further conversation.
The Baron's son orders Mariel to leave immediately, shouting that their family no longer has any ties to the Modestes.
A quick tap sounds as the son watches Mariel depart through a crack in the door, his eyes suggesting he knows more than he is letting on.
Eureka realizes the son is hiding something, but doubts that visiting him directly would yield immediate answers. Mariel suggests enlisting the help of Lean from the Hosri Guild, who is known for her skill in unearthing hidden information.
The scene shifts to the exterior of Baron Ultibas's residence, standing silent under the night sky.
Inside the mansion, the son confronts his father, asking why he mentioned Arthea to their visitor.
The son expresses his frustration that his father spoke of the secret name specifically in front of Mariel Modeste.
The son worries about the consequences if the wrong people discover that the name has been spoken.
The Baron's memory slips as he asks who Mariel is, jokingly asking if she is his son's wife, while the son reminds him he has never been married.
The son is flustered by his father's extreme senility as the old man continues to lose his grip on reality.
The son warns that they could be eliminated if today's events are discovered, as the Baron notes that no one who mentioned Arthea has ever survived.
When the son suggests the Baron might not fear death due to his age, the old man indignantly shouts that he has no intention of dying.
The son falls silent as he processes his father's outburst. The son laments that his father cannot avoid the impending danger simply by wishing it away. Looking out at the night, the son fears for their lives and wonders if they are even capable of escaping in their current state. The son contemplates the need for a miracle similar to one that occurred in the past.
The Baron asks if there is anyone his son can reach out to for assistance.
The son looks confused and asks who his father could possibly mean.
The Baron suggests relying on the polite girl who recently visited, though the son vehemently rejects the idea of involving a Modesta.
The Baron plugs his ears as his son continues to yell, noting that the younger man's lungs are impressively healthy for his age. The son declares that he would rather die than get involved with the Modeste family again, vowing to never cross paths with them.
A steady rhythm of footsteps echoes through a dimly lit palace corridor. A man with dark hair stands by a window watching the rain pour down outside.
The man reflects on how he briefly forgot his troubles while Eureka was present at the estate.
To the man, the Hyrate estate represents something much deeper and darker than a simple home.
He recalls the estate as a dark, lonely place devoid of warmth, a location he has come to utterly despise.
The man walks away from the light and deeper into the shadows of the mansion.
A sharp creak sounds as a heavy door is slowly pushed open.
A soft scuffing sounds as the man finds a woman with long black hair sitting alone inside a dark jail cell.
A quick tap sounds as the woman senses a presence and begins to look up from the shadows. The woman's eyes snap open with intense emotion as she realizes she has a visitor after a long time.
The man stands silently before the iron bars, looking down at the captive woman. The man greets the woman with a cold smile, calling her mother while she stares back at him with a horrified expression. The confrontation continues in silence as the man remains standing before his mother's cell.
The dark-haired man addresses the woman as his mother with a chilling, mocking smile. From the shadows of the cell, the woman gazes back at him with an expression of pure horror.
She erupts into a sudden fit of rage, hurling insults at the man for his perceived worthlessness.
Gripping the cold iron bars of her cage, she continues to scream her fury at him. She questions how a son could treat his mother so cruelly while the man looks on with a silent, unfazed smirk.